Chuu Yuanjin poured him a cup of tea. He gently explained, I once studied at Yunlu Academy. Later, I attended the National Academy. When I was young, I was full of ambition. With a mind brimming with talent, I wanted to shake the royal family. Upon realizing that Yunlu Academy graduates were not highly valued, I left the academy to continue my studies at the National Academy. National Academy? Suchan asked. So why did you resign from your official position later? Chuu Yuanjin sighed. Because I was completely useless. A scholar's literary skills couldn't save Defeng. So I simply resigned. I became a wandering swordsman dressed in white. Suchan clapped the table and exclaimed, how truly carefree. No wonder just now, when Chuu Yuanjin saw Emperor Yuanjing, he merely greeted him lightly, without saying anything further. It seems that what truly disappointed Chuu Yuanjin back then was this Tao-obsessed sovereign. As they drank tea and chatted, it was always Chuu Yuanjin speaking. He told Suchan about his years of traveling and experiences. The northern Manchu people number no more than 1 million, while our Defeng has tens of millions in just one province. Yet for centuries, the Manchu have been a persistent threat to our Defeng. Do you know why? Because the northern Manchu carry the bloodline of ancient gods and demons. Suchan was puzzled. Ancient gods and demons? It's said that at the beginning of the world, beings capable of moving mountains and filling seas, plucking stars and seizing moons, appeared. Later, they mysteriously went extinct. The northern Manchu are said to be their descendants. This isn't baseless speculation. They are born with robust bodies and extraordinary strength. Occasionally, their tribes produce reversions, individuals with scaled skin, a single horn on their forehead, or a massive serpent's tail. By the age of 3, they stand nearly 7 feet tall. These signs all support this claim. Defeng's historians have inferred from these traits that, in a primordial era, there must have been a time when gods and demons thrived. In that era, humans were as insignificant as ants, living under the protection of gods and demons. That's how the northern Manchu came to be. We are the later rising human race. Suchan quietly mulled over these ideas. Do gods and demons not have a biological barrier from humans? He asked. I suspect it's a hybrid of humans and demons, rather than gods and demons. After all, the northern Manchu and northern demon clans are allied. Regarding this question, Chuu Yuanjin pondered for a long time. Then he said, about whether gods and demons exist. I've heard a theory. In the southern lands, the ancient god sleeping in Jiwen is a surviving god or demon from ancient times. It is also the only one. Suchan suddenly felt a spark of inspiration. He made a connection. An ancient god is a primordial god or demon, a question that could be confirmed by number 5. He voiced his inquiry. So back then, during the battle at Shanhaiguan, the northern and southern Manchu were allied? Chuu Yuanjin exclaimed. That's an interesting line of thought. We only know that the northern and southern Manchu maintained relatively friendly relations, but were separated by a great divide. Because they shared this pancake-like terrain, they were natural allies. But it might also be their mixed bloodline that kept them relatively friendly. If historians heard this angle, they'd be thrilled. Beyond the northern Manchu's land of desolation, further north lies the polar region. There, the cold can freeze one from the inside out, yet there are still traces of life. I once encountered a peculiar species, half human, half ape. They possessed intelligence, but didn't speak human language. They could communicate through gestures. In their tribes, females were more numerous. One male often had multiple females to ensure reproduction. Apart from mating, the males did nothing else. Hunting was left to the females. Hearing this, Suchan couldn't help but feel envious. Chuu Yuanjin continued, but due to overexertion, the males rarely lived past 20 years, and their offspring remained predominantly female. Suchan suddenly felt a bit disheartened. That's why boys need to maintain their integrity, protect themselves well. They can't let women cling to them. Chuu Yuanjin added, every 60 years, their species faces an extinction crisis. Because all the males die out, there's no one left to impregnate the females. It just so happened that year I went to the northern polar region. Suchan was shocked. Then you successfully impregnated the females? Chuu Yuanjin spat out his tea, spraying it onto Suchan's face. Chuu Yuanjin handed over a handkerchief, and, still in shock, asked, why would you even think that? Suchan waved his hand, refusing to answer. Please continue, he said. Chuu Yuanjin didn't press further. That year just happened to be the year their species males went extinct. To continue their lineage, some of the females would transform into males. They would bravely shoulder the burden of reproduction. The queen of the species would be the first to transform. This was her duty. When the queen became the king, she expanded her harem, taking all her daughters into her harem. Suchan's face instantly turned dark. His mind was full of questions he didn't know how to express. He sighed at the wonder of creation, completely speechless. Chuu Yuanjin laughed. Don't just listen to me. Everyone in the capital knows your name, Su. Your legendary deeds are surely the talk of the tea houses and taverns. Tell me about those cases. Suchan straightened up. It's a long story. Let's start with the silver tax case. At the time, my second uncle was implicated in a tax silver theft case. He knew his life was in danger. When I learned of this, I told my second uncle, don't worry. This case is full of flaws. To me, it's just a small trick. I could solve it in 1 instance time. But I have to admit, I was quite young and reckless back then. After a pause, Chuu Yuing, intrigued by Suchan's tales, asked, "What do you mean by that?" Suchan replied casually at that time, "It actually took me 2 instance worth of time to solve the silver tax case." Chuu Yuing was at a loss for words, tempted to spit tea at him once again. Suchan then began recounting the silver tax case, continuing all the way to the Lady Fu case. Chuu Yuing, holding a teacup, didn't take a single sip, listening intently the entire time. When puzzled, he furrowed his brow in confusion. Upon hearing Suchan's explanation of the case's inner workings, he suddenly understood. Smiling as his expression cleared, Chuu Yuing's mind wandered, thinking of Suchan's cousin, number 3. Previously, he had speculated that number 3 was connected to the Yaseng Hall's family ties. He believed Taoist Jinlian had taken an interest in number 3's uniqueness, even giving him a fragment of the imperial scroll. Later, after learning about number 3's cousin, Suchan, he concluded that this young man was equally brilliant. Taoist Jinlian, while ostensibly giving the imperial scroll fragment to the cousin, seemed to have his sights on both brothers. Now, witnessing Suchan's abilities and talents, he felt even more convinced of this theory. He smiled knowingly. "So Taoist Jinlian is truly shrewd," he murmured. At that moment, Chuu Yuing suddenly grew restless, realizing that the fragment holder was transmitting something. It seemed Suchan was also receiving it. Almost reflexively, both men spoke simultaneously. "I'm going to the restroom." As soon as the words left their mouths, they fell silent, looking at each other awkwardly. Suchan, thick-skinned as ever, calmly said, "You go first, Brother Chuu." Chuu Yuing raised an eyebrow, stood, and left. After his footsteps faded, Suchan took out his jade slip and checked the message. It was from Lena. Her message read, "My silver was stolen. What should I do?" Suchan's mouth twitched. Well, this was entirely predictable, he thought to himself. At that moment, Chuu Yuing replied, "What happened? How were you tricked out of your silver?" He added, "Lena, where are you now? How far are you from the capital? How much silver was stolen? If you have nowhere to eat, see if there's a nearby temple. Try begging for alms there." Suchan nearly burst out laughing. Since ancient times, it's always been monks who beg for alms. If Lena begged at a temple, how would the monks feel? Li Miaozhen said, "Losing silver is no big deal. What matters is that no harm comes to you. It's really worrying. A young girl traveling all the way to Defeng alone. Didn't anyone think to send an elder to accompany you?" At that moment, number 1, who had been silent, could no longer sit still. He wrote, "Remember not to do anything that violates Defeng's laws." Suchan saw everyone chatting animatedly, and suddenly felt a twinge of loss. Everyone's so worried about number 5. What about me? In their eyes, I might as well be dead. Lena, touched by the concern from the Heaven and Earth Society members, began to share how she, "Thank you all for your concern. I met an old Taoist priest in Yangzhou this morning. He told me I had an extraordinary bone structure, a 1 in a million genius. I thought he must be a true master. Otherwise, how could he recognize my uniqueness among the masses?" Suchan's mouth twitched. "Isn't that just a scammer's standard opening line? Are you really that naive, or just full of yourself?" Li Miaozhen, exasperated, said, "So you let yourself get fooled just like that?" She was genuinely furious. Encountering something so unjust, yet unable to rush over and help, it was an infuriating feeling of powerlessness. She was so mad she almost jumped up. Lena quickly wrote back in her defense, "I'm not that dumb." Suchan rolled his eyes. "Do you hear yourself? If you're not dumb, who is?" Lena continued to defend herself, saying this Taoist priest really had skills. He not only identified me as a genius, but he also knew I was from the southern borderlands. When I left the southern borderlands, I switched to Defeng's attire, completely disguising myself as a woman from Defeng. Chuu Yuing sarcastically asked, "What about your accent? Did it change?" Lena, puzzled, responded, "What accent?" Chuu Yuing was speechless. The group chat fell into a brief silence. Lena continued, "The old Taoist said that when traveling, funds are the most important thing. He asked me where I was headed. I told him I was going to the capital. The Taoist then asked how much silver I had, and I said 60 taels. He said the journey to the capital was long, and 60 taels wouldn't be enough, but he had a treasure basin that could multiply silver. If you put a single coin in, the next day it would be filled with copper coins. If you put in 1 tael, the next day it would be filled with silver." Chuu Yuing asked, "And you believed him?" Lena said, "At first, I didn't, but the Taoist demonstrated. He had me place a small silver piece in it, then covered the basin with a cloth. An hour later, there were indeed several more pieces of silver. The Taoist said that his treasure could only be given to those destined for it. He sold it to me for 60 taels of silver. I put my last 2 coins into the basin, but after more than 2 hours, nothing has changed." Suchan was exasperated. With that level of intelligence, even my little nephew wouldn't have fallen for it. Suchan couldn't help but laugh. Trying to swindle silver from this wild girl, the only way to do it is to scam her. Stealing or robbing won't work. You have to trick her. At this point, Li Miaojin interjected. Number 5. Treasure items are priceless. They're rare and invaluable. Why would someone give one to you for nothing? Learn from this. Lena sighed. But Taoist Jinlian gave me a fragment of the Imperial Scroll, and he said it was a treasure for those with destiny. Li Miaojin shouted angrily. It's all that Taoist's fault. Taoist Jinlian was left speechless. So now it's all my fault, huh? He muttered. On the other side, Suchan was laughing so hard he squealed. Suddenly, a soft, pleasant voice spoke behind him. Taoist Jinlian founded the Heaven and Earth Society to help one another, not to mock each other. Suchan's laughter caught in his throat. Feeling a bit awkward, he turned to see that it was National Preceptor Luo Yuung speaking. Number 5 is a member of the ancient southern tribes, she said. Suchan, filled with countless questions, thought, how long have you been watching me? He replied honestly, I think she's from the Ligu tribe. Luo Yuung nodded slowly. Indeed, the Ligu tribe's combat prowess is unparalleled, she said. Luo Yuung continued. Pale in comparison to the masters of the Ligu tribe. Suchan glanced at her cherry-like lips and asked, stronger than martial artists? Luo Yuung replied. In terms of chi manipulation alone, martial artists are far inferior to the Ligu masters. The 7 ancient tribes each have their own specialties, but none are formidable on their own. However, when the 7 tribes unite, even the Buddhist sects must tread cautiously. Suchan raised an eyebrow, suddenly intrigued. So even the beauties of the national preceptor's caliber are flexible today? Luo Yuung continued. I overheard Chuu Yuanjun mentioning ancient gods and demons. The valley god is indeed the only remaining deity and demon. Suchan was shocked. Are there really still gods and demons? He asked. Luo Yuung nodded. Beyond the demon and human clans, all the strange beasts of the 9 provinces are descendants of gods and demons. Have you been to Yunzhou? That legendary beast in White Emperor City is a descendant of gods and demons. The southern border's dragons and the spirit creature in the Imperial City, they are all descendants of gods and demons. Suchan probed. How did the gods and demons go extinct? It couldn't have been a volcanic eruption or meteor strike, right? Luo Yuung didn't answer. She remained silent, gazing thoughtfully into the distance. Suchan secretly observed Luo Yuung. Despite her serene demeanor, he couldn't help but think of his silver-haired childhood friend. Memories of his first crush came flooding back. The image of his cousin's elder sister and other figures flashed through his mind. But most vividly, he thought of her true appearance. Kind, gentle Xiao-yi. Realizing that sneaking glances was futile, he stopped hiding. Suchan decided to openly admire her stunning beauty without reservation. Just then, Taoist Jinlian sent a message. I've muted number 5. Let's discuss how to handle this matter. My suggestion. We don't need to help number 5 anymore. Let him navigate the world on his own. I believe he'll learn a lot. On the journey from the southern borderlands to the capital, Suchan silently nodded. Jinlian's idea is well-meaning, he thought. Let number 5 experience the harshness of society. He'll grow up quickly. Li Miaojin disagreed with Taoist Jinlian's approach. She responded, the martial world is complicated and dangerous, while Wu Hao is strong. He's too naive. Wisdom always trumps strength. The scholar champion offered his perspective. Wu Hao may be naive and inexperienced, but he's no fool. He knows how to avoid danger and understands what's worth protecting. I think Jinlian's suggestion makes sense, Hung Yuan remarked. I think we need to focus on solving his immediate problem, where he'll stay tonight. This seemed to end the conversation abruptly. The chat group fell silent for a while. What could they do? They were just online acquaintances, scattered across the world. There was no convenient payment app to send money across distances. In this world, without a universal payment system, Li Miaojin suggested, why not have number 5 perform for money? Breaking stones on his chest is quite popular among commoners. With that act, he could earn enough for the journey to the capital. Hung Yuan proposed. He could seek shelter at a temple, though there aren't many temples in Defeng. It won't be easy, he admitted. Chuu Yuanjin remarked. In times of need, a little freeloading isn't the worst thing. Taoist Jinlian said. Number 5. If you insist on him doing that, it'd have to be robbery. At that, he privately messaged Suchan. Number 3. What's your suggestion? Suchan thought to himself. Though the old silver fox says to let number 5 face the harshness of society, he still cares a lot about the bearer of the imperial scripture fragment. Without hesitation, Suchan replied. Is number 5 attractive? Without thinking, Taoist Jinlian answered. Quite good looking. That makes it easy then, Suchan wrote. My suggestion is, become a heartbreaker. Then he sent another message to number 5. Repeat this line. Bunnies are so cute. Why would anyone eat them? That'll work wonders on young warriors. Master this move, and food and shelter on the road will be secured. But after all that, Suchan didn't get any response from Jinlian. Shortly after, Chuu Yuanjin returned, smiling. Your turn, he said. Suchan suddenly remembered the bathroom excuse. I almost forgot, he muttered, leaving the room with a calm expression. He planned to walk around outside and return shortly, but just then, he saw a young Taoist priest, leading a middle-aged, armored general, walking quickly toward him. The priest stopped outside the room and said loudly, "The commander of the Huai Palace Guards requests an audience." Hearing this, Suchan immediately stopped. The Huai Palace? The Northern King's Palace? He thought. Inside the room, Luo Yuung's sweet, melodious voice replied, "What's the matter?" The middle-aged general said urgently, "National Preceptor, the princess is missing. I've searched the entire imperial city, but she's nowhere to be found. She has a close relationship with you, so I came to ask if you know her whereabouts." Suchan's ears perked up. The Northern King's princess? The most beautiful woman in Defeng? He thought. Luo Yuung's voice responded from inside the room, "The princess is not here, Commander. Please continue your search elsewhere." The middle-aged commander, still worried, departed quickly. Suchan watched the commander's figure disappear, his curiosity growing stronger. The princess had disappeared. Back at the precinct, Suchan discovered that the two groups of martial artists had already paid their silver notes for release. Now, with 600 taels of silver notes in his possession, he felt immensely satisfied. Seeing travelers dressed as martial artists on the street, he imagined them as walking fat sheep. Unfortunately, for the rest of the day, he didn't encounter a single brawl. After work, he returned home. During dinner, his second uncle casually mentioned the day's amusing event. The Northern King's princess ran away today. 5 commanders from the capital mobilized, along with dozens of white-robed enforcers, but after searching all afternoon, they couldn't find her. Suchan asked, "What happened after that?" His second uncle sighed. "In the end, she returned on her own." So, was it really a runaway? The palace guards were convinced she'd been kidnapped. "See, women can be so capricious," he added. Thousands of people scoured the city, all for one princess. What a joke. Even his aunt mocked them. Thousands of imperial guards couldn't find one woman? The court would be better off raising thousands of dogs. At that moment, Erlang spoke up. Though the Huai king is a prince, it's strange that a missing princess would alert the 5 commanders of the capital. Suchan's second uncle agreed. "We found it odd too. When we asked the officer in charge, he didn't know either. He just said it was the emperor's order." Suchan had a theory. Emperor Yuanjing must care deeply for his sister-in-law. Could it be old feelings? But no. The princess was originally one of Emperor Yuanjing's consorts. She was only married off to the Northern King later, becoming the princess of the Huai Palace. Perhaps there's more to the story, he thought, but it's not worth worrying about. Turning to Erlang, he said, "Tomorrow is the final exam." Erlang nodded confidently. Suchan grinned. "Do your best. When it comes to poetry and verse, the elder brother can proudly say, through 5,000 years of Chinese civilization, no one can match me." At dawn the next day, Erlang, accompanied by his father and elder brother, carried a lantern and arrived at the examination hall. Once again, he saw the bald-headed man and the Green Mountain swordsman. This time, Erlang remained calm, simply treating them as fools. Since he couldn't avoid them, he decided to respond with a faint, cold smile. Chuu Yuanjin noticed and was displeased. Chen Shang commented, "This number 3 smile is truly arrogant." Huan didn't think much of it. Instinctively, he explained to number 3 that this would be the last round. Perhaps he felt it was already a sure win. Chuu Yuanjin snorted lightly. "I almost thought it was a provocation." Huan replied flatly, "Let's go." Now it was just a matter of waiting for the results. After that would be the match against Li Miaojin. Chuu Yuanjin nodded slightly. Walking alongside Huan, he suddenly asked, "Master, what level of combat strength do you possess now?" Huan thought for a moment, and shook his head, replying, "This humble monk rarely fights." Chuu Yuanjin chuckled. "We're all a bit like number 6, not easily categorized by normal ranks. From the perspective of martial artists, I'm merely a 7th grade martial adept, but my true combat ability far surpasses that." Master Huan is an 8th grade warrior monk, yet his true strength is equally unfathomable. The surrounding exam rooms were small, windowless huts, known as exam sheds. Once the examinees entered, the supervising proctors would lock the doors. Only a small window remained open for delivering test papers. All day long, examinees ate, drank, and relieved themselves. Inside those small huts, when they first entered, the familiar students joked and laughed, completely at ease. Since the imperial exams traditionally valued classical texts and pure scholarship, and with the weakening of the national examination system, this was expected to be the final round. For most students, it was merely a formality. But while others can afford to relax, Erlang knows he must remain vigilant. After all, he is a student of Yunlu Academy. According to the imperial court, Zhu Gong's attitude toward Yunlu students is clear. After passing the exams, they are either assigned to remote regions or left without appointments for a long time. Xin Shui Erlang has his own aspirations. He neither wants to be sent to some desolate place, nor to shed his blood in vain. He sighed, realizing the long road ahead. Just then, the proctor knocked on the small window and politely called out, "Sir, the test paper is here." Su Xinyan received the paper and eagerly unrolled it to take a look. Under the warm orange candlelight, he fixed his gaze on the test question. A line from the Ordeal of the Orange. An army can lose its leader, but a man cannot lose his resolve. A well-read scholar like Erlang instantly grasped the core theme of unwavering resolve. He stared at the test paper, momentarily stunned, his expression frozen, his eyes filled with disbelief. Erlang thought, could it be that before elder brother entered my room that day, he stepped in some good luck? How else could he have guessed this, given elder brother's abilities? Since he guessed the question correctly, perhaps this third round will end with me, Erlang, taking the lead. Maybe I'll even join the elite. Thinking this, Suchan's expression turned into sheer joy and excitement. Indeed, the heavens are favoring me, Suchan. This year might be one for the ages. Could elder brother truly be my lucky star? His hand holding the brush started to tremble slightly. Calm down, calm down. What was that motto elder brother gave me again? Suchan forced himself to regain composure. Get a grip. It's just an examination. No need to get this excited. Father and elder brother both said, I have the makings of a great official. He suddenly straightened his back. After making a small joke to himself, Suchan felt more at ease. His hands steadied, and he quickly began writing on the paper. Golden cups of fine wine, 10,000 coins per measure. Delicacies on jade plates, worth countless riches. Yet even at the banquet, I can't eat a bite. Drawing my sword and looking around in confusion, trying to cross the Yellow River, the frozen waters block my way. Climbing Taihang Mountain, the snowy peaks are daunting. In idle times, I fish by the clear stream. Suddenly, I dream of rowing a boat to the sun, traveling this difficult road. How hard it is. Where are the many forks of the path? But there will come a time when I ride the waves, raising the sails to cross. After finishing the poem, Suchan reviewed it repeatedly, ensuring he made no mistakes. But new doubts crept into his mind. What is the Yellow River? What is Taihang Mountain? Idly fishing by a clear stream, then suddenly rowing a boat to the sun. Are these lines referencing some classical story? Erlang frowned. Elder brother, when writing this poem, he didn't explain his choices. How am I supposed to understand his mindset or grasp his profound intent? Could the Yellow River and Taihang refer to some famous river and mountain? If so, they can be replaced. As for idly fishing by a clear stream and rowing a boat to the sun, even if they lack a classical reference, their meaning isn't hard to grasp. Thinking it over, he decided it wasn't a big issue. So Suchan replaced Yellow River and Taihang, continued writing his answer. The challenging poem was now completed. The chief examiners for this round of the spring examinations included the Grand Academician Zhao Tingfang, the Right Censor-in-Chief Lu Hong, and the Wuying Hall Academician Qianqing Shu. Right Censor-in-Chief Lu Hong cursed angrily, utter nonsense. What a mess. Daring to embarrass themselves in the exam hall. Focusing on self-cultivation and aspirations is a decent approach, he conceded. But the emphasis on self-cultivation outweighs that on aspirations. The priorities are reversed. Wuying Hall Academician Qianqing Shu sighed heavily. After examining many submissions, he found none truly outstanding. Grand Academician Zhao Tingfang commented calmly. It's always been like this, someone commented. We're used to it. The exam graders, also known as Liao and Iguan, evaluated the papers while commenting aloud. Unlike the students, the examiners had not left the premises since the exam began. The examination hall's main gates were locked, and without wings, there was no way to leave. At that moment, an examiner sighed. If only Suchan had participated, not to mention anything else. At least, we'd have a poem that could go down in history. Who wouldn't agree? Another chimed in. Unfortunately, Suchan isn't a scholar. If future histories note that the best poems in recent years all came from him, how would we save face as scholars? Their discussion continued, and eventually all the blame seemed to shift toward a single individual, Su Pingji. It's all his fault, they muttered. Just then, one of the examiners suddenly became agitated, muttering over and over, who says Defeng scholars can't achieve great things? Who says that? Who says that? In his excitement, he exclaimed, I can guarantee that when this gets out, it'll become famous. This year's examination will definitely be recorded by the historians. The other examiners around him turned curious eyes on him, eagerly crowding in to see what he had found. One of them snatched up the paper and read it closely. His hands began to tremble with excitement. The white-haired Grand Academician from the Eastern Pavilion frowned. Drawn by the commotion, he cleared his throat to restore order. What is this ruckus? This is unseemly. One of the examiners immediately stepped forward and respectfully handed him the paper. The Grand Academician took it, scanned it briefly, and immediately became animated. This candidate is exceptional. If his policy essays and strategies are equally outstanding, I will definitely select him as a member. The day after the examination ended, Suchan discovered that his status at home had plummeted. Before, every morning, mother would have the kitchen prepare a steaming hot bowl of milk. Lunch was fragrant chicken soup, and dinner was ginseng broth. But after the final round ended, the milk was gone, the chicken soup was gone, and the ginseng broth disappeared too. Everyone seemed to pay less attention to him now. Suchan grinned and asked, Erlang, why do you seem so down? Was the final exam not satisfactory? Erlang replied listlessly, no, It's because you guessed the topic, brother. Suchan, both surprised and not surprised, nodded and asked, patriotism or eternal aspirations? Su Xinyan answered, eternal aspirations. Oh, by the way, brother, where are the Yellow River and Taihang Mountain? And what's the source of those lines? Idly fishing by the clear stream, then suddenly rowing a boat to the sun? Su Qian was momentarily at a loss. Those lines? I don't remember them. Su Qian forced an explanation. Idly fishing by the clear stream, that's because I enjoy fishing. And as for rowing a boat to the sun, it's, well, oh, enough with the nonsense. You finished the exams, so why are you still rambling? Just tear up those 4 books and 5 classics. Tomorrow, I'll take you out to have some fun. Forget it. Grumbling, Su Qian stormed off. Back in his room, he found Zhongli sitting on the bed, holding her head in pain, blood faintly seeping out. Su Qian stepped forward to help, but stumbled. Zhongli nodded pitifully and said, I've noticed your younger sister's life force is incredibly strong. Su Qian asked, which sister? The younger one, Zhongli replied. I've stayed in your household for quite a while. Everyone, from your uncle to the servants, seems to have worse luck now, except for that child. She's entirely unaffected. Su Qian chuckled. So you're saying, my sister is someone with great fortune? Zhongli shook her head slowly. People with great fortune find luck wherever they go. But she's not one of them, Zhongli replied. She just has an unusually tough fate, immune to bad luck. Su Qian suddenly. Are you saying everyone in the house has worse luck now? Hearing this, I'm starting to think that's why I haven't found any coins these past few days. Is this your doing? Zhongli replied honestly. I don't know. Su Qian thought for a moment and said, I just got an idea. If my little sister can resist your bad luck, then I'll bring her along when I go out. Maybe I'll start finding coins again. Let's test it out. Su Qian immediately went out, called his little sister over to stand by him, and then headed to the front hall. He took his aunt's prized orchid pot, placed it on the wall of the courtyard, and had his little sister sit below. Su Qian told her, just sit here and have some snacks. When you're done, we'll go back inside. Normally quick-witted, the little sister found it odd that she had to eat outside, but her love for snacks overcame her curiosity. Happily, she agreed. Meanwhile, Zhongli hid nearby, muttering under her breath, with my bad luck, that pot is bound to fall. Sure enough. Just moments after Su Qian placed the pot, a loud crash came from outside the as if something had slammed into it. The pot wobbled precariously, then tilted and fell. At that moment, an orange cat leaped out of the flower bed, soared into the air, and swatted the pot toward Su Qian. Su Qian exclaimed, what the hell? And quickly ducked out of the way. The pot narrowly missed him, but hit Zhongli squarely on the head, shattering to pieces. Su Qian didn't have time to worry about Zhongli's misfortune. He turned his attention to the orange cat and asked curiously, how did you get here, Taoist? The orange cat spoke with a human voice, asking, what were you doing just now? Su Qian smiled awkwardly. Just a small experiment. The orange cat didn't press further, but turned to Zhongli, remarking that one is the prognosticator of sky insight. Su Qian murmured in agreement. From your discerning eyes, you should be able to see the dark clouds gathering over his head. The orange cat's expression turned serious. More than just gathering clouds. It's as if the heavens themselves are condemning him. Compared to the prognosticator, even the shamanic system's hung corpse status seems to be a blessing from the heavens. They only have to endure 81 trials to achieve that status, whereas a prognosticator must endure 3,600 tribulations. Su Qian made a curious sound, frowning. Prognosticators and hung corpses, aren't they essentially the same thing, just called differently? The orange cat let out a short laugh. It seems you don't know. The sorcerer system has only existed for 600 years, the same length of time as Defeng's rise. But don't you find it strange? The martial artist system is well developed, yet there's still no martial god. The systems of the shamans, Buddhists, Taoists, and Confucians have been perfected over millennia, but the sorcerer system? Just 600 years. Su Qian instinctively sensed the inconsistency. Yes, in just 600 years, it's become so developed. If they truly created a system from scratch, the first generation of sorcerers must have been extraordinary. If they were that exceptional, why didn't they break past the top tier? He wondered aloud. So what's going on here? The orange cat didn't answer directly. Instead, it said, let me tell you a bit of history. You can think it over yourself. The founding emperor of Defeng faced great difficulties. He was driven to desperate situations multiple times. Once, he went to the northeast to seek help from the shamanic sect. He promised that if he could overthrow the corrupt dynasty, he would establish a new era. He promised that he would make the shamanic sect the state religion. All the vast lands of the Central Plains would fall under their domain. The shamanic sect agreed, loaning him 200,000 elite soldiers and numerous skilled experts. Later, that founding emperor toppled the corrupt previous dynasty, defeated the various warlords, and united the Central Plains. But the shamanic sect did not become Defeng's state religion. Because Defeng had gained a secret weapon, the sorcerer system was born. Su Qian was left speechless, his mind shouting, What the hell? The sorcerer system had evolved from the shamanic system. No wonder the abilities of prognosticators and hung corpses were so similar. Even though sorcerers grew out of shamans, the foundation was still shamanic. Still, creating an entirely new system wasn't easy. The driving force behind it, likely only the original chief sorcerer, and the founding emperor knew the truth. I suspect it has to do with the secrets the chief sorcerer kept. This might unravel the mystery behind Yunzhou's sorcerers. Martial artists and warrior monks also share similarities. Could their histories be connected too? Suchan changed the subject. Why did you come to see me? The orange cat gazed at him steadily and said, I passed by and noticed your fortune was gone, so I came to check. Suchan listened, his mind filling with questions. No wonder I haven't found any coins these days. It must be because of the chief sorcerer's 404 spell. The orange cat continued, but after seeing that girl, I understand why. Suchan didn't offer an explanation. Knowing the Taoist had misunderstood, he thought Zhongli's bad luck was canceling out his good fortune. With the increasing number of wandering fighters entering the capital, public safety had deteriorated. To address the issue, Wayuan devised a plan. He ordered the construction of 4 sturdy marble platforms, one each in the east, south, west, and north of the outer city, calling them heroic platforms. These platforms served as places where wandering fighters could settle their disputes. For a time, people from all over began flocking to the heroic platforms. If someone had a grudge, they would jump onto the platform in the cap and call out, "You, come fight me if you dare, and if you don't, you're a coward." If the enemy heard it, they would show up to duel the next day. It provided a proper venue for resolving disputes among martial artists, without causing harm to innocent civilians. And it gave the local townspeople a daily spectacle to enjoy, something lively, even boosting the local dining industry. Suchan nodded approvingly. Father Wei really knows his stuff. He's a capable official who can deliver results. Turning to his uncle, Su Xinyan asked, Second uncle, have any famous female fighters arrived in the capital recently? Second uncle replied, they say the capital is bustling right now, with plenty of beautiful martial artists. The most outstanding ones include 4. First, there's the daughter of the Luya Sword Pavilion's master, nicknamed the Butterfly Sword. Not only is her martial skill exceptional, but she's also very pretty. Then there's Rong Rong from Manhwa Tower, known as the Enchanting Hand. From what my colleagues say, she's like a captivating fox spirit, utterly irresistible to any man. Then there's the thousand-faced female thief. No one knows what she really looks like, but she's said to master disguise, appearing each time with a different stunning face. Lastly, there's a renowned female swordswoman, famed for wielding dual blades. She's a disciple of the Lei Zhou Twin Blade School. She's truly a heroic and valiant fighter. Second uncle chuckled. If I were 20 years younger, but then Su Qian fixed him with a hard stare. Second uncle quickly backtracked. I'd still choose your aunt, of course. Su Qian nodded, patted him on the shoulder, and said, I'll leave these women to your younger self. With that, Su Qian headed to the yamen to handle routine matters. He visited a familiar hall of the Silver Gong sect, trained for half, and then prepared to take 2 of his subordinates on a patrol of the streets. Su Qian asked, do you know where these female fighters like to gather? The Copper Gongs answered, at the heroic platforms, of course. All 4 platforms, east, south, west, and north, are bustling now. Even the people from the inner city are going to the outer city for the spectacle. Su Qian made up his mind. All right, let's head to the southern heroic platform today. Just then, a man claiming to be a linen palace guard barged in. Lord Su, His Highness the Second Prince requests your immediate presence at the palace. The Second Prince said it's a matter of life and death. His fate is in your hands. Su Qian stood there dumbfounded, his mind buzzing. First, he went to find Zhongli, but before he could speak, Zhongli said, I know, I'll return in 4 days. Su Qian still looked worried. Will something unexpected happen on the way back? Zhongli didn't know how to answer. Guess I'll leave it to fate, she said. Su Qian reached out, patted her on the head, and said, I'll give you a blessing. Take care on your journey. Then he mounted his beloved mare and rode alongside the Shaoyin Palace guards toward the imperial city. Su Qian galloped straight into Shaoyin Palace, shouting urgently, Your Highness, what's wrong? Linen waved her hand, dismissed the guards and handmaidens, leaving only Su Qian. After watching them leave, Linen suddenly threw herself into Su Qian's arms and began to wail. Through her sobs, she said, Huiqing wants to kill me. Su Qian sighed. You went and stirred up trouble with the princess again, didn't you? No, Linen said. I went to Princess Huiqing to uphold justice, but she turned against me. Sniffling, she added, the Empress, that vile woman, wants to kill my mother. I went to confront Huiqing about it, but she, that cold-hearted wretch, struck me. Su Qian frowned and asked, Where did she hit you? Linen rolled up her sleeve, revealing a smooth, fair arm. 2 faint red marks could be seen on her delicate skin. She whipped me with a cane, she said, her tone indignant. That's outrageous. Don't worry, Your Highness, Su Qian declared. I'll make sure justice is done. I won't let her off easily. Linen seemed moved by his words. That's not necessary. After all, Huiqing is still a princess. If you act on your own, the palace guards will shoot you down. Suchan breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, he thought. At least she still has her wits about her. Adopting a look of grim determination, Suchan said, if your highness so much as loses a single hair, it's an unbearable disgrace for me. Even if it costs me my life, I'll make Huiqing pay for what she's done. Linen nodded slowly, sniffling. That's why I allowed you into the palace today. I've thought it over carefully. I could have fought back at the time, grabbed her face and scratched her, but I hesitated. I must have lost my nerve. I've thought about it again and again. It must be because I didn't have strong bodyguards with me. Come with me to Huiqing's spring court. Suchan felt like cursing. It felt like he'd shot himself in the foot. Clearing his throat, he said, please calm down, your highness. Just tell me what happened, so I can think it through. Secretly, he thought about how he might slip away unnoticed. Linen then recounted, in painstaking detail, the post-case palace intrigues. As expected, the empress hated noble consort Chun, making trouble at every turn. It soon became clear that the empress was a master of palace scheming. Her skill surpassed everyone's. She had just never had the opportunity to use it. Now, every morning at dawn, she forced consort Chun to report to her, and then relentlessly picked her apart. She ordered the palace maids under her command to criticize consort Chun, turning her into a laughingstock in the harem. And then there were punishments, kneeling and being hit with a stick, among others. Linen said angrily, don't you think the empress has a heart of stone? Suchan silently cursed in his heart. Your mother killed the empress's brother. Of course the empress is out for revenge, though her brother got what he deserved. Is there more to it? He asked. Linen's eyes welled up with tears. There is. Just yesterday, my mother was suddenly poisoned. She was at death's door. The servants of Jinsi Palace rushed to call a royal physician, but to our shock, the empress's people intercepted them. Suchan raised his eyebrows. What happened then? Linen, still shaken, said, fortunately, my mother had a reserve of antidote pills in her palace. That's how she survived. Suchan let out a long hum. The poisoning must have been consort Chin's ploy to frame the empress. The empress, still grieving her brother, decided to retaliate by force, hence intercepting the royal physician. Left with no choice, consort Chun had to use her own antidote. He asked, how did his majesty respond? Linen snorted loudly, expressing her displeasure. Father said nothing at all. Suchan speculated that the emperor likely understood the situation and chose not to intervene. Well, it's not that he didn't intervene entirely. At least I don't see any signs of Wayuan stepping in. If Wayuan had acted, consort Chin might already be out of the picture. Suchan probed cautiously. Why does the empress target consort Chun? Do you know, your highness? Linen pretended not to hear, a hint of sadness flashing in her eyes. Suchan understood. He sighed inwardly. So she knows everything. Suchan reluctantly said, let's go. I'm going to confront Huiqing. Linen immediately pulled a stick out from under the desk. Suchan was stunned. You were ready for this all along? He quickly tried to calm her down. Your highness, let's take a moment. How about we think this through again? Linen pursed her lips, looking aggrieved. I knew it. Your heart is actually with Huiqing. Suchan hurriedly grabbed the stick. Stop talking nonsense. Let's go. Under the warm morning sunlight, the branches were budding with new growth. Huiqing sat in a pavilion, dressed in a simple palace gown, holding a scroll of scripture. Suchan and Linen arrived with a menacing air. The aloof princess Huiqing remained unfazed, immersed in her reading. She calmly instructed the guards around her. Any intruders, if they disrupt my reading, kill them on the spot. Several guards rested their hands on their swords, matching Linen's threatening posture. They didn't dare touch Princess Linen, so they directed their hostility at Suchan. Seeing Suchan pushed back, Linen quickly shrank behind him. Without her loyal servant for support, she definitely wasn't brave enough to face Huiqing alone. From behind Suchan, she shouted, Huiqing, come out here. Shameless Huiqing, if you have the guts, come and face me. But Huiqing completely ignored her, continuing to read her book. After a quarter of an hour, Linen led Suchan away, both of them looking defeated. Suchan sighed. Forget it, your highness. The gap is too wide. Internally, Suchan felt relieved. This actually works out better. It spares me from having to pick sides. Princess Huiqing really is my lifesaver, effortlessly resolving this dilemma for me. But hitting Linen was going too far. After returning Linen to Shaoyin Palace, he played Go with her, told her stories, and only left near noon. As an external official, he knew Linen was a rather unconventional princess, cannot mingle for too long, and definitely cannot eat together. With just a wave of the hand, it would be great to have this palace come play in Qinling. Suchan left the palace gates, riding his mare, clip-clopping toward the city gates. The conflict between the empress and consort Chun certainly won't be resolved. Consort Chun is no match for the empress. She'll definitely instigate Linen, using her to deal with the empress. According to Huiqing's words, young Linen was even more foolish than now. She would attack wherever consort Chun pointed. If Huiqing didn't fight back, she'd just be bullied. But if she fought back, linen would inevitably be beaten. And all of this was exactly what Consort Chun wanted to see. I, as a Grand Sea King, should not be led around by a fish. I need to think of a way. The South City's marble arena was built on a square by the river. Two wanderers were fighting on the platform. Ever since the arena appeared, the authorities had loosened their control. Wanderers who wanted to fight could apply to the authorities to retrieve their weapons, but they had to return them the next day. Otherwise, they'd be hunted down. Some young heroes and heroines from famous sects could rely on their sect's endorsement. No weapon deposit required, but if they committed crimes, the sect would bear the responsibility. Suchan scanned the area. He didn't see any outstanding heroines. At that moment, the gong explained, Sir Su, the ones watching out here are just commoners. Those of status and position are in the surrounding tea houses and restaurants. Suchan gave a satisfied look. He glanced at him. That's very perceptive of you. He immediately cast a glance around the tea houses. The second-floor viewing platforms did have quite a few spectators. He also spotted a particularly beautiful heroine. Just as he started walking over, he suddenly stumbled over something hard. Looking down, he saw it was a purse. Suchan paused, confused. He thought, wasn't my money-finding buff taken by that crafty old man Jianzheng? He picked up the purse and weighed it in his hand. It felt rather substantial. With a grin, he tucked it into his chest. Then he noticed a child nearby staring at him, looking regretful for missing the purse. Apparently, he had been beaten to it. Suchan, ever theatrical, called out, What are you looking at? Whose kid is this? The child turned and ran away in fright. Suchan laughed heartily, thinking the kid was quite— I was going to buy you a candy stick, he mused. He entered a restaurant, found a table on the second floor, and showed no interest in the fight on the stage. Instead, he squinted at a heroine at the neighboring table. She wore a pink gauzy dress, revealing a fair neck and delicate collarbones. The fabric was thin, accentuating her ample bosom. He swallowed his saliva. If she were a proper queen of nightlife, this woman would be a true queen of nightlife, he thought. Suchan called out boldly, Waiter, bring a bottle of 82 La Fi. The waiter looked confused. He hesitated. Suchan reluctantly changed his order to a bottle of Springtime Delight. The waiter understood this time, and bustled off quickly, since it was the most expensive wine in the establishment. Just then, Suchan noticed a woman with a lantern, scanning the hall with her gaze. She walked straight over to him. Standing above him, she glared down and said, Give me back the purse. Suchan sized her up. She looked to be in her 30s. Her figure was average, her looks rather plain. He had seen plenty of women her age, like Consort Chun, the Empress, and his own aunt. In terms of beauty and grace, each of them easily surpassed this woman. Yet there was a kind of youthful charm that these elegant women didn't have, a playful, headstrong quality. How unusual that this trait should appear in an older woman. Suchan sipped his tea calmly, denying any knowledge of the purse. The woman glared down at Suchan, gritting her teeth. A light green purse, with 20 taels of gold inside. Give it back. Suchan's heart skipped a beat, but he remained composed, feigning ignorance. Madam, how does your lost purse concern me? The woman was outraged by his words, and she shrieked, Madam? Suchan flinched, startled. What's with this reaction? Doesn't she know her own age? Waving his hand dismissively, he said, I didn't pick up your purse. Move along now. She shouted back, still denying it. I have witnesses. A child's face peeked from the stairs, pointing and exclaiming, It's him. He took the purse and threatened me. Suchan fished out a small piece of silver, flicked it toward the boy and said, with a grin, Say that again? I didn't quite catch it. The boy's eyes lit up with joy. Clutching the silver, he ran off, shouting, I saw nothing. I don't know anything. The two constables burst into laughter, their eyes gleaming as they watched the plain-looking woman. The woman glared at Suchan, grinding her teeth, as if she wanted to bite him, but after a moment, she suddenly sat down and grabbed the unused tableware. Without a second thought, she began eating, as if she were truly hungry. Looking at Suchan, she sneered, So, sir, aren't you going to tie me up and haul me to the yamen? Suchan replied calmly, Madam, it's just a few bites of food. No need to keep calling me Madam twice. Suchan was again gritting his teeth. At that moment, the seductive, coquettish woman swayed her hips as she approached. Sir, may I accompany you for a few drinks? She asked. Suchan quickly gestured for her to sit down. Of course, but there was a problem. All 4 chairs were occupied. The alluring woman looked left and right, not daring to offend the two constables. She turned her gentle gaze toward the older woman and softly said, Dear Auntie. The older woman turned away, snorting disdainfully. The seductive woman had never been treated like this before. She turned red with anger. Everywhere she went, she was the center of male attention and the envy of other women. What was with this older woman's attitude? Why did she deserve this treatment? At that moment, one of the constables stood up and said, Sir, I need— Suchan shot him an approving look and smiled. gesturing to the seductive woman. She smiled back warmly. She had been observing Suchan for a while. He had become a silver gong at a young age, with refined features and a commanding. Either his talent was extraordinary, or he had a powerful family backing him. Either way, he was worth getting to know. The seductive woman said tenderly, "May I have the pleasure of knowing your name, sir?" Suchan replied with a smile. "Suchan. And yours, young lady?" The seductive woman answered softly, "Rong Rong." Suchan clinked his glass with hers, thinking, "Am I having a lucky streak? I just heard my second uncle talk about the 4 most notable heroines in the capital, and now I've run into one of them." He set down his cup, saying, "So you're the renowned soul-stealing hand, Rong Rong. Nice to officially meet you. Yuang is my uncle. He was very close with my father, who was an earl. Unfortunately, he passed away early and couldn't secure the right to inherit influence. By the time it came to me, there was only a small sense of propriety left." Rong Rong's eyes lit up. "No wonder. From afar, I felt Sir Su was extraordinary. So he's from a noble family." Suddenly, Rong Rong became even more enthusiastic. The two started praising each other back and forth, making the older woman eating nearby visibly uncomfortable. She snorted, "I'm done eating. Give me back my purse." But Suchan pretended not to hear her, still engrossed in conversation with Rong Rong. The ignored older woman could only snort a few more times before lifting her skirts and stomping downstairs. The remaining constable sighed. "Her figure isn't bad from behind." Suchan gave him a disdainful look. "You've been motherless since childhood, haven't you?" Then, he reached into his robe and pulled out the pale green purse. Opening it, he found it filled with bright, yellow gold coins. After tying the purse shut, he gently tossed it out the window. "I'm not keeping this ill-gotten wealth." A shrill cry came from below. The purse had landed squarely on the older woman's head. She clutched her head, tears welling up, grimacing in pain, and glaring upward in fury. Suchan kindly advised, "You'd better head home, auntie." The older woman bit her lip, picked up the purse, and left in embarrassment. At that moment, Rong Rong looked toward the stage and asked, half questioning, half testing, "Sir Su, who do you think will win?" Suchan didn't hesitate. Of course, that young swordsman from the Sure. In the past, strength was measured by physique. The man from the Sure family, in both strength and physique, is superior to that young swordsman. So why is he losing? That young swordsman's swordplay is just for show. I suspect he's an actor. Rong Rong hadn't heard that term before, and asked curiously, "What do you mean by actor?" Suchan explained, "Just playing a role for show." Rong Rong suddenly understood, and admired his insight. "I see now. Sir Su's gaze is sharp indeed." Suchan quietly studied her. This Rong Rong had an aura of depth, reserved yet not hidden. She was no novice. Surely, she had long seen through the ruse on stage, only pretending not to understand. So she's a veteran. At that moment, the young swordsman on stage found an opening, and struck down the burly man beneath his feet. The outcome was decided. Cheers and roars erupted from the crowd. Suchan found it all quite irritating. He mocked, "Who are these people, trying to make a name for themselves in the capital, with a cheap performance? Miss Rong, let's leave this place. Have another drink with me." But just then, an angry shout came from the direction of the stage. "Suchan, come out here and kneel to apologize, or I'll crush your head today." Suchan turned to look outside, confused. He muttered to himself, "What nonsense is this?" The crowd of onlookers, both commoners and wanderers, burst into chatter. "Someone dares to provoke the Guan family? This person is incredibly bold, though I think he's a copper-skinned, iron-boned expert." The man continued his boastful shouting, "Suchan, come out here and call me daddy, or I'll come here every day to shout." Suchan placed a hand on his sword hilt, fuming, "This guy's asking for it. I'll deal with him myself." Rong Rong suddenly leaned in, grabbing Suchan's arm. "Why bother with a common brawler?" Suchan ignored her, shaking his head, and went downstairs. Seeing that she couldn't persuade him, Rong Rong turned to the relaxed constable. "Aren't you going to help him?" she asked. The constable shrugged indifferently. "It's just a copper-skinned, iron-boned tough guy. What's the big deal? You don't even know how strong our Lord Su is." Rong Rong was taken aback. Could Suchan also have copper skin and iron bones? But I don't see any divine light on his body. Suchan walked out of the 9th tower, using his sword sheath to swat the buttocks of anyone in his way. "Move, move. Stop gawking." The crowd retreated 100 feet. The young warriors, clutching their behinds, complained, "Lord Su, this isn't fair. We weren't the ones shouting. Why hit us?" Suchan retorted, "Keep whining and I'll beat you up first." With that, he leapt onto the stage, gripping his blade. He asked the man a head taller than him, "Whose man are you?" The 8-foot-tall man sneered, and lunged at him, yelling, "I'm your daddy." Suchan's irritation boiled over. With a flick of his thumb, a clang rang out, as his blade unsheathed. The next moment, the big man was sent flying, trailing sparks and lightning, leaving shallow grooves in the stage's surface. Suchan scoffed, "Is that all?" Does your master have a hole in his head? Sending you here just to lose. The crowd fell silent, stunned. One slash to defeat someone with copper skin and iron bones. And if he hadn't warned us to back away, just the blade's momentum could have killed us all. The more they thought about it, the more cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. After defeating his opponent, Suchan ordered the constable, take him away. Have a doctor dress his wounds. Then bring him back to the night watchman's office. Remember to seal his acupuncture points with oxhair needles. The dying camel is still bigger than the horse. He finished and looked toward the 9th tower, realizing Rong Rong was gone. Then it dawned on him, and he reached into his robe. It was only then that Suchan realized the Earthbook fragment was gone. Recalling earlier events, it seemed that Rong Rong had brushed against him. Could she have stolen it then? An hour later, most of the crowd gathered around the stage had dispersed, but just then, 3 men and a woman appeared, rushing onto the stage. One of the young swordsmen pointed and said, "Look, these small holes seem to be sword energy, sharp and fine. I've never heard of such a sword technique. What do you think, young Master Luo?" Young Master Luo, a handsome man carrying a 7-star sword, replied, "It may not be sword energy. These holes are unevenly distributed, almost like ink splatters. It looks like they were caused when sword or blade energy scattered." An older, humble man chimed in, "Dear young masters, did you see that strike? It was truly something." Curious, young Master Luo asked, "Elder, could you tell us more?" The older man then eagerly recounted the event. A copper-skinned, iron-boned warrior was shouting, challenging the silver gong Suchan, and with just one strike, Suchan severely injured him. What a powerful blow. Young Master Luo frowned. "I've never heard of Suchan." Suddenly, the elder exclaimed, "What a coincidence. He's right behind you." At that moment, they heard the sound of hooves. A young man in night watchman's garb galloped toward them on a fine horse. Leaping from the saddle, he drew his blade and slashed at them. Young Master Lu's face changed, and he hastily drew his 7-star sword to block. A loud clang sounded, and the 7-star sword broke in two. Shocked and furious, young Master Luo found it hard to breathe. His treasured sect weapon. Suchan grinned and taunted, "You dare show up again? Miss Rong stole my treasure. Yet she didn't even bother to hide properly, and still have the nerve to come back so brazenly. Clearly, you haven't been properly taught a lesson by society. You have 2 choices. Hand over the treasure and be my concubine, or hand over the treasure, and I'll sell you to the brothel." Rong Rong looked surprised. "I stole your treasure? Surely you're mistaken, sir." Suchan scrutinized her. Her hairstyle, dress, and makeup were exactly the same. "It's you, no doubt about it. I have limited patience. You have 3 days. If you don't hand over the treasure." Young Master Luo interrupted angrily, "Impossible. Rong Rong has been with us the whole time. She never came here." Suchan frowned, thinking, could this be a coordinated crime? But their tone and expressions didn't seem like they were lying. Too bad the Confucian magic book is in that earth fragment. Otherwise, I'd just use truth magic and see if they're lying. After a moment's thought, Suchan said, "Come with me to the night watchman's office. I'll determine the truth myself." Young Master Lu's face darkened. "You must be joking. Even as a night watchman, you can't just slap us with a baseless charge and haul us away. Do you think we're just meat on a chopping block?" Rong Rong took a deep breath, stepping forward. "Sir, if I truly stole your treasure, I'll go back with you alone. This matter has nothing to do with the others. I'll accompany you." Her companions protested. Rong Rong gave a bitter smile. "What you should do is quickly notify our elders in the sect and find a way to get me out." Only then did the young swordsman fall silent, nodding vigorously. When Suchan saw they'd finished talking, he patted the horse's back and said, "If you're done chatting, climb on. You'll sit in front. I prefer the back." Rong Rong hesitated, biting her crimson lips. Reluctantly, she climbed onto the horse. Suchan gave the reins a tug and rode off. Rong Rong leaned against his broad chest, gritting her teeth. "What do you intend to do with me, sir?" she asked softly. Suchan responded coolly, "Under the Great Feng laws, a thief must compensate the victim 5 times the stolen amount. If unable to repay, they'll be executed. But since you've stolen a treasure, it's classified as a 3rd-degree offense worth 150 taels. You'll be sentenced to 3 years in prison." Rong Rong turned pale. "Is that really the penalty for theft in the capital? That's not what I've heard before." Suchan suppressed a laugh. "I made it up," he said. Hearing this, the woman in his arms breathed a sigh of relief. Yet, Suchan smirked and added, "But once you're in the night watchman's office, your punishment is up to me." Rong Rong immediately tensed up, her voice trembling as she cried, "I really didn't steal your treasure." Suchan suddenly tightened his grip on the reins, halting the horse. In her unguarded state, she pressed against him, and Suchan took the opportunity to place his hand on her waist. It wasn't out of impropriety. He just wanted to confirm if the Earthbook fragment was on her. Not long after, they returned to the night watchman's office. Suchan immediately ordered someone to summon a white-robed sorcerer. Pointing at Rong Rong, he said. Ask her if she stole from me. The sorcerer's pupils gleamed, and after a moment of inquiry, he shook his head. Sir Su, she isn't lying. Suchan was stunned. Did you drink with me at the inn? He asked next. Again, the answer was no lie. Suchan muttered. What's going on? Am I seeing ghosts? After venting his frustration, he calmed down and analyzed the situation. It was definitely Rong Rong who took it. It couldn't have been the sorcerer. The biggest problem with this case is, there are two Rong Rongs. Could it be twins? Confusion filled his mind. Suddenly, Rong Rong spoke. Sir Su, since you're convinced I stole your item, isn't it possible that someone who looks like me did it? Is there really such a person? Suchan asked. Rong Rong pursed her red lips and said, if you've heard of me, Sir Su, you must also be familiar with the thousand-faced thief, correct? She's skilled in disguise, leaving no trace to find her. Suchan's face darkened. Bring me the records on this thief. He ordered his men. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Wayuan brought over a booklet and handed it to Suchan. There wasn't much information on the thousand-faced thief, only that she was an exceptionally skilled thief. She worked alone, her background unknown, and had committed countless crimes. She had never been caught. After skimming through the booklet, Suchan commented, she's a highly professional thief. Why would she disguise herself as you? Rong Rong scoffed. Who knows? Maybe she's jealous of my charm. Suchan was speechless. He thought, the two of them must have had some conflict. This is clearly revenge. Detain her, he instructed. No one is allowed to release her without my permission. No exceptions. The sun gradually set, and, an hour later, night fell completely. Suchan needed to find the thief and retrieve the earth fragment before nightfall. If he failed, he'd have to return to the office and beg for help, which he hated to do. Maybe I should see if Golden Lotus can help, he decided. When Suchan arrived, he knocked on the courtyard door, but there was no response, so he barged in boldly. Inside, he found Taoist Golden Lotus lying peacefully, as if she had passed away. Calling out a few times didn't wake her. Suchan felt a headache coming on. That old fraud must have slipped out again. Why does she have this ridiculous habit now? What should I do now? As a seasoned veteran of the martial world, Taoist Jilian would surely know how to safeguard his own body. He must have left a contingency plan. If his body were harmed, he should sense it. With that thought, Suchan began slapping Jilian's face a few times. Taoist, wake up. I have something urgent to discuss. But there was no reaction. Suchan, exasperated, continued slapping and calling. For a time, only the sound of slaps filled the room. After a long while, Suchan heard a voice behind him, devoid of any emotion. What are you doing? The orange cat's fur stood on end, and its body trembled with anger. Its anthropomorphic face looked grim. Suchan immediately stopped slapping, turning around with an embarrassed smile. Taoist, you're back. I urgently needed your help, but you weren't in the courtyard. So I figured you must have left some kind of safeguard on your body. This was my last resort. The orange cat leapt up, striking Suchan's face with a fiery cat punch. In a voice devoid of emotion, the cat said, did you ever consider that, the moment you entered the courtyard, I already knew you were there? The fiery cat punch wasn't very strong, but it sent Suchan flying. After taking a beating, he quickly explained how he had encountered the thousand-faced thief, mistakenly apprehended Rong Rong, and lost the earthbook fragment. The orange cat calmly replied, once the earthbook fragment is bound, no outsider can see the transmitted messages, or take anything from it. You have nothing to worry about. Suchan questioned, when I got it from you, it was unclaimed. How could that be? The orange cat explained briefly, it was cleansed of its mark by the patriarch. Suchan nodded. He had known about this, but time was of the essence. Let's go get the earthbook fragment back. The orange cat leaped from the bed and dashed out of the room. Suchan was puzzled. Taoist, why not use your body instead? Even if you enjoy moving as a cat, this is official business. Could it be that, to you, moving as your body and moving as your essence make no difference? Full of questions, Suchan followed Taoist Jilian's directions. He went from the northern city to the eastern city, stopping outside an inn. Taoist Jilian said, the earthbook fragment is in there. When he spoke, Suchan felt a blood-bonded sensation, mystical and surreal. He could clearly sense the fragment's exact location. In one of the inn's rooms, inside, a woman with heavy makeup, large almond-shaped eyes, and a seductive gaze, sat by the table, resting her chin on one hand, and playing with a jade mirror in the other. As the sole inheritor of the Taoist tradition, she murmured, I have a sharp sense for treasures. This must be an extraordinary item, but why can't I use it? Drawing on years of experience as a treasure hunter, she concluded, it must be a life-bound artifact, and it has a storage function. If I can unlock it, I'll hit the jackpot. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Rong Rong frowned and asked, who is it? A man's voice responded, checking the water meter. Her face changed drastically upon hearing this. Without a second thought, she grabbed the jade mirror, stuffed it into her pocket, and headed straight for the window. With a bang, the window opened suddenly, and outside sat an orange cat, its amber eyes gazing at her. Rong Rong felt as if a steel spike had pierced her brain, tearing her soul apart. She stood frozen in place, dazed. Suchan pushed open the door, his hand resting on his sword. He strode in confidently and declared, "Acha, thousand-faced thief." The thief's bright eyes darted about, seemingly contemplating a way out. "What are you talking about, sir?" she asked. Suchan reached out casually, and the earthbook fragment flew out from Rong Rong's sleeve, landing squarely in his hand. He checked the fragment, verifying that none of the items inside were missing. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. The silver coins and banknotes in the mirror were all he had. After 2.5 years in this world, braving both storms and strife, he had finally built up some savings. This was his wife's dowry money. Suchan smiled, his gaze falling on the dispirited thief. "Not going to try and talk your way out of this?" The thief rolled her eyes. "What's the point of arguing when the evidence is right here?" She muttered. "I've roamed the 9 provinces for years, but now I've met my match in the capital. This city's reputation as the top under heaven is well-deserved." Suchan, like a prodded, "Why don't you try and deny it? Who knows? Maybe I'll have mercy on you." The thief's demeanor shifted instantly. Adopting a sorrowful expression, she appeared on the verge of tears. "I'm just an unfortunate girl," she whimpered. "At 3 years old, I was sold into a brothel by my parents. At 10, I was forced to serve customers. At 15, I was taken in as a master, thinking my suffering had come to an end. But even my master turned out to be a beast in human form. One dark, stormy night, her performance was so convincing, Suchan couldn't tell if it was true or not. "All right, enough," he said. "I sympathize with your plight, but the law is the law. I have a few questions for you, so answer truthfully. How did you manage to steal my treasure without anyone noticing?" The thief replied, "That's my specialty. Against anyone below the 4th rank, I can steal whatever I please." Suchan leaned in and grabbed her tightly. "How did you manage to disguise yourself like that? It's not a human skin mask, but this face clearly isn't yours." The female thief explained, "This is a secret technique from our Taoist sect. It's called the heaven-concealing art. It truly alters one's appearance. It's far superior to ordinary disguise methods." Taoist Jinlian suddenly interrupted, his face darkening as he stared at the female thief. "Wait, what did you just say? What sect are you from?" Sensing an ominous aura, the thief faltered. "We're from," she stammered. Jinlian turned to Suchan and said coldly, "Just kill her." Suchan held back a smirk. This must be the worst reputation hit Taoism has ever taken. He sternly informed her, "Do you know who this is? This is a genuine elder of the Earth sect." The female thief, desperate to survive, immediately dropped to her knees. "From now on, our Taoist sect will change its name to the Thieves' Sect," she said. Suchan was momentarily taken aback. Seeing Jinlian remain silent, he continued, "Hand over the manual." With a pitiful look, the thief said, "This is a foundational skill learned from a young age, taught directly by—" "There's no manual," she added. "I've been practicing since I was 4. It took over a decade before I was proficient." Suchan said skeptically, "Started serving customers at 10, and became your master's personal apprentice at 15? The thief laughed awkwardly. "Did I say that? Perhaps you misheard." Tiring of her nonsense, Suchan demanded, "Hand over the disguise manual." The thief reluctantly nodded. "The manual is in the wardrobe," she admitted. "I'll fetch it." She walked to the wardrobe and retrieved a bundle, its contents meticulously wrapped. It looked convincing enough. She placed the bundle on the table. "The manual's inside," she said. Suchan picked it up. He eagerly opened the bundle, but as soon as he did, a cloud of green mist erupted forth. Caught off guard, both he and Taoist Jinlian inhaled some, and promptly passed out. The female thief burst into laughter. "You dare challenge me? You're not even close." However, just then, a voice came from behind her. "Seems we'll have to kill you out." Suchan added calmly, "I warned you. This man is a top elder of the Taoist Earth sect. You didn't even notice when you fell under his illusion." He glanced over the thief, remarking, "Not bad. You've got a nice shape. What's your name?" The female thief gave in completely. "Gu Xiaojing," she said with a bitter smile. Without further incident, Suchan sealed her meridians and brought her back to the night watcher's office, where she was provided meals and lodging. The next day, Suchan arrived at the office on horseback. A subordinate named Wayuan waited at the gate. "Sir, some people from the martial world are here. Familiar faces." In the Spring Breeze Hall, Suchan saw the visitors. "Who among you is Rong Rong's master?" he asked. A middle-aged woman stepped forward. "That would be me," she said respectfully. Suchan nodded. "I've uncovered the truth. It wasn't Rong Rong who stole my treasure. It was the infamous Thousand Faces thief, Gu Xiaojing. The culprit is already in custody. Rong Rong can leave with you." The middle-aged woman was visibly relieved. Upon hearing that Rong Rong had been arrested, they had spent the night pulling strings. But the moment the capital heard that Suchan was involved, no one dared lend a hand. As they spoke, Rong Rong entered the side hall, led by Wayuan. She seemed calm. and greeted her master warmly. Rong Rong kept her composure. It's all right now. This official is discerning. He didn't wrongly accuse you. The middle-aged swordsman coughed lightly, and a stack of silver banknotes slipped from his sleeve. Well then, we'll take our leave. Suchan waved his hand dismissively. No need. I'm not that kind of person. In truth, he simply felt too embarrassed to accept. After all, Rong Rong hadn't caused trouble or stolen anything. It was all just a misunderstanding. Recalling this, Suchan retrieved a letter from his sleeve and handed it to Luo Yuung. This official doesn't like owing people favors. Yesterday, I destroyed your magic weapon. Take this IOU to the Division of Heavenly Swords and find Songqing. He'll provide a replacement weapon. Luo Yuung was overjoyed. He had intended to refuse, but at the mention of the Division of Heavenly Swords, he couldn't resist. The group left the Night Watcher's office. The middle-aged woman held Rong Rong's hand silently. It was Luo Yuung who first turned back, hesitatingly asking, Rong Rong, did he mistreat you last night? The older swordsman scolded, watch what you're saying. Yet, he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Being thrown into the Night Watcher's dungeon, it wouldn't have been surprising if something had happened, but such matters could not be spoken of. Even for people of the martial world, reputation mattered. Rong Rong shook her head. He didn't do anything to me. I spent the night alone in a guest room at the Night Watcher's office. The only issue was that the blanket was ugly. The middle-aged woman asked suspiciously, if he didn't mistreat you, why did he arrest you? Rong Rong explained. Lord Su's treasure was indeed stolen, but it was stolen by Gu Shaojing. He brought me in because Gu Shaojing disguised herself as me to commit the crime. It was all a misunderstanding. The middle-aged swordsman frowned. Why would Gu Shaojing disguise herself as you? Rong Rong replied angrily. Earlier, I made a few pointed remarks about her. After all, she's just a lowly thief of the underworld. She's nothing more than a petty thief, Rong Rong declared, her voice laced with disdain. Her deeds are nothing but chicken thievery and dog snatching. How could she ever be compared to me? Rong Rong speculated that her words must have reached the thief's ears, prompting her to disguise herself and commit the theft as an act of revenge. Luo Yuung nodded in agreement. That must have been the case. The middle-aged swordsman breathed a sigh of relief. So, it was all just a misunderstanding, he said. Well, as long as it's resolved, there's no harm done. With no pressing matters, he suggested, why don't we visit the Division of Heavenly Swords and take the young ones to see the capital's tallest tower? Suchan, clutching an ancient, yellowed manuscript, smirked inwardly. That thief is quite the talent, he mused. I'll keep her around. She's bound to come in handy someday. Ha, stealing from me, are you? I'll fleece you for all you're worth, and make you work like a mule in the future. But don't worry, I'll let you graze. At the Division of Heavenly Swords, Rong Rong and her group arrived at the square beneath the stargazing tower. Once again, they were awed by the tallest structure in the capital. Luo Yuung swallowed nervously. Master, he asked, are we really going inside? The middle-aged swordsman shook his head. Gaining an audience at the Division of Heavenly Swords is no easier than entering the Imperial Palace. You all wait here. I'll go in alone, but don't get your hopes up about the weapon. Inwardly, he added, even though that Night Watcher gave me a letter to present here, I doubt a mere silver gong has the clout to secure a gift from these white-robed mages. Frankly, I don't believe it. If it turns out he tricked me, at least I won't have embarrassed myself in front of my disciples. As the swordsman ascended the marble steps, the middle-aged woman turned to the others and explained, do you know why your master spoke that way? That Songqing is the personal disciple of Minister Jian. His standing in the martial world is on par with the Emperor's princes. Understand? As the swordsman entered the tower's first level, a white-robed mage approached. Who are you? The mage asked. The swordsman immediately bowed low, his demeanor respectful. I am Yang Yuchuan from the Weekend Pavilion. The white-clad sorcerer was startled. He had never heard of it. Just tell me what you want. The middle-aged swordsman took out a letter, humbly presenting it. I wish to see Songqing. This was given to me by a silver-cloaked official from the watchman's yamen, surnamed Su. The white-clad sorcerer accepted the note, opened it, and his expression immediately turned extremely serious. He left only the words wait here, and hurried upstairs. The middle-aged swordsman was stunned. This reaction was beyond his expectations. But soon, the white-clad sorcerer who had just gone upstairs returned. He tossed over a sword that appeared plain and unremarkable. It lacked an ornate sword core. The scabbard and hilt bore no gilding or jade inlays. The middle-aged swordsman didn't have time to examine the sword. He clutched it silently and retreated. Scene 4. The sword. Rong Rong saw the middle-aged swordsman holding the sword and exclaimed, wow, it's a magical weapon after all. Young Master Lu kept his gaze fixed on the plain-looking sword. Eagerly he asked, Master, quickly check the quality of this magical weapon. The middle-aged swordsman gripped the hilt and slowly drew the sword. A crimson gleam of sword light dazzled everyone, causing them to instinctively close their eyes. The middle-aged swordsman's hands trembled with excitement. The sword emitted its own energy. It's a self-empowered sword, An extremely rare magical weapon. Even the autumnal chill of our pavilion master's sword can't compare to this one. Thump, thump, thump. Young Master Lu heard his own rapid heartbeat. A self-empowered sword. This is considered a first-class magical weapon in the martial world. Why would Suchan bestow such a powerful weapon upon me? He couldn't resist reaching for it. Master, let me see it. Let me see it. The middle-aged swordsman smacked his hand away. It was an instinctive reaction, as if this sword were his wife, not to be sullied by outsiders. Young Master Lu said, "Aggrieve, master. Why did you hit me? Isn't this magical weapon meant for me?" The middle-aged swordsman replied earnestly, "This sword is a top-tier magical weapon. As the saying goes, innocence invites envy. Treasures draw trouble. This is not a good thing for you. I've just made a difficult decision. I will temporarily keep this sword safe. Let me take a... Once your cultivation improves, I'll return this sword to you. My decision is final. You needn't argue further. However, to make up for it, I'll give you my beloved companion blade. This sword has been by my side for 20 years, just like my wife. You must cherish it." Rong Rong asked, "Who exactly is that young Master Su?" In the tea room on the 7th floor of the watchman's yamen, Wayuan stood by the desk, not looking up as he asked, "Have you offended anyone recently?" Suchan joked, "Following you, how could I not offend people? I've lost track of all my enemies." Wayuan said, "Good that you have this awareness. Your future achievements will be significant. That unranked individual you brought back yesterday, he was taken away this morning. Think carefully again. Have you offended anyone?" Suchan sighed, "I just can't recall. That's why I brought that guy back. Why did you let him go?" Wayuan didn't respond. His brush moved slowly on the paper. Finally, he laid down the brush, exhaled, and completed his work. Suchan quickly leaned in. What did Lord Wei paint? On the scroll was a beautiful woman, in ornate attire, wearing many accessories, holding a delicate fan in her slender hand. Suchan boldly asked, "This elder sister is so beautiful. Does Lord Wei know if she's engaged?" "I haven't taken a wife yet." Wayuan shook his head regretfully. "No one can capture her beauty, not even me." Suchan twitched the corner of his mouth, saying, "What exactly do you mean?" The spring rankings, also called the apricot rankings, are named for this time when apricot blossoms are in full bloom, around February 27th. This year's spring rankings are particularly lively. Not only are thousands of eager scholars participating, but it also coincides with the Taoist sect's inner conflicts. Large numbers of martial artists have flooded into the city. Young Master Lu suggested, "Master, how about we go to the rooftop of the Tingyue building to watch?" The middle-aged swordsman glared and said, "Do you want to be cut down by the watchman's blade, or pierced by thousands of arrows from the royal guard?" Not far from the examination courtyard, a sedan chair was parked in an open space. From inside came a melodious female voice. "Chunner, how much longer?" A maid named Chunner stood on tiptoe, glanced at the distant sun, and replied, "2 more quarters of an hour." The young lady inside the sedan chair was the daughter of the current prime minister, Wang Wenjin. She said coquettishly, "I wonder who the top scorer will be this year." Just then Chunner, suddenly, couldn't help exclaiming, "What a handsome scholar." Miss Wang lifted the curtain, peering through a gap to see outside. She quickly realized who the maid was referring to. The man was so dazzlingly striking that, even as he frowned amid the bustling crowd, his handsome appearance remained undiminished. His eyebrows were finely arched, his eyes bright as stars, his lips red, his teeth white, his skin fair. He looked more refined and attractive than most women. Even someone as confident in her beauty as Miss Wang couldn't help but be amazed. The scholar, protected by a group of guards, was not jostled by the crowd, but he regretted coming to join the commotion. Erlang sighed, "Today, my elder brother and father are both patrolling the streets. Let's not compete for spots with these martial artists. Once the results are posted, someone will naturally announce them. We can just listen here." As time passed, the moment to announce the results finally arrived. First to be announced was the secondary list, but even this secondary list got the scholars excited. The presiding examiner announced 460th place, Yang Jinghua, 459th place, Li Fadian, Qinzhou's Shui County candidate. As names were read one by one, some cheered, others groaned. The scene showcased a vivid cross-section of emotions. Auntie grew anxious. "Erlang, why haven't we heard your name yet?" Su Lingyue reassured her mother. "Mother, we're still only at the 100s. Didn't you say second brother would be on?" As time went on, the ranking reached the top 50. Still, there was no sign of Su Xinyan. Auntie grew even more anxious. Her brow furrowed. "Erlang, isn't it your turn yet?" Su Erlang also frowned and muttered, "Just wait a bit longer." When the rankings reached the top 10, Auntie turned pale. She feared her son was almost certain to fail. Finally, when the announcer cried out, "Golden Seal Scholar, Su Xinyan, Yunlu Academy student," Su Xinyan felt as if thunder had exploded beside his ears. His entire body trembled violently, as if struck. That thunder seemed to resonate in the ears of thousands of scholars as well. Their first thought was, "Impossible." For 200 years, the orthodox Confucian tradition had reigned. Students from Yunlu Academy were always suppressed in official circles. Given this backdrop, how could a Yunlu Academy student be named a Golden Seal scholar? Voices murmured in the crowd, asking, who is this Su Xinyan? Who is this Master Su? Suchan seemed to be under a spell, frozen in place. But Lin Yu was the first to react. She quickly called out to wake her stunned second brother. Su Erlang slowly raised his hand and said blankly, it's me. I am Su Xinyan. When his words fell, the crowd surged around him, chanting, Golden Seal Scholar, Su Xinyan. Is the Golden Seal Scholar married yet? My family has a daughter, 16 years of age, and I would gladly give her to you in marriage. My household also has an unmarried daughter, skilled in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Chunner stood on tiptoe to look for a moment, and then cheerfully remarked, this ranking ceremony is truly interesting. Miss Wang, taken aback, said, the scholar named on the list is truly handsome. Before she could finish speaking, the curtain suddenly dropped. From inside the carriage, Miss Wang's sweet voice came. Chunner, let's go back. Su Xinyan, who had never witnessed such a scene, frowned deeply. He was about to utter some unkind words to dismiss these overzealous individuals when he noticed a group of suspicious Jianghu figures advancing. They began shoving against the protective formation around him, trying to take advantage of his mother and sister. Su Erlang shouted, stop, but it was useless. He couldn't hold back so many people, especially since there were also numerous wealthy individuals pushing for an answer. Golden Seal Scholar Su, have you made up your mind? My daughter and you are a perfect match. A marriage made in heaven. Suddenly, a thunderous voice. Stop. Chen Sheng ordered. Remove those troublemakers. 7 of them retreated 10 paces away from the scholar. As soon as he finished speaking, several constables immediately stepped in, seizing the Jianghu ruffians one by one. When Su Erlang saw Su Qianan, he let out a sigh of relief, as if finally having someone to rely on. Some scholars from other regions, unfamiliar with Su Qianan, asked, brother, who is that man? He's so high profile. He looks like nothing more than a warrior. One scholar explained, that's Su Qianan, the one who wrote, the faint fragrance wafts, the moon stirs at dusk. Hearing this, the other scholar's eyes lit up. So it's him. Indeed, he is extraordinary, a true talent, a dragon among men, worthy of admiration at first sight. Many scholars from the capital were quite delighted. They cupped their hands and called out, greetings to Commander Su. Lin Yu, who cared deeply for her older brother, smiled and said, big brother is really something. Su Xinyan muttered quietly, I'm clearly the main character here. Not only had Su Xinyan passed the exam, but he had also achieved first place among the scholars. This was something no one in the family had anticipated. After lunch, Su Erlang looked at Su Qianan and asked, big brother, will you patrol the streets today? Su Qianan shook his head. Patrolling is not mandatory for silver-ranked officers. It depends on whether I feel like it. Su Erlang clasped his hands behind his back and said calmly, then, big brother, I'll trouble you a bit. Please keep watch over the house. This afternoon, some annoying flies are bound to show up, and I won't be seeing anyone. Su Qianan. This little brother was really putting on airs. I'm a busy silver-ranked officer. How could I have time to open the door for a mere scholar? With a wave of his hand, he walked out. I have things to do. I don't have time to deal with you. Su Qianan returned to his room, worried about Su Erlang's future. Erlang had passed the exam, which was something he hadn't expected. Next came the final exam a month later. After that, the plans I've set in motion can be implemented. Staying in the capital is just the first step. If I want Erlang to become someone useful to me, he'll need a powerful patron. Otherwise, as a Yunlu Academy scholar, he'd spend his life stuck in a minor government post. Lord Wei is no longer the left censor-in-chief at the censorate, and it's unclear if such an can be reclaimed. But Erlang must not align himself with Wayuan. He must not be associated with him in any way. Otherwise, he'll end up like me, branded as one of Wayuan's men. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. I must find him a different patron. That way, our brotherhood will have a chance to shine together in the future. Conquering the court, Princess Huiqing, a woman of her time, I suspect she is secretly cultivating a power base. But Erlang needs a solid backer, not to become a member of an underground faction. As for the crown prince, I've already severed ties with my mother-in-law, the imperial consort Chun, so the crown prince is out of consideration. Besides, his rank is too low. He doesn't match my brother's level. For the same reason, the fourth prince is also not suitable. As these thoughts crossed Su Qianan's mind, he realized that among the civil officials, there was no suitable patron. Never mind, this isn't urgent. What I need to focus on next is keeping an eye on the Buddhist emissaries, as well as the ongoing rivalry between Li Miaojin and Chu Yuanjin. More importantly, I must advance quickly to the copper skin iron bones stage. Finally, Wu Shan arrived. Su Qianan asked, it's good that you're okay. Was there any danger yesterday? Zhongli politely replied, thank you for your concern. Yesterday, I faced a total of 36 crises, 20 minor ones, 10 major ones, and 6 life and death crises. But I made it through them all. Su Qianan gazed at her deeply. Her matter-of-fact tone unexpectedly tugged at his heartstrings. Suchan grinned and asked, Sister Zhong, how is your handwriting? I'd like to ask a favor. Normally, as long as Suchan didn't ask her to share his bed that night, or have his children, Zhongli would agree to his requests. Of course, if her master were to say, Zhongli, you should practice dual cultivation with him, she would comply. As long as Suchan's demands weren't too excessive, Zhongli would fulfill them. After pondering for a moment, Suchan said, help me write a book. Call it Sunny Sky Sage. It's a love story. Don't get it wrong, Sister Zhong. Zhongli muttered. What a strange title. Suchan ignored her and continued his enthusiastic explanation. Sunny Sky Sage. It tells a love story set in the heavenly court. The heroine is the daughter of heaven and earth, known as the Fairy of Purple Mist. The hero is a palace guard in the heavenly court. He belongs to the demon race and is named Long Outyin. In the heavenly court, demons are the lowest of the low, discriminated against by the immortals. They can only serve as manual laborers or guards, though their hobbies include singing, dancing, and rapping. Zhongli suddenly interrupted. Wait a moment, the name Long Outyin seems inconsistent. Considering the heavenly court's exalted status, such a name doesn't quite fit. Suchan thought for a moment. Before responding, let's not get hung up on the details. The story continues. Despite the vast disparity in their statuses, the two unexpectedly fell in love. One is a carefree fairy, the other is pure as a flawless jade. Zhongli's pen halted, and she frowned. Interrupting again, wait, you're saying the carefree fairy is the purple mist fairy, right? And the flawless jade refers to Long Outyin? But he's a lowly demon. Based on his background, he doesn't deserve the term flawless jade. I think you need to revise it. Suchan was annoyed. You're such a nitpicker. Are you teaching me how to write? Detecting the talisman's mood, Zhongli decided to stop arguing. She said no more. The story continues. The two shared romantic moments in the heavenly court, from holding hands and watching sunsets, to hugging and kissing, to rolling around in a secret chamber. Suchan recounted all this in vivid detail, leaving no part unspoken. From start to finish, he described every scene thoroughly. In this era, even banned books included detailed depictions, and sometimes accompanying poems. While Suchan could appreciate those, writing poetry himself was out of the question, so he avoided unnecessary attempts. Suddenly, Suchan's tone softened, but the love between the purple mist fairy and Long Outyin was opposed by a jealous god, enamored with the fairy of purple mist's beauty, discovered their relationship and reported them. Heaven and earth were enraged. They had Long Outyin flayed and his bones removed, casting him into the cycle of reincarnation to endure endless suffering. As for the fairy of purple mist, she was imprisoned in the moon palace for eternity, accompanied by cold solitude. She was left to endure loneliness forever. Suchan cleared his throat and asked, how much have you written? Zhongli quickly calculated. About 80,000 words. Suchan was astounded. A fifth-rank sorcerer's skills are remarkable. 80,000 words written in 2 hours with a brush. It seemed faster than typing on a modern keyboard. If only I had met Zhongli 6 months earlier. I'd dictate and he'd write, like my personal speech-to-text system. I could have opened a bookstore, selling illustrated books for a living. Suchan dismissed the idea. There were better uses of time. That's it for now. I'll consider the second half later. Let's move on to the next story. The second story, he continued, is about a queen of the demon realm and her love story with a human scholar. Suchan then borrowed a trope from past life's romance novels, the overbearing CEO archetype, but with reverse gender roles. The queen was domineering and strong, intelligent and ruthless, while the human scholar was erudite, kind and gentle. A boss lady meets naive bookworm kind of story. Clearly, this story was written for Princess Huiqing. As for the previous story, it was written with Princess Linen in mind. In that tale, the male and female leads were a heavenly court princess and a palace guard. Suchan had a cunning plan to subtly influence Linen's views on love and values. Once she became immersed, she'd start picturing a charming, capable, and witty guard-like character. Then she'd realize, doesn't my loyal servant fit this description? My true love is right beside me. As for Huiqing, she was a tougher nut to crack, intelligent, composed, and independent. Such a woman is harder to sway. In a world where men reign and women submit, it's rare to see an overbearing queen fall in love with someone like me. But I believe this will undoubtedly spark Princess Huiqing's curiosity. Suchan washed his face and left the house. He rode his mare, carrying 2 novels penned by Zhongli, and galloped quickly into the imperial city. Suchan asked, Your Highness, how are you today? Linen sighed. My mother keeps crying to me every day, saying she's bullied by the empress in the harem, and that she can't take it anymore. But I can't escape from Huiqing. Besides, I don't think my mother's situation is as miserable as she says. When the crown prince was locked in the Dali temple, I went to plead with the emperor, but he wouldn't see me. I stood in the cold for 2 hours, only for Huiqing to send me away. At that moment, I realized, maybe the emperor doesn't love me that much after all. After the crown prince's downfall, my siblings stopped playing with me. That's when I understood. They never really liked me in the first place. Suchan knew that this was Linen's way of showing her trust in him. That's why she let down her proud princess facade and opened up like this. These feelings must have been bottled up inside her for a long time. Though outwardly, the princess was arrogant and headstrong. In truth, she was a paper tiger. When wronged, she would cry and shout. But when deeply hurt, she silently endured it. Suchan placed a hand on her head and gently patted it. No matter when or where, I'll always be there for you. As Suchan saw her mood worsening, he instinctively placed his hand on her head again and gently patted her a few more times. Linen's face gradually turned red, like a timid wife who had just been scolded. In the next moment, she quickly swatted Suchan's hand away, warning him, "Don't touch my head. I'll get mad." Suchan smiled, knowing that the best way to handle a girl like her was a mix of assertiveness and persistence. If it were Huiqing, I'd probably be skewered by an arrow already. Suchan quickly withdrew his hand, took out the Sunny Sky Sage storybook from his sleeve, and placed it in front of Linen. "This is a book I came across. I found it rather amusing. Since the princess enjoys stories, you might find it enjoyable too. But please don't say it's from me." Linen's attention was instantly captured by the Sunny Sky Sage. Although this wasn't her first gift from her loyal servant, it was the first time he'd given her something so unique. Suchan added, "If you ever get bored of staying in the palace, you could move to Linen Mansion. That way, I can visit you every day, and even sneak you out for some fun." After a brief chat, he took his leave. Linen stopped him, covering her cheek with a pout and sternly saying, "Don't tell anyone about today. If you do. She wanted to say, "I'll have your head," but she hesitated, unable to bring herself to say it. Suchan understood her meaning perfectly. He nodded and left. Not long after Suchan departed the Pavilion of Harmony, less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he arrived at Dishing Pavilion, where Princess Huiqing resided. Entering the elegant courtyard, he was greeted by the stunningly beautiful princess. Her voice was clear and melodious. "Lord Su, what brings you here?" Suchan sincerely asked for guidance. "My cousin has become a Golden Seal scholar, but he comes from Yunlu Academy. I'm concerned about his future. Do you have any advice?" Princess Huiqing's eyes glimmered. Taking a sip of tea, she quickly grasped Suchan's intent. This was a way to ensure Su Lingxiu didn't end up branded as one of Wayuan's men. Princess Huiqing smiled. "Have you been to Qingzhou? What do you know about the place?" Suchan thought for a moment and replied, "It's well governed under Lord Xiang's administration." As he spoke, Suchan suddenly understood Huiqing's meaning. Qingzhou was now fully under the control of Xiang. With him overseeing Qingzhou, any Yunlu Academy student appointed there could thrive without being suppressed. The princess didn't keep him guessing and said, "Qingzhou is a sanctuary established by Yunlu Academy for its scholars." Suchan exhaled deeply, saying, "I only have one little brother in my family. I don't want to send him so far away to Qingzhou." The long distance made him hesitant. "Well, for now, I'll let Erlang stay in the capital. I'll figure something out later. Maybe he'll find a patron on his own." Suchan shifted the topic slightly. "Does your highness have any interest in reading storybooks?" Huiqing shook her head. "I never read those sorts of things." Her tone was lofty, like a doctoral scholar dismissing online novels with a smirk. "I don't read such things." Suchan took out Overbearing Queen Falls and placed it on the table. "I found a good book. Your highness might find it entertaining in your spare time." With that, he quickly made his exit, not forgetting to excuse himself. "Duty at the yamen is pressing. I'll take my leave now. Oh, and please keep this confidential." Huiqing didn't look at the book initially. She just told her maid to put it away. After seeing Suchan off, she considered instructing the maid to take care of it. But as her gaze passed over the cover, the title caught her eye. "Overbearing Queen Falls for Me." Such a blasphemous title intrigued her. Since she had nothing pressing to do, she decided to take a look. With that, she sat back down, opened the controversial title, and began reading. The story described a scholar who stumbled into the demon realm, talented and erudite. The scholar found himself at the mercy of the demon realm's residents, who intended to eat him. A cauldron was prepared, ready to fry him up. Just then, the queen appeared. She was the demon realm's sole literate being, with unmatched wisdom and culture. She saved the scholar. She kept him in her harem. They recited poems to each other, discussing ancient and modern times. Over time, the queen displayed her domineering and cold demeanor, but deep down, she cared deeply for the scholar, even if she didn't know how to express it. Her favorite catchphrase was, "Man, you're playing with fire." Huiqing had never seen a book this entertaining. It had no depth to speak of, no knowledge to be gained. It was worlds apart from the dense ancient texts she typically enjoyed. And yet, for some reason, even though it was just about life's trivialities, filled with mundane conversations, it seemed to possess a special charm. It kept drawing Huiqing back for more. She couldn't help but want to see more of the queen's public displays of power, her moments of glory, as she crushed men underfoot, kept them in her harem, and treated them with a dominating, icy attitude. But even such a cold queen had a tender side. Meanwhile, the scholar was devoted to her, always thinking of her and her well-being. He would even get upset, jealous, unknowingly. Whenever the queen drank with her demon generals, without realizing it, she ended up reading for over 2 hours. Huiqing also noticed another advantage of the book. It didn't require any brain power. It was just fun. After indulging in it, Huiqing suddenly felt a surge of irritation. What was I doing? How could I spend 2 hours on such a shallow, knowledgeless book? What's the difference between this and wasting my life? How could I squander my time and energy on something so complete? She felt a deep sense of guilt. Huiqing disdainfully tossed the book aside, stood, and left the reception hall, thinking, it's just a frivolous book. But a few minutes later, she couldn't resist coming back for it, glancing furtively left and right like a thief. When she saw no one was around, she quickly tucked the book into her sleeve and left. It wasn't so she could read it again at bedtime, no. It was because this book couldn't be seen by others. It was like a private diary, meant to be kept hidden. Meanwhile, back at the Harmony courtyard, Linen was completely absorbed in Sunny Sky Sage. She finally understood what romance between men and women was all about. It was mortifying. How could that wretched servant give me something like this? She read every word carefully, imagining the scenes as she went. But when she reached the part where Dragon Sky was skinned, his bones extracted and sent into the cycle of reincarnation, while Purple Cloud was forever imprisoned in the cold palace, the story suddenly stopped. Linen cursed under her breath, calling the servant names. Then she summoned a maid to prepare hot water. I'm going to bathe, she announced. One maid hesitated. Dinner will be ready soon. Bathing at this time? Linen grew angry, snapping. Just do it. Soon, the hot water was ready. Maidservants helped Linen into the bath. Her pale, slender body sank into the water, revealing smooth, rounded shoulders and delicate collarbones. Linen suddenly asked, which of my guards do you think is the most handsome, the most talented, the most interesting, and the most loyal to me? The maid who was helping her replied, they're all quite loyal, but as for talent and humor, I'm not sure. If it doesn't have to be a guard though, I do have someone in mind. Linen's eyes lit up. Who is it? She asked eagerly. The maid answered, it's Lord Chuu. Lord Chuu is very handsome, talented and interesting. He often makes your highness laugh. Although he's not a guard, he's your trusted confidant, and he's not just any scholar. He's a watchman. Well, he can barely be considered a guard, she thought. Biting her lip, she gazed at the rippling water, the blurry reflection of her face in the glass. Her features were as if she were shy. In her heart, she kept asking herself, could it really be that wretched servant? Over at the royal mansion in the imperial city, in the study of Prime Minister Wang Zhenwen, Miss Wang carried in a bowl of goji berry soup. Father, have some tea, she said, but her eyes were drawn to a poem on the table. Gold goblets of fine wine cost 10,000 coins. Delicacies on jade plates worth thousands. Unable to drink, unable to eat, I draw my sword. Look around and feel lost. Attempting to cross the Yellow River, I'm blocked by ice. Climbing the Taihang Mountains, I face snowy peaks. At leisure, fishing on a green stream. Suddenly I find myself in a dream by the sun's edge. Difficult roads, so many paths. Where do they lead? One day, the long wind will break the waves, hoist the sails and journey. Miss Wang couldn't tear her eyes away. Father, could it be you've written a masterpiece for the ages? If this poem were made public, it would astonish the court. The Prime Minister took a sip of the tea, let out a satisfied sigh, and replied, this isn't mine. It was written by the new scholar. Didn't you visit the Gongyuan Imperial Examination Hall today? Didn't you see him? They say he's an outstanding talent, an extraordinarily handsome man. Miss Wang quickly denied it. I didn't see him. I was just there for the excitement. The Prime Minister smiled contentedly. When I reinstated poetry as part of the imperial exams, I put in a lot of effort. There was so much resistance. Now that a masterpiece like this has emerged, I can finally hold my head high. It's worthy of all the scholars in the land. It's worthy of our ancestors. It's proof that poetry, our precious heritage, has not been entirely lost. Miss Wang casually remarked. I hear that scholar comes from Yunlu Academy. The Prime Minister thought for a moment, then sighed. What a pity. Miss Wang continued. I'd like to host a literary gathering at the mansion. I'll invite the most famous scholars in the capital, under your name, of course. Organize a literary event. The initiator must be a person. Miss Wang herself didn't have such credentials, but she had already hosted several literary events, using her father's name. Prime Minister Wang Zhenwen gave her a deep look. His eyes filled with many unspoken emotions. He didn't object, however. After all, it was springtime, and hosting a literary gathering seemed fitting. At Yunlu Academy on Qingyun Mountain, a horse stopped at the mountain's base. A student dismounted swiftly, carrying a list in his hand, and ran toward the summit. Good news, he shouted. The scholar Zhang Shan said calmly, a true scholar remains composed. Neither great joy nor sorrow should shake the mind. Judging by your expression, I take it the students who joined the spring assembly all passed? The messenger excitedly exclaimed. Sir, not only did they pass, but Su Jiu has been named a top scholar. Zhang Shan was stunned. A top scholar? The student nodded vigorously. This is the official list from the Board of Rights. Su Jiu is indeed the top scholar. Zhang Shan grabbed the list in excitement. It listed the names of the Academy's participants in the spring assembly, and at the very top was Su Jiu's name. Zhang Shan stared at the list for a long time, then shouted excitedly, Headmaster Chen Tai, Li Mubai, one of our students has become a top scholar. The headmaster and the 2 senior instructors hurried to Zhang Shan's study. Li Mubai frowned and asked, is it that student who never lost a debate? The white-haired headmaster Zhao Shou also asked, are you certain that this student was named a top scholar? Zhang Shan proudly confirmed, yes, it's my student, Su Jiu. Li Mubai and Chen Tai couldn't help feeling both elated and a bit envious. Headmaster Zhao Shou didn't say anything, but his expression showed his pride. Judging by the past records of the spring assembly, there's almost always some corruption involved. But Su Jiu is from Yunlu Academy. There's no chance he cheated. Still, to say it was purely skill might be a bit far-fetched. Headmaster Zhao Shou pondered. By all rights, he shouldn't have been named top scholar. What did Su Jiu write? Zhang Shan tempered his excitement. Su Jiu's essays, while excellent, were not masterpieces. Brilliant, yes, but not awe-inspiring. Without such brilliance, how did he manage to win the favor of at least 2 of the 3 chief examiners? The messenger quickly pulled out a sheet of paper and offered it up, saying, one of the officials mentioned it. Su Jiu composed a poem during the 3rd round, which greatly impressed the East Pavilion Grand Academician. The other examiners respected it as well. Combined with his excellent performance in the first 2 rounds, this earned him the title. Headmaster Zhao Shou received the folded sheet of paper and slowly unfolded it. He fell silent for a long time. After a long pause, he murmured quietly to himself, caught in an emotional reverie he couldn't shake off. Zhang Shan hesitated. Suddenly, Zhao Shou burst into laughter. A magnificent poem. I must personally engrave it in the Yashing Hall, so it becomes a lasting part of Yunlu Academy. Generations to come will look back at this moment, and this will be enough to mark it. The 3 renowned scholars found it hard to believe. They grabbed the manuscript from the headmaster and began reading. Moments later, their faces froze. Like Zhao Shou before them, they too became lost in thought. Li Mubai suddenly wept. The road ahead is hard, it says. Many paths branch away, but someday, I'll ride the wind and waves, hanging my sails to cross the boundless seas. This poem, it speaks of Yunlu Academy itself. Looking back at the 200 years since the establishment of the Imperial Academy, Yunlu Academy has faced its darkest era. Students burn the midnight oil in their studies. They study tirelessly, but what they gain is only frustration, a reservoir of passion with no outlet. They are brimming with talent, yet have nowhere to use it. The wine sits idle in the golden cup, sword drawn, eyes rove, heart grows desolate. These final lines are truly strokes of genius. They stir something deep within the soul, eliciting an unshakable sense of pride and longing. Zhang Shan shook himself free from the stirring emotions. In a low voice, he said, Headmaster, Su Jiu is my disciple. After all, it was through my diligent teaching that he reached such heights. Zhao Shou nodded slightly. You've worked hard, Zhang Shan. Zhang Shan, in a solemn tone, replied, it is my duty to cultivate talent for the academy. No effort is too great. However, I have a small request. I hope you will honor it. When engraving the poem, please, include a note beside Su Jiu's name. Poem by Zhang Shan, style Jingyan, hailing from Jingzhou. Before Zhao Shou could respond, Chen Tai and Li Mubai protested vehemently. That's preposterous. Zhang Shan was incensed. Why is it any of your business? My student's poem. Why should you have a say? The 2 scholars bristled, retorting, nonsense. You know your student's abilities as well as anyone. Do you dare deny you know who actually wrote this? Zhao Shou frowned at this insinuation. He asked, are you suggesting this isn't Su Jiu's work? Chen Tai scoffed. Su Jiu excels at essays, but his poetry is mediocre at best. How could he have penned such an inspiring piece? Li Mubai chimed in. It was my student, Suchan, who wrote it. Zhang Shan sneered. Since when did he become your student? He's clearly my disciple, so regardless, my name deserves to be on the engraving. His words sparked another. All 3 scholars began arguing heatedly. After listening for a while, Zhao Shou grasped the situation. It seemed the poem wasn't Su Jiu's. Rather, it had been penned by the man widely revered in literary circles. It turns out that Su Jiu cheated as well. Confucianism values integrity above all else. The higher one climbs among the great Confucian scholars, the more. In essence, every great Confucian upholds an exemplary moral code. To put it simply, cheating isn't just a minor offense. If it conflicts with one's primary area of expertise, it could hinder their future promotions. Zhao Shou suddenly asked, by the way, what's this scholar's main subject? Zhang Shan replied, statecraft and military strategy. Upon hearing this, Zhao Shou nodded in relief. His focus on military strategy and statecraft means this won't affect his career advancement. Zhao Shou said, no need to argue over a single poem. It's enough that Suchan's talent has been brought into our academy's spotlight. That is the real victory for us. The three great Confucian scholars responded in unison. The headmaster is right. Though in their minds, each of them made a silent resolution. They would approach Suchan for more works in the future. In addition, they collectively added another unspoken comment. What a shameless rascal that Yang Gong is. The following day, the Su family residence hosted a grand banquet. Friends and relatives gathered. The Su clan was overjoyed. Not long ago, Su Dalong was granted a viscountcy. Now, Su Xianyan had earned the scholar title. It seemed the Su family was on the rise. Guests indulged in their drinks and bragging, saying, Dalong and Erlang's success is all thanks to you. You raised both a literary and a martial star. You're more effective than any tutor. I happen to have twin grandsons. Maybe you could help guide them? Su Pingji, feeling elated, laughed heartily and agreed. Sure. Just send those two youngsters over. Su Qian silently grumbled to himself. What nonsense. You have no merit in their success. Su Pingji and Su Xianyan privately thought the same. What self-awareness you lack. You're just a rough martial man. Meanwhile, at the western gate of the city, the gate guards, suddenly, faint, ethereal sounds echoed in the distance. The faint melody seemed to come from the heavens. One of the guards rubbed his ears, only to find the chanting still lingering. He turned to his companions, confused. Do you hear that strange sound? Before they could answer, golden light began to emerge. Radiant Buddhist glow rose from the west. It looked as though the morning sun was rising. They gazed up at the pure, holy light. Their expressions grew serene and devout, as if their souls were being cleansed. Unconsciously, their grip on their weapons loosened. Meanwhile, in the distance, a monk rang a massive gong, each beat reverberating deeply into the surroundings. The heavy drumbeat traveled far and wide, into the hearts of the guards, into the minds of the city folk, and even into the Su family estate. Su Qian, who had just raised a glass to toast, suddenly recalled the words of the mysterious monk. His mind raced. They've arrived. What's coming? For a moment, he was confused. Then, it hit him. The Buddhist envoys had arrived. The emissaries from the western regions had finally reached the capital. They were here for Sangbo, and the mysterious monk. Their arrival spelled trouble. Su Qian tensed up. He knew the Buddha's agents were formidable. Though he had safeguards, the monks couldn't easily sense the mysterious monk's presence. As the main official in charge of Sangbo, he couldn't avoid dealing with them. He had heard that Buddhist practitioners possessed strange abilities, like telepathy and clairvoyance. If that were true, could they hear his very thoughts? As the atmosphere grew heavier, Su Qian excused himself from the banquet, claiming he needed to visit the restroom. Quietly, he began devising a plan to handle the envoys. One that slowly took shape in his mind as the Buddhist delegation approached. This was both a crisis and an opportunity. The Buddhist monks likely knew more than anyone else about the mysterious monk's identity. I could use this chance to dig deeper, gather more information, and give the mysterious monk a proper explanation. Turning to Zhongli, he said, Sis, let's go. Zhongli, still lost in her thoughts, reluctantly followed, her face clearly showing her unwillingness, but she didn't dare resist. Meanwhile, at the docks, a large merchant ship slowly approached, its sails spread wide. Zhang Sun let out a sigh. It's been over 2 months since I left the capital. Winter has passed, and by the time I return, the willows have sprouted and life is blooming. The grief and anger he had felt when Su Ningyan died had settled, leaving a quiet sadness in his heart. It became a memory he would always carry. Years from now, when he thought of that spirited young man, he would feel a faint pang of sorrow and regret. The gentle waves lapped at the hull as Chan said, once the cargo is unloaded, we'll go pay our respects to Ningyan. Yen Yen turned with a stoic expression, his voice low. I'm going to the watchman headquarters. Su Qian left the Golden Jade Hall with Zhong Li. He had planned to visit his own department, but suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. The two of them froze, exchanging uncertain glances. It was as if they had turned to stone. Song Tingfeng and the others were stunned. Who is that? Why does he look so much like Su Ningyan? Do we even have such a watchman in our ranks? A brother? Maybe? But Su Ningyan doesn't have any siblings. One question after another popped up in the minds of the returning watchmen. The air grew thick with silence. Memories stirred. Emotions churned. Faces grew pained as the past came rushing back. Su Qian felt as if those song lyrics perfectly captured their mood. And yet, here they were. It was too awkward. Surely this was all Zhong Li's bad luck rubbing off on him. He forced an awkward yet polite smile. Hello everyone. I'm Su Qian. Song Tingfeng stared at Su Qian. It took all his strength to tremble out his words. Are you Su Ningyan? The others said nothing, just watching him silently, holding their breath. Su Qian smiled awkwardly. It's me. I'm not dead. Hearing his response, the group fell silent for a dozen seconds. Then Song Tingfeng suddenly shouted and rushed towards Su Qian. How are you not dead? You were clearly dead. Why do you look different? How did you come back to life? Tell us. Suchan looked exasperated. I'll explain later. He gently pushed Song Tingfeng and the others aside, pointed at the silver badge on his chest, and cheerfully said to Li Yuchen, Boss, I made it as Silver Gong. Li Yuchen kept his composure and nodded. Not bad. It was worth all my efforts in training you. Suchan then turned to Zhongli, little sis, come here. Let me introduce you to my boss. Before Zhongli could react, Suchan pushed her toward Li Yuchen. Li Yuchen looked at Zhongli and felt a chill down his spine. It was like a cold snake slithered over him. His scalp began to tingle. Her hair was dry and messy. Her coarse robe wrinkled. Her face was hidden. Li Yuchen's expression turned to one of horror as he stepped back. Who's this girl? Get her out of here. Suchan quickly reassured him. Zhongli, just head to my Dao Hall. Turn right in front of it. Zhongli reluctantly walked off. Afterwards, Suchan explained in detail how he had survived and come back to life. He also described how he ended up becoming a Silver Gong. The two younger men listened in shock, unable to hide their envy. Zhang Luzhong marveled. And grant a new body. I heard even the emperor once asked Jianzheng for it. No bad policy was implemented. Is that Chu Kaiwei your girlfriend? Suchan ignored his teasing. He put his arm around Song Tingfeng's shoulders and said, let's not talk about this. It's rare for the brothers to reunite. Let's call over Fong Si tonight for a good time. However, Song Tingfeng firmly shook his head. He said seriously, I won't call Fong Si again. I'm not the man I used to be. Now, I'm a man striving forward, dedicating myself to self. Mingyan, you'll change, and I'll change too. You can't view me through your old perspective. Suchan ignored him. Turning, he put his arm around Zhu Guangxiao and walked out. If you're not going, so be it. Tonight we're all going to call Fong Si. It's on me, he said. Then he turned to Zhu Guangxiao and laughed. I still owe you 5 trips to call Fong Si. Swallowing hard, the once decisive Song Tingfeng grit his teeth and followed after them, muttering under his breath, you still have my promise. The agreement includes me too. Tonight, I'm also going to call Fong Si for drinks. Suchan looked at him sternly, his tone righteous. You cannot marry Fong Si. You are no longer the Song Ting, drinking and revelry, indulging in the waves of life. Leave those things to me and Guangxiao. You are the striving Song Tingfeng now. Song Tingfeng felt stung by his words. His face flushed with embarrassment. Since he had already lost face, he decided not to pretend anymore. Tonight's visit to Fong Si was a must. Seeing his expression, Suchan felt a little sorry for him, but then burst into wild laughter. The place where the Buddhist delegation was staying was the Sanyang Inn in the western part of the city. It was also the largest and outside the city walls. It had a 2-courtyard layout with 3 centuries-old willows growing inside, hence its name. After catching up with his colleagues, Suchan went to Sanyang Inn on his own to gather information. A foreigner from the inn walked out of the main gate and silently slipped into a narrow alley. In the alley stood a young man wearing a constable's uniform. One hand rested on the sword, leaning against the wall, waiting for a long time. The foreigner lowered his head respectfully. This is the roster for the Western Region delegation. The leader is a great master known as Dewey. Master Dewey was summoned to the palace and is not currently at the inn. Suchan casually tossed a jar. Drawing a graceful arc, the foreigner caught it securely. After sending the foreigner away, Suchan quickly removed his night patrolman uniform. Next, he pulled out a monk's robe from a piece of the Dishu and put it on. He touched his buzz cut, his mind steeling itself. Consoling himself, he said, though I've just started growing my hair out, it can grow back. Some sacrifices are unavoidable. A few minutes later, a masculine, handsome monk appeared at the inn's entrance. The gatekeeper wasn't a foreigner, but a young monk. The monk stepped forward to block the way. May I ask the senior brother's name? Suchan folded his hands and recited the mantra, Amitba. This humble monk is Hung Yuan from Qinglong Temple. Upon learning that brothers from our sect have come from the western regions, I have come to pay my respects. The monk, however, was not easily fooled. He scrutinized Suchan and asked, Senior brother Hung Yuan is someone I haven't seen before. Suchan replied with a tone that suggested familiarity, as if sharing a family secret. I am a warrior monk. The monk seemed to understand, his tone becoming polite. Senior brother Hung Yuan, please come in. Guided by the gatekeeper, Suchan passed through the front courtyard into the inner courtyard. The monk stopped in the courtyard. He then entered alone. Senior brother Hung Yuan, please wait here for a moment. I will inform Jinshin Shirshu. Suchan watched the young monk enter a room, began recalling the names on the roster. The delegation from the western regions numbered 21. The highest ranking among them was, naturally, the delegation leader, Master Dewey. Below him were 2 others. They were Jingshin and Jingxi. From their titles, these 2 seemed to be senior and junior brothers. As Suchan was thinking about this, the young monk returned, inviting Suchan to come inside. He followed the young monk into a room. The room was filled with the scent of sandalwood. Suchan put his hands together in greeting. Senior brother Jingshin. The middle-aged monk returned the gesture. Junior brother Hung Yuan. Once Suchan had taken a seat, Jingchen said, Pan Shu senior brother just returned to the temple. Suchan understood what he meant. He was implying that the monks of Qinglong Temple had only just learned about the delegation's arrival in the capital. Pan Shu abbot had just returned to Qinglong Temple, and without a compelling reason, would not send the temple's monks to disturb them. This was a test from Jingchen. Suchan had prepared for this in advance, responding calmly. Your humble monk left this world long ago. The monk Jingchen smiled. Junior brother Huan, what brings you here? His voice seemed to have an uncanny charm, instinctively compelling Suchan not to lie. He felt an urge to lay out his purpose, honestly and thoroughly. Suchan thought to himself that this monk was a law enforcer of the Wupin rank. The abbot of Qinglong Temple, Pan Shu, was also a Wupin. Monks of this level were like walking laws. They could actively or unconsciously influence those around them. Although Suchan had never fought against a law enforcer before, he had looked into the skills of Buddhist experts when he investigated the Sangbo case at Qinglong Temple. The strength of law enforcers came from their precepts. It was somewhat similar to the Confucian principle of the spoken word becomes law, but without the same level of arrogance. Suchan folded his hands in prayer and asked, Did you and your fellow brothers come to the capital to address the sealed item that Sangbo secretly freed? Jingchen squinted his eyes. Though he kept a calm exterior, he asked, Who mentioned this, junior brother? Suchan said, Before returning to Qinglong Temple, Master Dewey gave strict orders not to reveal the existence of the sealed item, not even to Qinglong Temple's monks. Jingchen had set a trap for Suchan. Suchan shook his head. Suchan sighed and said, It's not as the master said. To be honest, the Sangbo incident was something I was also involved in. Jingchen's gentle and peaceful gaze seemed to flash with a golden divine light. Suchan revealed a look of wistful sorrow. I had a junior brother, Dharma named Hung-Hui. We grew up together as brothers, and we were very close. Over a year ago, Hung-Hui suddenly disappeared, taking a spell that conceals one's aura from the temple. I searched everywhere, only to discover he had been abducted by a gang. Jingchen seemed overcome with grief, reciting the Buddha's name to ease his sorrow. Mitba, he said. Noticing Suchan's melancholy expression, he had a sudden thought. Was there a conspiracy behind this case? He asked. Suchan nodded. That's correct, he said. Hung-Hui had feelings for a female pilgrim, and they privately pledged themselves to each other. As a result, he stole a magical artifact from Qinglong Temple and eloped. Jingchen furrowed his brow, his face showing confusion. He asked, even if he eloped, there was no need to steal the artifact. Su Hongyuan sighed. That female pilgrim was the legitimate daughter of Prince Yu, and Prince Yu is the emperor's brother. He is a noble prince. Without the artifact to conceal their aura, they wouldn't have been able to escape the capital's scrutiny. Jingchen appeared at a loss for words. After a pause, Suchan explained how the two young lovers were deceived, how they were unwittingly caught up in a political struggle, and ultimately how they met their tragic end. He told the story in brief. Jingchen clasped his hands together, his expression compassionate as he recited a Buddhist prayer. After a few moments of silence, he asked, What does this have to do with Sangbo? Suchan smiled faintly, calmly saying, This case is full of twists and turns, and far from Late last year, the imperial Sangbo's Yongjin, Shanhua temple, was suddenly destroyed by an explosion. The evil that had been sealed beneath Sangbo emerged, throwing the kingdom into turmoil. The emperor was enraged and ordered the three departments to conduct a thorough investigation. As for why this humble monk became involved, it was because that evil had attached itself to Hung-Hui, my junior brother. Jingchen's expression darkened. He urgently asked, Where is that evil now? Is Hung-Hui still alive? How did Defeng handle this matter? Didn't the government or was the evil resealed by the government? Suchan's lips curved into a slight smile, thinking, got him hooked. The old bald donkey listened as Suchan broke down the Sangbo case and the Pingyang princess case in a clear and logical manner, explaining how the two cases were connected and the secrets behind them. He shared everything with Jingchen. Jingchen said nothing for a long time, seemingly stunned by the intricacies of the case. The complexity of the intertwined events left him amazed. Jingchen's mind was filled with tumultuous thoughts. He thought of his uncle's efforts, who had presented the case before the emperor, revealing all the details. Yet here I am, merely guarding the inn, and I was the first to learn the whole story. He began to see how convoluted this case truly was, and to crack it required someone exceptional. Junior brother Huan, how did you come to know all of this? He asked. Suchan knew this would be Jingchen's inevitable question. He remained calm, forcing himself to counter his instinct not to lie. He replied, although the three departments were in charge of the case, the person who truly uncovered the truth behind the Sangbo case and the Pingyang princess case was a silver gong from the night watcher's office. His name is Suchan. This humble monk is acquainted with Sir Su, and because of junior brother Hung-Hui's involvement, I was drawn into the matter. That's how I came to know the details. Jingchen remembered the name. Silver Gong Suchan. Su Hongyuan slowly said, Senior brother, you may not know this, but Suchan is, in this humble monk's opinion, the most extraordinary person I've ever met. In terms of cultivation, he is a natural talent. There are few in all of Defeng who can compare to him. In terms of, he resolutely refuses to take even a thread or a needle from the people, dedicating himself to upholding justice. In solving cases, even among the numerous experts of Defeng, none can compare to him. In poetry, he's known as the greatest literary talent Defeng has seen in 200 years. It's said that the courtesans, including the famed Jiaofeng Si, are madly in love with him, but he remains indifferent. Jingchen was astounded. He never expected such a person to exist in the capital. A sharp gleam flashed through his eyes. Such a person truly exists? It's a shame he hasn't entered our Buddhist fold. Suchan grew wary. Damn, I overdid it. This guy is trying to convert me to Buddhism. He smoothly changed the topic, saying, I came to see you, senior brother, to ask one thing. What exactly is the evil being sealed beneath Sangbo? I know it's connected to Buddhism, but I can't understand why it was suppressed in Defeng Sangbo. Jingchen's expression turned unreadable. Su Hongyuan pressed further. Senior brother, is there some unspeakable difficulty? Jingchen replied, this matter is a Buddhist secret. Junior brother, you'd best not ask anymore. Su Hongyuan sneered. I understand now. I considered the Western sect to be family, but in the eyes of the senior brothers from my sect, I'm just an outsider. As he spoke, he stood and began to leave. I see now I was overthinking. I'll leave now. The Western sect is the Western sect, and Qinglong Temple is Qinglong Temple. They're not the same. Jingchen frowned, visibly displeased. Stop, he said. We are all Buddhist disciples, offering devotion to the Buddha. We are family. Those words you just said were unfair. Don't say them again. Su Hongyuan was inwardly pleased. It's working. But he remained calm outwardly, letting out a faint, cold snort. Jingchen sighed inwardly, then gestured for him to sit. Have a seat, junior brother, and I will tell you what I know. Qinglong Temple is the last remaining outpost of Western Buddhist teachings in Defeng. If the Western Buddhist sects wish to continue spreading their faith in the Central Plains, Qinglong Temple is an indispensable force. Given this context, the Western Buddhists place great importance on maintaining family-like ties with Qinglong Temple. Any distrust or division must be avoided and resolved. Jingchen explained, the evil entity is indeed related to our Buddhist sect. According to Uncle Dewey, it was a Buddhist traitor. Su Hongyuan narrowed his eyes slightly. As I suspected, the Shenshu monk was from within the Buddhist sect. If he was personally sealed by the Buddhists, what else could he be but a traitor? Jingchen sighed and said, don't ask who it was. After all, it's a Buddhist secret. The internal details of this matter are unknown even to me. Suchan wanted to use his Wangqi technique to see if he was lying, but he held back. Instead, he asked, why seal him? Why not simply send him on? Jingchen explained. After Pan Shu relayed the news back to the West, the Arhats and Bodhisattvas took it very seriously. They communicated the matter with thunderous urgency, a level of formality unseen since the battle at Shanhaiguan 20 years ago. During my journey eastward, I heard Uncle Dewey mention that the Mara monk cannot be killed. The implications of this statement were staggering, causing Suchan to stop asking questions. He paused to carefully consider what it meant. This implied that the Shenshu monk was sealed in Sangbo, not out of Buddhist compassion, but because he could not be killed. The Shenshu monk once claimed that he had reached the highest state of immortality by chance. However, remember that Buddhism has the Buddha, a being beyond all ranks. Even the Buddha could not kill the Shenshu monk. My God, the Shenshu monk is even more terrifying than I imagined. What kind of monster is he, exactly? Suchan muttered to himself, such a terrifying traitor is truly a great threat. Sealing him in Defeng, an ally, must have been a last resort. Otherwise, wouldn't sealing him right under their noses be even safer? Suchan mused aloud. I understand now. So that's why he couldn't be killed. No wonder he had to be dismembered and sealed. But why choose Sangbo? Jingchen said, that's a question I also wanted to know the answer to. I asked Uncle Dewey on the way here. Uncle told me. It stemmed from an agreement with Dai Feng's Wuzong Emperor 500 years ago. Suchan felt a bit regretful. 500 years ago, Buddhism was spreading throughout Defeng. Temples were springing up like mushrooms after the rain. There must have been a reason behind it. But most of the records from 500 years ago have been destroyed or altered. There's no way to investigate. After chatting a bit more, Suchan was sure he wouldn't get any more information, so he rose and took his leave. The monk personally escorted him out. As soon as he stepped out of the room, he saw a handsome young monk walking down the corridor. Senior brother Jingchen, the monk said, bowing. This is Hongyuan from Qinglong Temple. Please address him as senior brother. Suchan returned the bow, then turned to Jingchen and said, senior brother, you don't need to escort me further. Jingchen watched as Suchan walked away, lost in thought, staring after him for a long time. What's the matter, junior brother? Jingchen asked. I don't know why, the monk replied, but I feel he has a kind of endearing strength. Li Xian left the post station. He walked quickly along the main street. Although he still did not know Shenshu monk's true identity, he had at least confirmed a few things. First, it was certain he was a Buddhist traitor. The evidence was irrefutable. Second, his cultivation level was higher than expected, so high that even the Buddha couldn't kill him, although there was no proof that the Buddha had even made an attempt. Third, his role was only to help find the monk's identity and memories. The grudges between him and the Buddhist sect were something he absolutely would not get involved in unless he became a martial god, but that was impossible. Fourth, he must cling to this thick thigh, madly extracting benefits from it. Fifth, the existence of the Shunshu monk must not be revealed to anyone, not even to his father. This matter was simply too significant. Sixth, just as he was mulling this over and walking along, Suchan suddenly spotted a familiar figure in the crowd ahead. It was a tall, burly monk. Master Hunyuan also noticed him, and while pleasantly surprised, he was also taken aback by Suchan's attire. "Sir Su, why are you dressed like that?" Suchan, feeling awkward, wanted to flee, but forced a laugh and explained, "This is performance art." He quickly changed the topic, asking, "Master, are you heading to Sanyang-in?" Hunyuan nodded. "My sect's fellow monks have arrived. I must go and meet them." Suchan tried to keep his expression neutral. "Is it possible not to meet them?" Hunyuan looked confused. "Why not?" Suchan held back his thoughts, thinking, "Because you might get beaten up." Hunyuan observed him for a moment, then said, "I just came from the Su residence after having a vegetarian meal." Suchan was taken aback. "You went to my house? Why?" "Ah, to congratulate Erlang on passing the imperial examination." "Erlang didn't throw you out?" Suddenly, Suchan felt a surge of guilt. He realized that after taking advantage of his younger brother, he was now scheming against the kind and simple Master Hunyuan. He felt like a terrible person, filled with deep remorse. He pulled out a silver banknote worth 10 taels from his pocket. He earnestly placed the silver note into Hunyuan's hands. "Master, this is my contribution to the welfare hall's elderly and children." Hunyuan was genuinely moved. "Ba, Sir Su, you are truly a great philanthropist." The more Suchan thought about it, the more embarrassed he became. He quickly waved goodbye. As for whether Hunyuan would actually go to Sanyang-in, he didn't concern himself further. Not long after, Hunyuan arrived at the inn's entrance. The gatekeeping monk stared at him and "Has our Buddhist sect become so prosperous in Defeng?" Nevertheless, he stepped forward to stop Hunyuan and asked, "Where does this senior brother practice?" Hunyuan folded his hands. "I am from Qinglong Temple. I heard that our fellow monks are here, so I've come to pay my respects." As soon as he spoke, the gatekeeper's eyes widened, as if he had seen a ghost. "Is there a problem?" Hunyuan asked, puzzled. The gatekeeper looked him over carefully and said with a chuckle, "No problem. Please wait here, senior brother. I'll go inform them." With a neutral expression, he led Hunyuan inside. The more Hunyuan thought about it, the stranger it seemed. From the moment he introduced himself, the gatekeeper's expression had been odd, especially after he even seemed to show subtle hostility. Under the gatekeeper's guidance, they passed through the front courtyard and arrived at the rear courtyard. They entered an inconspicuous meditation room. Jingchen's sharp gaze scrutinized Hunyuan. "Qinglong Temple's Hunyuan?" he asked. Hunyuan folded his hands and intoned, "Yes, that is me." Jingchen replied, "Monks do not speak lies." Upon hearing this, Hunyuan's first instinct was alarm. He had to answer honestly. Hunyuan folded his hands again and said calmly, "That is indeed me." Jingchen fell silent. "I just used my law enforcer's ability," he thought. "I can confirm that this monk, who claims to be Hunyuan, isn't lying, unless he is also a law enforcer. If he can alter precepts himself, then here's the question. If this person is indeed Hunyuan, then who was that other person just now? And what was his purpose?" Jingchen carefully reviewed their earlier conversation. Suddenly, he realized the other party had come for the sealing item in Sangbo. If that was the case, then the nature of the matter was not simply an impersonation. It was not as simple as pretending to be Hunyuan. Since it involved the Mara monk, it had to be handled carefully. But the warrior monk from earlier also used the lion's roar. Even if he wasn't Hunyuan, he was certainly still a Buddhist monk. As for the one standing before him now, even if he truly was Hunyuan, was his arrival really just a visit? Did he have no other motives? A flurry of thoughts raced through Jingchen's mind. In an instant, he made up his mind and ordered, "Take him down." Immediately, several monks in green inner robes stepped forward and attempted to hold down Hunyuan's shoulders. Hunyuan's face darkened completely. It had been inexplicable from the start, and now they even wanted to resort to force. Anyone would have a temper after this. Hunyuan's internal energy surged, and with a loud bang, he easily sent several monks flying. Jingchen formed a hand seal with both hands, and chanted, "Body immovable, hands unmovable, mouth unspeakable." As the words fell, golden ripples radiated from the hand seal like water waves. They gently but firmly swept over Hunyuan. In an instant, Hunyuan seemed to be mired in quicksand. His thoughts still worked, but his body was no longer under his control. Still, he struggled against the precepts with brute force, trying to break free from the mire. Jingchen frowned. This monk, who claimed to be Hunyuan, was stronger than he had anticipated. he couldn't help but shout, "Take him down quickly." More warrior monks burst into the room. Several masters and meditation monks were too weak to fight. They had to rely on the warrior monks to subdue him. But before the warrior monks could close in, Huan broke free of the precepts. With a surge of internal energy, he let out a resounding Buddhist lion's roar, sending everyone flying. Then, moving at an incredible speed and leaving afterimages behind, he lunged at Jingchen. Huan was angry. He intended to teach his fellow monk from the west a lesson, but just as he was about to strike, another figure stepped in front of Jingchen. The person stood there like a golden statue, calmly watching Huan charge forward. With a gentle movement, he extended. His palm landed squarely on Huan's chest. It was as if a wooden beam had slammed into his chest, and Huan's body was sent flying, embedding itself in the courtyard wall. Only then did he come to a stop. The golden monk looked at Huan coldly. He had used a Buddhist secret technique, indestructible Vajra body. At that moment, Jingchen said coolly, "Stay at the post station. When Uncle Dewey returns, you will be questioned." Huan snorted coldly. Then he lunged forward again, this time not aiming for Jingchen, but for Jingxi. Caught off guard, Jingxi couldn't react in time, and was grabbed by his golden head. In the next moment, his body was weightless. As Huan lifted him like a chicken, with an over-the-shoulder throw, he slammed Jingxi against the wall. A loud bang rang out, and the wall connecting to the courtyard crumbled. Jingxi's body didn't stop. It kept flying backwards. Huan appeared again in a flash, his fist as big as a sandbag, making a loud creaking sound as he clenched it. He then slammed it down fiercely on Jingxi's golden head. A loud, metallic crunch echoed through the courtyard, but Huan didn't. He kept smashing that huge fist into Jingxi's face, producing a series of resounding clangs. Jingchen watched the scene unfold, his heart pounding with fear. He quickly stepped forward and shouted, "That's enough." Huan snorted coldly again. Only then did he stop, standing up and brushing the dust off his body. He looked coldly at Jingxi. He looked disdainful and said, "Just tough skin and thick flesh." At that point, the warrior monk's temper was finally vented. Suchan had always misunderstood Huan, thinking of him as a simple, gentle brute like Lu Zhishan. But in reality, Huan was a thug disguised under a cloak of honesty and simplicity. Only someone with a fiery temper would break into the Pingyuan family mansion at night, kill people, and then walk away as if nothing happened. But to Huan, Sir Su was a great philanthropist. Such a good person deserved to be treated with gentleness. It was early spring, and the sun hung low in the west. Dressed in a magnificent kasaya, Master Dewey returned with confidence. He paused at the entrance of the inn, then stepped into the inner courtyard. The courtyard was in chaos. The warrior monks were scooping up sand and debris from the shattered ground. Among them, the most diligent worker was a bald, unfamiliar figure. Master Dewey glanced at him a few times, but said nothing. Jingchen emerged from a building and conversed with Dewey in the Western language. He recounted the entire incident of the real and fake Huan in detail to Master Dewey. Master Dewey turned his head to look at the diligent Huan and asked, "Did he defeat Jingxi without any resistance?" Jingchen nodded and added, "Yes. However, Brother Jingxi wasn't injured. The Diamond Sutra isn't something just anyone can break through." Master Dewey did not comment further. Instead, he asked, "The first Huan, when speaking with you, did he mention anything about the evil being? Did he indicate he knew something about its origins, or any specific details about it?" Jingchen thought for a moment, then shook his head. He only mentioned that the sealing item beneath Sangbo was related to Buddhism. While recounting the case, he also said that he had seen that severed hand reside in his junior brother Hung-Hui. Master Dewey nodded. "I know who he is now. Go to the night watcher's office and find the officer in charge, Suchan. I need to speak with him." Elsewhere, Suchan had just left a brothel. His whole body felt light, as though his bones had turned to jelly. A short while later, Suchan returned to the Su residence, only to be greeted by a young woman in green who rushed out, saying, "Sir Su, you're finally back." Suchan cut straight to the point. "What is it?" The woman explained. "Not long ago, a high-ranking Buddhist monk came looking for you at the office. When he couldn't find you, he went to see Lord Wei. Lord Wei then asked me to wait here for you." Suchan was a little puzzled. It's just a monk, he thought. Why would Wayuan treat him with such formality? What's so special about some Westerner monk? When will the Eastern lands finally stand tall? This thought made him even more annoyed. He replied with a blank expression, "Got it, I'll see him." The woman breathed a sigh of relief, but then suddenly remembered something. "Lord Wei heard that you've been wandering around lately," she said, "instead of staying at the office awaiting orders, and he's quite upset. He said your 3 months' allowance is gone." Suchan immediately panicked. "I'll go see the Buddhist delegation now. Make sure to tell Lord Wei." When he arrived at the Sanyang Inn again, the sun was already hanging low in the west. The sunset cast a beautiful golden-red hue. Suchan said calmly, "I'm Suchan, the officer in charge of the Sangbo case. Master Dewey asked me to come. Lead the way." The gatekeeping monk recognized the man and froze for a moment, his thoughts flashing back to a particular figure. Taking a deep breath, he suppressed his anger and gestured for Suchan to enter. Suchan followed the monk into the inner courtyard. It looked as though a fight had just taken place. In the next moment, he saw a familiar figure. It was Wayuan, still busy cleaning up. Suchan felt a pang of sympathy for him. Just forget it, he thought. I'll be a good person from now on. Under the monk's guidance, Suchan entered a room. Inside were two monks. The one on the right sat above the other. The one on the left was Jingshan, whom he had met before. Suchan clasped his hands and bowed. Greetings, Master Dewey. The elder monk returned the bow and said gently, Sir Su, why did you disguise yourself as Wayuan, a martial monk from Qinglong Temple? Suchan responded seriously. I wanted to find out what's sealed beneath Sangbo. The Sangbo case is under my direct investigation, and I've discovered many secrets. The Yongzhen Shanha Temple was built atop a powerful seal, which kept an evil entity contained. When the temple was destroyed, the evil escaped. I personally inspected the underwater area and found that the remaining stone pillars of the formation were inscribed with Buddhist symbols. At first I thought the seal contained a former grand eunuch, but as the case progressed, and with Honghui's appearance, it turned out that what was sealed beneath Sangbo was a severed hand. This led me to suspect that the hand was connected to Buddhism. However, both the grand eunuch and the imperial family seemed to keep this matter shrouded in mystery. I, Suchan, have solved many major cases in the capital. There isn't a case I can't crack, but this question is like a thorn in my side, keeping me up at night and making me lose my appetite. Master Dewey nodded slowly and said, So that's why you made those inquiries earlier. Suchan nodded, tacitly agreeing with the explanation. He had already thought this through when pretending to be Wayuan. He presented himself as someone obsessively focused on solving cases. He was deeply troubled by the origins of the severed hand and the secrets it concealed. So when the Western delegation arrived in the capital, he impersonated Wayuan to gather information. His probing was carefully controlled. Every question was measured and never crossed the line. He never volunteered information about the identity of the sealed being. Instead, he fully embraced the role of someone who knew only part of the truth, not the whole picture. Master Dewey smiled and said, Sir Su, you want to know more about this evil? Suchan felt a surge of hope and let a bit of curiosity show. Will you share what you know, Master? The old monk chuckled. I can tell you, but you must join my Buddhist order, becoming a disciple under me. Suchan's expression froze, and he shook his head, declining. I'm on the path of martial arts, and I can't practice Buddhist disciplines. Master Dewey, seemingly prepared for this reply, calmly said, You can become a martial monk. Suchan's expression remained neutral, but he confirmed a long-held suspicion that martial monks and martial artists followed parallel paths. My assumption was correct, he thought. The martial monk system within Buddhism is designed for external disciples. What rank comes after the 8th rank for martial monks? He asked, grinning. If I become a martial monk, can I still marry and have children? Master Dewey shook his head. Although martial monks don't take formal vows of celibacy, they cannot marry or have children. This isn't a matter of cultivation, but of Buddhist rules. Once you join the order, you're considered monastic. Even martial monks are included in this rule. As a monk, how could you start a family? Suchan looked regretful. I truly admire the Buddhist way, he said, but as the sole heir of 9 generations, I just can't do it. Never mind. It seems I'm destined to have no connection to Buddhism. This is one of my life's greatest regrets. Master Dewey chuckled lightly. He hadn't expected Suchan to be so friendly toward Buddhism. He said with a smile, Sir Su, if you ever have questions, just come and ask. If it's something I can share, I'll tell you everything. There's no need to pretend to be a Buddhist disciple. Suchan quickly agreed. That's very kind of you, Master. Master Dewey nodded. Then he instructed Jingxi to see Suchan out. After Jingxi escorted Suchan out, Master Dewey summoned Wayuan into the room. Wayuan joined his hands in a bow and recited a chant. Uncle Master. Master Dewey asked, I heard from Jingshan that silver gong Suchan claimed to know you well. Wayuan nodded, not denying it. Master Dewey continued, and the earlier misunderstanding was all because of him? You harbor no resentment in your heart? Wayuan replied frankly, no matter what Sir Su does, this disciple can forgive and understand. In his heart, he added, because I owe number 32 lives, and I owe Sir Su 1. These are great debts of gratitude. Dewey bowed again, and asked, what kind of person is he? Wayuan thought for a moment, and said, I first met Sir Su during the Sampa case. At that time, I was implicated because of my junior brother Honghui. The silver gong of the night watchman then surrounded the place where Honghui and I were hiding. I thought that even if I escaped death, I'd be locked up in prison. Unexpectedly, Sir Su, as the chief investigator, immediately released me after discovering I was only tangentially involved, not Honghui's accomplice. Jingshan coldly hummed. At least he's a decent man. Wayuan continued. After leaving Qinglong Temple, I've been staying at a hospice in the southern city. That place takes in a group of homeless elderly and children. When Sir Su found out, he generously donated, regularly sending silver to help them. You know, he only earns 5 taels of silver a month. At the time, he was just a copper gong, but he never complained. He even consoled me, saying the silver was found. Heh, I secretly investigated him. He's unlike any other night watchman. He's never abused his power or exploited the people. That silver came from his own frugality. Dewey Master didn't say whether he agreed or not, but he calmly remarked, doing good doesn't mean being good. People have many faces. Wayuan frowned, feeling uneasy. He continued, let me tell you something else. Before the Sangpa case, he nearly struck down his superior to protect an innocent girl he didn't even know. Because of that, he ended up in jail, sentenced to exile. Had the Yongzhen Shanhe temple not been destroyed back then, and the court not in dire need of people, he would already have been executed. After carefully reflecting on Wayuan's words, and considering Suchan's prior behavior, they realized he wasn't blindly boasting. Master Dewey clearly noticed this as well. After a long thought, he asked again, does he have any unique traits? Wayuan considered before responding. Apart from his extraordinary talent, his martial prowess is remarkable. He has no other peculiarities. Master Dewey seemed a bit disappointed, but said, you may leave now. Once Wayuan exited the room, the monk Jingxian remarked, Master, Wayuan did not lie. By the looks of it, Suchan is indeed a kind-hearted man. Although his methods and demeanor may be off-putting, the handsome monk Jingxi added, then, how could he be connected to the evil entity? Master Dewey shook his head. He explained, the true mastermind behind this case is the remnants of the demon kingdom, the Yuanjing emperor, and Jianzhong. The first contributed passively, the latter watched indifferently. It has little to do with that silver gong. Since he's a good man, there's no need to make things difficult for him. Jingxian snorted coldly. They boast empty promises, repeatedly breaking their word. Why should we continue this alliance? I have no idea what the Arhats and Bodhisattvas are thinking. As one of the Arhats, Master Dewey gave a brief glance, before calmly explaining, the northern barbarians have demon god bloodlines, and have been entangled with the northern demons for millennia. In the southern regions, the barbarian tribes are numerous, and the 7 most powerful ancient clans are descendants of demon gods. The northeast Wushan sect already has a being beyond the mortal ranks. If we want the light of the Buddha to shine upon all corners of the land, we must ally with Dafeng. From Master Dewey's statement, the disciples Jinsheng and Jintz gleaned a crucial piece of information. The reason the Buddhist sect allies with Dafeng is that Dafeng lacks beings beyond mortal rank and has no entanglement with demon gods. Jinsheng cautiously asked, what should we do next? Are we supposed to keep pursuing the trail of the evil entity? Should we just let the matter in Dafeng go? Master Dewey said mysteriously, I've heard that due to the recent Tianyuan dispute among the Thieves Guild, many Jianghu figures have flocked to the capital. The government has set up 4 arenas in the outer city. Let's borrow 2 of them for our purposes. Jingxi, you will use your Vajra body to face off against the martial artists of the capital. Jinshin, pick an arena and start reciting sutras and giving sermons. As he spoke, he slowly stood up and walked out of the room. As for me, since I'm here in Dafeng, I might as well spread the influence of so that the Central Plains will not fail to recognize our power. That night, Suchan and his colleagues went together to the Jiafengxi. The same youthful Song Tingfeng had thickened his skin and tagged along, but Su Baopu wasn't pleased. While others were welcoming their partners, he was fretting about the expense. This is going to cost me at least 100 taels. Visiting Jiafengxi and chatting with the courtesans was supposed to be an elegant social gathering, free from vulgar transactions, but hosting so many colleagues and drinking together meant it couldn't be free. They drank deep into the night, and Su Qian kept muttering curses internally, while still cracking jokes about Li Yuchen. Make sure to keep the rhythm tonight, so I can sleep well, he said. Everyone, sway in time and don't lose the beat. The next day, Su Qian rode Erlang's steed back to the yamen. He arrived at Yidioting, where Li Yuan handed him a reimbursement form. This time, the banquet had 21 participants, she said. It was for praising the court and Wei Gong, and the total expense was 164 taels and 3 qian. Su Qian hesitated, feeling his reputation was at stake. So he instructed Li Yuan to deliver the claim. Not long after, Li Yuan returned. Wei Gong said that because you didn't write it yourself, it lacks sincerity. Therefore, the expense couldn't be reimbursed. Su Qian nodded. This showed that Wei Yuan wasn't happy, but was still willing to reimburse it. Rest assured, Wei Gong, I will do my utmost to repay your kindness, Su Qian vowed. He immediately wrote another reimbursement form, dried the ink, and folded it carefully before asking Li Yuan to run another errand. Not long after, Li Yuan returned again. Wei Yuan's reply was still a rejection. Su Qian got angry. What did Wei Gong say? He asked. Li Yuan hesitated for a long time before, cautiously replying, Wei Gong said your handwriting is too ugly, so it wasn't approved. Su Qian tilted his head back and howled in frustration. As a silver-ranked watchman, his monthly salary was 10 taels of silver. If Wei Gong didn't approve it, it meant he had spent about a year and a half's worth of wages last night. At that moment, Wei Gong's importance in his mind was halved. From that point on, the Spring Festival gave way to a new focal point. The upcoming civil examinations a month later. The phrase, achieving top honors, has always captured the hearts of many, from peasants in the countryside to the emperor himself. All placed great importance on the imperial exams. However, Yuan Jin's 37th year had been particularly eventful. First came the once-in-a-60-years thieves guild dispute, which was far more intriguing than the exams. Then the arrival of the Western region's delegation caused another sensation. The following day, a young, handsome monk appeared at the southern and made grand declarations. He claimed that with the Vajra divine skill of Buddhism, he would challenge the best martial artists of the Central Plains. That same day, he provoked an outcry among Jianghu heroes. One by one, they stepped forward to fight him, only to leave disheartened when they couldn't break his Vajra body. Meanwhile, in the northern city opposite the south, another monk from the western regions had seized the arena. However, instead of challenging Dafeng's masters, he set up a platform to preach. Crowds of townsfolk flocked to hear him speak, hanging on every word of his sermons. Some rogues wept openly, while hardened criminals vowed to reform. Even bachelors and families with single heirs found enlightenment and decided to become monks. The incident continued to escalate. Gradually, the public began to murmur. It's been 3 days. That young monk has never lost. Where are all those Jianghu experts who claim to be so skilled? How can none of them defeat a mere monk? What do you know? A man retorted. That's not an ordinary young monk. He's a high-ranking monk from the western regions. Even a child from the Western Buddhist order should not be underestimated. In the capital, there are so many high-level experts. Why hasn't anyone stepped forward to defeat that arrogant young monk? Because even the top experts hesitate. If they win, they'll be accused of bullying. If they lose, their reputation in the capital is finished. As more and more people joined the discussion, the sentiment increasingly turned against Dafeng's warriors. Some who had been hesitant before, after hearing these remarks, could no longer hold back and leapt into the ring. At the same time, in the southern city's Julong district, Suchan chuckled. Now this is worth watching. A challenger stepped up, a level 6 copper skin iron bones fighter. Wayuan commented. That's the Buddhist sect's unique Vajra body technique, far surpassing ordinary level 6 copper skin iron bones. Yuan interrupted. Wayuan master, is this the unique physique training method of the Western Buddhist sects? Yuan answered honestly. Indeed. Suchan listened intently. It's that impressive? The young monk used a body training technique that rivaled copper skin iron bones without needing any cooking or pounding. Yuan glanced at Suchan. Vajra Sutra is not something just anyone can master. Without a foundation in Buddhist teachings, it's impossible. Unless you're born with Buddhist roots. Suchan thought sarcastically. Buddhist roots, huh? Is that legit? At that moment, as his eyes swept through the crowd, he suddenly spotted a familiar face. Suchan immediately started walking downstairs. I ran into someone I know. I'll go take a look. Chuu Yuanjin's eyes followed him, and saw that his target was an older, rather plain-looking rich woman. He was momentarily at a loss for words, and said, Su Ningyan has rather unique tastes. Hearing that, Yuan lost his confidence, and replied weakly, being young and frivolous might not be a bad thing. Suchan teased, Auntie, why are you here again? Looking at your outfit, you don't seem like someone from a wealthy family. Isn't rice, oil, and tea enough for you? Why do you keep coming out to watch the excitement? The rich woman ignored him. Suchan wasn't embarrassed and kept rambling on. Are you so concerned about that man on the stage? Is he your husband? The old lady, apart from a coquettish glance, at the beginning, didn't respond again. She let him chatter endlessly by her ear. The fight on the stage didn't last long. A single incense stick's time later, the winner was clear. The 6th grade martial artist was hit in the chest by the monk's 3 strikes. He finally couldn't hold on and broke his hard technique. The man smiled bitterly and said, the Buddhist sect's invincible defense is no exaggeration. With that, he left the stage in silence, walking away quickly under the moonlight. The old lady stomped lightly and complained that the man had actually lost. Suchan laughed and said, it's like 2 knives clashing. If their strength is about equal, the better quality knife will win out. The Buddhist invincible defense is said to have come from Buddha himself. As for the martial artist's hardened skin and flesh, its quality is uneven, so it's no surprise he lost. The old lady turned her head, glanced at him, and said teasingly, you speak as if you know it all. Why don't you get on stage? Didn't you once kill a 6th grade martial artist with 1 strike? Suchan didn't pretend anymore, and directly asked, was it you who called someone to fight me that day? Auntie, whose wife are you? Where does your husband work? The old lady gritted her teeth and said, get up there and cut down that little monk, and I'll tell you. Suchan had worked hard to distance himself from the attention of the Buddhist delegation. He didn't want to have too many dealings with Buddhist monks, so, in the face of the old lady's provocation, he repeatedly shook his head, saying, I can't break his invincible diamond. The old woman's eyes filled with contempt, and she sneered, you're scared. At that moment, A swordsman from Qingshan leapt from a nearby tavern and lightly landed on the stage. The onlookers saw someone else challenging the little monk and immediately perked up, ready to enjoy the spectacle and discuss who this Qingshan. On stage, Chuu Yuanjin smiled slightly, calmly staring at the little monk Jing Si. I'll only if you can block it, I'll concede. Suchan frowned. Chuu Yuanjin? Why is he stepping in? Was it because the little monk Jing Si had been hogging the stage, embarrassing the court? The old lady standing next to him, who seemed to recognize the top scholar, became excited the moment she saw him take the stage, and started shouting. Jing Si stood unflinching, calmly gesturing please. Then Chuu Yuanjin made a motion that no one understood. He stretched his hand towards the sky, palm open. Just as everyone thought he was bluffing, and prepared to mock him, someone noticed a pebble rise from the ground at their feet. More and more pebbles began to lift off, swarming towards the Qingshan swordsman's palm. They collided in midair with a series of snaps. The stones fit perfectly together, forming a sword hilt. As the pebbles gathered, a 4-foot sword took shape. The crowd erupted in awe. Chuu Yuanjin was certainly showing off with this move. This ability to form a sword from thin air could only be described as a celestial feat. It was far more impressive than the Western monk who just stood there taking hits. After the sword was fully formed, Chuu Yuanjin leveled it and moved towards Jing Si. The monk had no way to dodge. With hands clasped in prayer, he neither retreated nor evaded. The move came too quickly to see clearly. In an instant, the wind roared and thunder clapped. A sudden gale sprang up, causing the surrounding people to stumble. Then came a piercing sound that seemed to tear through the eardrums, followed by an explosion of air waves that swept the onlookers off their feet. Fortunately, over the past 3 days, the crowd had experienced these so-called energy waves and knew not to stand too close to the stage. As a result, no one was injured, though many people ended up with bleeding ears. Before the first piercing sound, the old lady's ears had been covered by Suchan. When the explosions continued, he held her tightly against him. Perhaps never having been this close to a stranger, the old lady blushed furiously. She cried out in protest, waving her fists at Suchan. You lecher! How dare you take advantage of me? I'll kill you. Suchan was at a loss for words. Auntie, have a little self-awareness, would you? With your looks, I wouldn't take you even if you were free. As the two argued, Suchan suddenly noticed a snow-white hand in front of him, wearing a string of Buddhist prayer beads. A series of question marks flashed through Suchan's mind. These prayer beads. He remembered them from the time he had encountered Taoist Golden Lotus in the inner city. He had acquired a fragment of the Heaven and Earth book, along with a string of prayer beads, but those beads had been bought by someone sitting in a gilded Nanmu carriage. Suchan looked at them and felt his heart skip a beat. No way could it be that the woman Golden Lotus had said would have deep ties to him in the future was now sitting in a carriage made of gilded Nanmu. Could this old lady be a distant cousin of Yuan Jingdi or some other prince's concubine? What kind of connection could a woman like her have with me? No, I mustn't think like that. Maybe she has a daughter who's as beautiful as a flower and destined to meet me. But looking at her mediocrity, how could she have a stunning daughter? At this point, Suchan suddenly remembered something. He exclaimed, Did Chuu Yuanjin win? In the serene courtyard behind Lingbao Temple, Emperor Yuanjing and the national teacher were playing chess. The aged emperor, now with regrown black hair, fiddled with a chess piece. Inside, Chuu Yuanjin lost as well. The female national teacher responded, with just one casual strike. How can one speak of winning or losing? The emperor nodded. Regardless, it's boosted that young monk's reputation, and the Western region's Buddhist sect as well. His gaze fell upon a clean stroke on the chessboard. Your Majesty seems to think Li Kuei. Yuan Jingdi chuckled. Li Kuei exists, sure, but there's more than just that. What's more is helplessness. The young monk's talent is startling, but the capital has no rising stars to match him. It wouldn't do to send a military expert to fight him, would it? That would only be more embarrassing. Luo Yuung noticed that Emperor Yuanjing seemed to blame Chuu Yuanjin for not decisively defeating the young monk, and instead becoming a stepping stone for his fame. The emperor then added, that bald donkey didn't come here with good intentions. I doubt he'll return to the western region so easily this time. Luo Yuung asked directly, what do you want to say, Your Majesty? Speak plainly. Yuan Jingdi replied coolly. A few days ago, Master Dewey requested a meeting with Jianzhong. He refused. Tianzensi resides in the stargazing tower, detached from worldly affairs. If he continues to ignore the western region's monks, I'll need the national teacher's intervention. Luo Yuheng's attention returned to the chessboard. He realized he was on the verge of losing, but he remained calm, quietly shifting the positions of two pieces. In an instant, the game swung in his favor. Emperor Yuanjing was distracted for just a moment, and the third game was lost again. Frustrated, Emperor Yuanjing left Lingbao Temple, and on the way back to the palace, his expression was grim and somber. He ordered the elderly eunuch, Summon Wayuan to remove that little monk from the stage. I don't want to see him standing there anymore. The elderly eunuch bowed and replied, Yes, Your Majesty. In the quiet backyard of the southern city's health hall, Suchan sat with Chuu Yuanjin by the chessboard. How many levels of strength did you use just now? Chuu Yuanjin shook his head and gave a seemingly unrelated reply. The path that young monk walks is similar to yours, yet opposite to it. Suchan realized. Chuu Yuanjin meant that Jingxi the monk relies solely on his invincible diamond skill. In this, he is similar to Suchan's single strike power, but opposite in that one is offensive, the other defensive. Suchan asked, So, do you think my blade can break his shield? Chuu Yuanjin pointed out, Your heaven and earth single strike is powerful, and it has become flawless since incorporating the essential techniques. But in my opinion, it lacks a soul. When you perform the heaven and earth single strike, it's just a heaven and earth single strike. But when I use my technique, it's not just swordsmanship, it's driven by my spirit. When I'm lazy, my sword energy is lazy. When I'm calm, my sword energy is calm. But when I'm angry, my blade can pierce the heavens. This is spirit. This is soul. This is the essence of the 4 grades and 5 martial paths. Suchan, somewhat speechless, said, But you just said, that's the essence of the 4 grades and 5 martial paths. I'm just a mere 7th grade refined mind mirror practitioner. Chuu Yuanjin replied coolly, I can teach you to nurture spirit. If you cultivate it to a high level, it will be like having the 4 grades and 5 martial paths ability in advance. Of course, the effect will be much less potent, but combined with your heaven and earth single strike, it will be enough to break that Buddhist invincible diamond. From then on, Suchan listened as Chuu Yuanjin explained the key points of nurturing spirit. Even Chuu Yuanjin didn't mind, as Suchan quietly observed and learned. Suchan tried to channel his spirit into the blade, but he failed. Frustrated, he asked, It sounds easy enough to say, but how do you actually infuse spirit into the blade? You're too calm, neither joyful nor sad, neither worried nor angry. How can you nurture spirit like that? Chuu Yuanjin thought for a moment, and then beckoned him over. Come here. I actually have a quick method. Suchan walked over immediately. Chuu Yuanjin suddenly slapped him. Suchan wasn't prepared at all, leaving him utterly bewildered. Angry, he exclaimed, What the hell, brother Chuu? You did that on purpose, didn't you? Chuu Yuanjin didn't feel awkward at all, and asked, Could you draw spirit into the blade? Suchan rolled his eyes. Knowing it didn't work, it was completely ineffective. Chuu Yuanjin suddenly lunged at him, continuing to slap him repeatedly. Suchan tried his best to fend him off, but he still received over a dozen slaps. Facing Chuu Yuanjin's relentless attack, he finally lost his temper. At that moment, Suchan felt a strong urge to let out his inner frustration. With a swoosh, a razor-sharp blade emerged, distorting the air. Chuu Yuanjin beamed and said, See? It works. Suchan realized that the strike he just unleashed exceeded the usual limits of his blade energy. If combined with his heaven and earth single strike, its power would reach an entirely new level. Chuu Yuanjin said with admiration, Ordinary people would need 3 to 5 days, at least, to understand this. You truly are a genius. Suchan quipped, No, you're the real genius at teaching. But if every time I perform this strike, I have to get beaten first, isn't that too much of a loss? Chuu Yuanjin replied, That's why I said the basics are easy, but mastering it is hard. Right now, your spirit still requires external provocation. Unable to perform it at will, Suchan felt that his cultivation path had fallen into some sort of irreversible state. He now had one more secret technique to practice, yet he was still that boy, who had nothing left after a single strike. However, the power he could unleash was growing stronger and stronger. Who knows if there would come a day when he could truly become a master, and no one could withstand a single strike from him. Night fell. The monk returned to the post house, and went straight to see Master Dewey. With hands clasped in prayer, he said, Master, Jianzheng, still won't see you. In the orange candlelight, Master Dewey nodded slowly. Understood. Write it down. After the monk left, Master Dewey closed his eyes again. A golden light burst forth from the top of his head. The golden light rose steadily, piercing the night sky. The night sky churned with rolling clouds, and within the roiling black clouds, a glimmer of gold appeared. Soon, a torrent of golden light engulfed the entire capital. The clouds trembled violently, and a Buddha's face emerged from them. The Buddha's visage was enormous, its single face spanning half the city. Suchan woke suddenly from his dream, his face pale as he rushed out of the room. He looked up at the sky, and saw a golden Buddha face overlooking the capital. He was stunned by the sight. It was as if a Buddha had descended, gazing down upon the mortal world from the heavens. The doors to the east wing and the adjacent room opened simultaneously. Erlang asked tremulously, Father, brother, is the Western region's Buddhist sect about to act in the capital? At that moment, the Buddha's visage spoke, its voice like thunderclaps. The sound waves echoed throughout the city. Why does Jianzheng not dare to see me? Suchan's legs trembled, and he struggled to stay upright, refusing to kneel. Damn it! The high-level combat power of this world truly is terrifying. Su Pingji lacked that kind of willpower. The moment the voice rang out, his knees buckled, and he dropped straight to the ground. Yet amidst the fear, a sense of humiliation welled up within him. Su Ershu propped himself up on the ground, gritting his teeth and muttering, "I'd rather resign. Don't blame me." But after yelling this, Su Pingji didn't get any response from his nephew or son. When he looked up, he saw his son clutching a wolf post for support, his nephew leaning against the doorframe, both stubbornly staring up at the clear night sky. For a moment, the oppressive atmosphere was at a standstill. Su Qian couldn't help mocking in his heart. Look at that coward Su Erlang. All his energy is spent on anti. Even Su Pingji silently disdained his own father's disgraceful behavior. If you kneel, then kneel. But why shout about it? Thank goodness no outsiders are here. Su Erlang tentatively asked, "Big brother, what do you think this Buddhist monk plans to do? You work for the yamen, right? You must know some inside information." Su Qian replied, sounding sure of himself. "There was a little conflict, but it's not as serious as you think. I'm not entirely sure of the details." Over at Daoqi Tower, Wayuan stood on the lookout platform, wearing a green robe, looking up at the Buddha face that covered half of the capital. His expression was calm, his posture straight. The green robe fluttered violently in the wind, as if staring down the Buddha's visage. In the tea room behind him, Yang Yin and Nangong Qianro sat cross-legged, heads bowed, struggling to withstand the faint, oppressive aura. The higher their cultivation level, the greater the pressure they felt. Wei Yuan declared, "If Su Qian were here, I can guarantee he'd be standing. No matter how, he'd still be standing." Yang Yin and Nangong Qianro felt a tinge of shame at his words. They knew Wei Gong spoke the truth. As for themselves at that moment, even so, they couldn't achieve what Su Qian could. Out of the hundreds of thousands of people in the capital, martial artists were countless. Among them were the many Jianghu figures recently arrived. Tonight, every one of them trembled in fear, as if facing the end of the world. But at the palace, it seemed insulated from the oppressive presence. Accompanied by the elderly eunuch, Emperor Yuan Jing emerged from his chambers, entirely unaffected. He looked up, gazing at that enormous Buddha face. With a cold snort, he turned to the everlasting mountain and river temple built by Sangbo. There, relics of the founding emperor still carried their awe-inspiring presence. At that moment, a soft, pleasant laugh echoed across the land. Luo Yuung emerged, his hair whipping in the wind. He stretched out his pale right arm, his 5 fingers suddenly clenching. From the pool, a rusty, ancient sword burst forth. The sword energy soared into the sky, and in no time, it formed a massive arc-shaped energy barrier, a dome over 100 meters wide. Moments later, that radiant sword light illuminated the golden sky and the golden visage, their lights interweaving. The once fine line of energy now surged to unimaginable proportions. The Buddha visage let out a cold snort. 2 massive hands emerged from the rolling black clouds, enveloping the brilliant sword light in their palms. The next moment, a deafening thunderclap. The Buddha visage's hands disintegrated into golden particles, mingling with the vivid sword light. Together, they created a resplendent rainbow of color, gradually fading into the night. The beautiful female national teacher gazed coldly at the sky, her expression devoid of any emotion. Emperor Yuan Jing, still in the palace, looked in that direction as well, silently cursing the old bald donkey. Meanwhile, at Haoqi Tower, Wei Yuan's furrowed brow relaxed. He knew that Luo Yuung had taken action. After a single incense stick's time, the sky returned to calm, and Su Qian's mood grew more complex. It was Luo Yuung who acted just now, as expected of a second-grade expert. If that sword strike had been aimed at me, then wouldn't I be? If I had known from the start how fierce this woman was, I definitely wouldn't have dared to stare at her chest back then. Su Erlang muttered, his back going cold. The red and golden lights had faded, as if nothing had happened at all. Su Pingji got up slowly, and teased, the advantage of youth. The body is still strong. Not like me. When caught off guard, I couldn't even stay standing. But back in the day, your father was a real hero, never flinching, charging back and forth through a sea of enemies. This time, I'll be ready. If it happens again, I definitely won't lose my composure. But before he finished speaking, a dull rumble echoed through the night sky. The calm clouds started churning again, and deep within the clouds, a red glow emerged. As the rumbling continued and the clouds swirled, another visage appeared. Unlike the previous one, this visage was more vivid, more lifelike. Its Buddha face looked even more menacing. With a loud crash, Su Pingji, once so proud of his resilience, fell to his knees again. But this time, neither Su Xinlian nor Su Qian laughed at him. They weren't much better off themselves. Both were half kneeling, propping themselves up with their hands. At that moment, a door creaked open. Little Doubting stepped over the threshold, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, it's so noisy outside." Su Pingji shouted anxiously, "Get back inside. Don't come out." But Little Doubting didn't seem to hear, tilting his chubby face upwards and pointing at the sky. "Look, There's an immortal up there. He stared at it with awe and delight, completely unaffected by the oppressive aura of the visage. Over at the everlasting mountain and river temple, Luo Yuung glanced over and remarked dismissively, "The Diamond Buddha of the 9 great Buddhist visages. This can only be performed by a first-grade bodhisattva." Saying this, he turned and walked back inside. "For now, it's best left to Jianzhong. Besides, it's not really my concern." At that moment, on the Stargazing Tower's 8 trigrams platform, an elderly Jianzhong with white hair, beard, and robes stood at the platform's edge, his hands clasped behind his back. The night wind stirred his beard as he quietly prayed. "The promise back then was between you and the royal family. It has nothing to do with..." The massive, boundless visage began to speak. Its voice rumbled like thunder, yet only Jianzhong could hear it. "If not for our Buddhist sect's intervention, would you have reached first grade? And now that the divine scroll has emerged, if you don't give the Buddhist sect a proper explanation, I will personally come for you one day." Jianzhong sneered. "Dare to come? I'll send you straight into reincarnation. What do you Buddhists want?" The diamond visage roared. "What do you want? You know well that if the divine scroll regains its body, it will bring untold disaster upon the Buddhist sect." Jianzhong countered. "Do you not realize the continued sealing of the divine scroll in Sangbo would bring equally great disaster to Dafeng?" The diamond visage retorted. "This is the mess your imperial court made. Why should the Buddhist sect clean it up?" Jianzhong, growing impatient, said, "Enough. Your words are meaningless. You only have half a quarter of an hour. Say what you have to say and be done with it. Stop disturbing the people of the capital." The diamond visage laid out its terms. 2 conditions. First, trace the whereabouts of the treacherous remnants of the myriad demon nation. Recover the broken pieces. Second, lend us the celestial compass for 3 years. Jianzhong replied coolly, "If you have the guts, come take it." The diamond visage snorted coldly and reluctantly dispersed. Suchan looked up at the sky. That towering, the awe-inspiring diamond visage that resembled a divine being had dissipated. There hadn't been any earth-shattering battle. He wondered why there had been no fight. It seemed that the Buddha figure was talking to someone, but no sound could be heard. Su Pingji and Su Erlang let out a long breath, their bodies seeming drained of energy. Suchan called out, "Lining, stop just standing there. Come over and help your father and brother back to their rooms." The little doubting pointed at himself in disbelief, as if asking, "Are you serious?" Su Pingji lost his patience. He yelled at his nephew, "Get over here. What use are you after 20 years of raising you?" Suchan quickly stepped in to help, assisting his uncle and Erlang back to their rooms. Shortly afterward, Suchan returned to his own room. In his mind, he reached out to the sacred scroll monk. Master, did you see what just happened?" A moment later, the ethereal voice of the sacred scroll resounded in his ear, but Suchan saw the dense mist in his mind. It gathered and dispersed naturally. He said sincerely, "It's nothing really. I just saw something big happening, so I thought I'd share it with you." The sacred scroll warned him, "From now on, don't call my name in your mind when you're in the presence of powerful Buddhist monks." Suchan nodded, then recounted the scene that had unfolded in the night sky over the capital. Cautiously he asked, "A few days ago, I tested the monks. They seem to have some understanding of your identity." The sacred scroll monk's gentle face grew solemn. "What did you find out?" he asked. Suchan replied, "The monks said that you're a traitor to Buddhism and that they couldn't kill you, so they had to seal you away." The sacred scroll monk murmured the words, "traitor to Buddhism," his expression gradually shifting. There was a hint of both sadness and anger in his eyes. The mist in that hidden mental world quivered, rushing and churning like a river. After a long while, he calmed himself. The sacred scroll monk said quietly, "You did well. You've reminded me of some old memories." Suchan felt a small sense of relief. "What past memories, sir? Can you share them with me?" But just as the thought arose, the mist before his eyes closed in, and the entire world began to fade away. He was kicked out of the conversation. Suchan collapsed onto the bed. "A lot had happened recently. That old aunt has some connection with me. I'll ask Taoist Jinlian later what kind of connection it actually is. Otherwise, it's going to nag at me. I'm not sure when the Buddhist delegation will leave. During this time, I'll just keep a low profile. Master Dewey is stronger than I imagined. My mental strength has reached a peak now. I might as well try to break through." But after witnessing the wondrous subtleties of the diamond techniques, I'm starting to look down on the copper skin and iron bones approach of warriors, and the sacred scroll master's memory is fragmented. Without this skill, the gap is as vast as between a foster child and their true family. Learning such a profound art is tough. He lay there, letting his thoughts wander. Suddenly, a familiar sensation of the starry link surged. Number 1 transmitted to the Taoist. The leader of the Western region's delegation, Master Dewey, is incredible. Suchan looked at the message, surprised. Rarely did the enigmatic and verbose number 1 send something on his own. Taoist Jinlian replied, "Dewey is a second-grade arhat, a killer of evildoers." Suchan wore a puzzled expression. "A second-grade arhat? That matches my guess." But what's this killer of evildoers thing? Chuu Yuan sent a message. Killer of evildoers is Buddhist terminology. Arhats have 3 ranks: killer of evildoers, non-returner, and arhat. Among them, the arhat rank is the highest. Killer of evildoers and non-returner are on par. Suchan nodded repeatedly. I see. Even though I don't fully understand it, it sounds impressive. Chuu Yuan added, but I feel the second visage that appeared tonight was ridiculously strong. The first visage was at the level of a killer of evildoers, manifested solely by Master Dewey's own power. The second visage's presence felt even more vast, even more imposing. Taoist Jinlian added, that's the Diamond Wrath visage, one of Buddhism's 9 great visages. Chuu Yuan suddenly realized, no wonder, it was a bodhisattva who intervened. Suchan thought for a moment, then instinctively glanced around, a chill creeping down his spine. It was the kind of panic a thief feels upon hearing a whistle. A first-grade bodhisattva wouldn't come looking for me at home, would they? Calm down, he reassured himself. Every system has its specialties. Blocking heavenly secrets is a sorcerer's forte. I have to trust in Jianzhang's abilities. This was the only way he could console himself. At that moment, Li Miaozhen suddenly asked in the chat, what are you all talking about? What's this about a visage appearing tonight? Heng Yuan explained through the communication channel. A Buddhist delegation arrived in the capital. They stirred up some commotion. Tonight, there was a visage over the capital. Chuu Yuan interjected, Li Miaozhen, why aren't you in the capital yet? Li Miaozhen chuckled. Wouldn't it be better to let you live a few more days? Suchan couldn't help but think, hey, a lady shouldn't speak so provocatively. You should win people over with virtue. Suchan mounted his horse and rode to the night watchman's yamen, heading straight for the rank C secret archives. He instructed the archive keeper to bring out all the files related to Buddhism. The Buddhist files were overwhelming in volume, piled higher than a person. Suchan spent an entire hour sifting through them, and finally found what he was looking for. In terms of sheer size, Buddhism dominated the stage. The entire Western Buddhist kingdom was sprawling, and the territory of the Western region was twice that of Dafeng, 3 times that of the Northern lands, and 3 to 5 times that of the Northeast. Based on the information Princess Huiqing and I uncovered, 400 years ago, Buddhism was flourishing in the Central Plains, clearly showing a trend toward becoming the state religion. But at the time, Confucianism was at its peak. Pardon my bluntness, where everyone else was considered trash in comparison. Confucianism directly pushed for the suppression of Buddhism, and Buddhism, remarkably, didn't retaliate violently. They simply retreated from the Central Plains. Now I have 2 hypotheses. Either the Confucians at the time were indeed overwhelmingly powerful, or the Buddhists didn't dare to openly clash with Dafeng, because they still relied on Dafeng to seal the sacred scroll. If the Confucians hadn't weakened, then with the strength of the Confucians and the first-generation Jianzhang, Dafeng would undoubtedly be the dominant power in the 9 prefectures. Suchan left the secret archives and went straight to the Haoqi building. A gray-haired grand eunuch was basking in the sun. In a light robe, looking relaxed, the eunuch asked, did you kneel last night? Suchan scoffed. Not even a twitch of my foot. Wayuan reassured him. The seal at Sangpa didn't break. No matter what, it was a failure on Dafeng's part. The high-ranking Buddhist monk was just throwing a tantrum. No need to dwell on it. Suchan's lips curled into a slight smile. Lord Wei thinks I came because I'm worried about yesterday. You think I'm on the 1st level, but actually, I'm on the 18th. Not only do I know a bodhisattva acted yesterday, I also know the whereabouts of the sacred scroll. Suchan asked straightforwardly, why does Dafeng help Buddhism seal the evil? Wayuan hesitated for a moment. Did you uncover something? Suchan immediately replied, when investigating the Sangpa case, I stumbled upon a piece of history. 500 years ago, the crown prince fell into the water at Sangpa and fell ill soon after. He didn't live long. 500 years ago, Emperor Wuzong seized the throne. 500 years ago, Western Buddhism suddenly began spreading in the Central Plains. There are runes beneath Sangpa's bottom layer. Based on these clues, I deduce that the evil was sealed 500 years ago, correct? Wayuan pondered for a long time, then slowly nodded. Correct. The object sealed beneath Sangpa comes from a deal between Buddhism and Emperor Wuzong. Back then, Emperor Wuzong was known for his martial prowess. He had countless elite troops under his command. But to seize the throne, he had one obstacle he could never bypass. And that obstacle could even cause his grand ambitions to crumble. That was the first Jianzhang of the Directorate of Celestial Affairs, a first-rank master in the sorcerer system. As long as Dafeng maintained the national foundation, no one could shake their position. Faced with such a powerful first-rank obstacle, one that couldn't be bypassed, Emperor Wuzong chose to cooperate with the Western Buddhist sect. That event marked the beginning of the alliance between the Western Buddhists and Dafeng. The Buddhists helped Emperor Wuzong eliminate the first Jianzhang. In return, Emperor Wuzong agreed to allow Buddhist preaching in the Central Plains and to seal the evil on their behalf. The last time Jianzhang stood by his Sangpa was breached and watched indifferently, already counted as breaking the agreement. Suchan drew a sharp breath. Whoa, so that's what happened. I was wondering, How did Emperor Wuzong succeed in taking the throne? Where did the first Jianzheng go? If the Buddhists were involved in the struggle for the throne, and they had the Buddha, an existence beyond ranking, on their side, then taking down a top-tier sorcerer like Jianzheng would make perfect sense. Wait a second, then what role did the current Jianzheng play in all this? He knows about the remnants, and he had the severed arm of the sacred scroll monk lodged in me, and even secretly helped me. What is he plotting? Isn't he afraid of the Buddha coming after him with divine wrath and wreaking havoc? Suchan cautiously asked. Why would Jianzheng risk releasing the evil? Wayuan chuckled softly, responding cryptically, who knows? Then he changed the subject. At today's morning court, the Grandmaster of Evil from the Buddhist delegation appeared before the emperor. He proposed a debate and a duel of Dharma techniques with Jianzheng, with the heavenly mystery plate and the Diamond Sutra as the stakes. The emperor agreed. He sent someone to ask the Directorate of Celestial Affairs, and Jianzheng agreed too. This afternoon, they'll post the yellow bulletin. There'll be plenty of excitement to see in the capital. For some reason, Suchan suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. A deep, ominous feeling crept over him. Last night, the high-ranking Buddhist monk caused a huge commotion. This morning, the people in the capital were abuzz with discussion. The recently stabilized public order became restless again, prompting the night watchmen to patrol the streets. Liuchen and his group, who had just returned to the capital, were also making preparations. Suchan immediately stopped their leader. Take my men and patrol that side. I'll take Tingfeng and Guangxiao and patrol the other side. Liuchen countered. Why arrange it so haphazardly? You take your people, and I'll take mine. No need for this mix and match. Suchan thought for a moment and said, fine. You take the Gong patrol that side, and I'll take the brothers to the other side. That way it won't be chaotic. Liuchen, thinking it over, felt much better. All right, go ahead. As he watched Liuchen's group leave, Suchan took his two colleagues into the brothel. Familiar with the place, he requested a private booth on the second floor. He called for a few pretty girls to serve drinks. Song Tingfeng sighed. I wanted to turn over a new leaf, but I'm always surrounded by these scoundrel friends. Suchan couldn't be bothered to respond. Fine. We all know you're still the same old boy at heart. Madam, quickly bring out the most beautiful girls in the house. Before long, a group of charming young women came upstairs. Song Tingfeng's enthusiasm for work instantly vanished, replaced entirely by thoughts of the beautiful company. Suchan teased. What do you say? How about you go back out on patrol, and leave these girls to me? Song Tingfeng laughed awkwardly. No need. I'll listen to a few songs, before heading back out. Suchan almost burst out laughing, when suddenly the sound of a cup smashing came from downstairs. A drunk swordsman pointed at the crowd and shouted angrily, I've long heard of the decadence of the capital, nobles and commoners alike indulging in luxury. I didn't believe it at first, but in just a short time in the city, I've seen nothing but pigs wallowing in wine and meat, a stinking mess of corruption. The North and South chivalrous heroes, silenced by the arrogance of these shameless monks. Days have passed and not a single expert has stepped up. Everyone just stands by and watches. Last night, a Buddhist master's Dharma figure descended upon our capital, challenging our Directorate of Celestial Affairs Jianzheng. How can we tolerate this? And the court does nothing? Has our Dafeng truly grown so afraid of the Buddhist sect? Remember the battle at Shanhaiguan Pass 20 years ago? Dafeng was so powerful back then. Song Tingfeng put down his wine cup, pushed away the woman snuggled against him, and muttered, what a mood killer. Suchan chuckled. Let's just drink. Ignore the noise. If the sky falls, it's not our problem. With that, he added silently to himself, Masters, please keep it up. Make Yuanjing Emperor lose more face. It'd be great if the historians note. In Yuanjing's 37th year, the Western region's delegation entered the capital. A young monk dominated the stage for 5 days without a challenger. An elder monk projected a Dharma figure to question the court. Another stain on Yuanjing's reign. At that moment, a white-clad yamen runner with a gong hurriedly ran past on the street. He struck his gong and shouted, the Directorate of Celestial Affairs is challenging the Buddhist masters to a duel. Come to the announcement board and see the imperial decree. When Suchan, Song Tingfeng, and Zhu Guangxiao arrived at the inner city, the square in front of the city gates was packed with commoners and martial artists. The city guards and a few night watchmen maintained order. Suchan took off his saber, growling irritably, stop pushing, stand still, no moving around. Seeing that the night watchman had arrived, the crowd quickly parted. Suchan and his two colleagues walked in easily. The notice was simple. It essentially said that the delegation from the western regions was warmly welcomed by the court. After friendly exchanges, a sustainable development plan was agreed upon, strengthening relations between the two nations, promoting mutual progress, and fostering prosperity through hard work. But Song Tingfeng, not very savvy, couldn't make sense of it. What is all this nonsense? He grumbled. They're babbling a lot, but still haven't explained how the duel will work. The taciturn Zhu Guangxiao explained. The Western monks want to challenge the Directorate of Celestial Affairs to a duel, calling it a technical exchange. The Directorate of Celestial Affairs agreed readily. Both sides We'll hold a grand magical duel on the observatory's main plaza tomorrow. City residents are welcome to attend and watch. Song Tingfeng grumbled. All those words just for this? Do official documents really need to be so long-winded? As Suchan pondered, he noticed that Li Yuchen was arriving with his team. Li Yuchen saw that order was well maintained and was pleased. Since returning from Yunzhou, you three have finally shaken off your laziness and become more mature and reliable. The three brothers, fresh out of the brothel, smiled cheekily and replied, "Does this mean we've grown up?" Under the bright noonday sun, Chu Kaiwei was seated on the observatory platform. "Master, are you planning to fight personally?" The monitor sipped wine and enjoyed the sunshine, relaxed and carefree. "Kaiwei, if I were to fight, they'd have to send a bodhisattva to face me. Dewey just wants to challenge my methods, not battle me directly." Chu Kaiwei tilted her head. "Then who will you send?" "Senior sister Zhong is plagued by misfortune. She'd defeat the enemy but suffer immense losses herself. Senior brother Song and I are both alchemists, not skilled in combat. Second senior brother isn't in the capital. Only senior brother Yang can go." The monitor sighed. "It's most unfortunate. Your senior brother Yang went astray during practice yesterday and can't fight now." Chu Kaiwei was shocked, suddenly losing her appetite for the pastries she held. Frowning delicately, she worriedly asked, "What should we do then?" The monitor reassured her. "I'm troubled too. That's why I need you to visit the palace and ask His Majesty for someone." Meanwhile, Yuanjing Emperor was leading a group of officials in studying Taoist scriptures, listening to the female national master expound on their profound meanings. However, he couldn't focus. Luo Yuung softly asked, "Your Majesty, are you worried about the duel?" Yuanjing hesitated, then said, "While I have faith in the monitor, if we lose to the Buddhists this time, how can the Great Feng maintain its dignity if we lose?" Luo Yuung noted, "The warlock system is somewhat special. Not being primarily combat-oriented indeed makes it less reliable. In all current systems, the warlock system has the weakest combat power. Its strengths lie not in personal combat, but in bolstering national strength. The Great Feng military's invincibility is largely due to superior armaments, sophisticated engineering, artillery, and other machinery. All come from the Directorate of Celestial Affairs. No other system can achieve this. A 9th-rank physician heals injuries. An 8th-rank fortune weaver and a 7th-rank feng shui master improve the imperial geomancy, enhancing the nation's fate. These are powerful support skills. Even a 4th-rank artifact refiner is mainly a support role, excelling not in battle, but in crafting powerful tools. The warlock system needs the dynasty's support. The two share a symbiotic relationship. Luo Yuung suggested, "Your Majesty, why not invite the Dean of Yunlu Academy? Among all systems, the martial artists are the strong. But if we consider which system is the most well-rounded with no weak points, only the Confucianists fit the bill. They can handle any situation. No matter how sophisticated the Buddhists' techniques, the Confucianists can always resolve them." Yuanjing Emperor shook his head. "National Master, last year I wished for Dean Zhao to step in. He refused." Luo Yuung sighed. He understood the unspoken meaning. Even Yuanjing Emperor couldn't compel the Yunlu scholars. At that moment, the head eunuch rushed in and reported, "Your Majesty, news from the palace. Chu Kaiwei of the Directorate of Celestial Affairs requests an audience by her master's order." Yuanjing pondered for a moment. "She's here on her master's orders? Let her come to Lingbao Temple." Chu Kaiwei received the summons and immediately arrived at Lingbao Temple. She bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Greetings, National Master." The Yuanjing Emperor scrutinized the Directorate of Celestial Affairs and the junior disciple in the white-robed warlock's eyes. "Your master sent you here. For what purpose?" Chu Kaiwei carefully replied, "It's like this. Our third senior brother, Yang Qianhuan, accidentally went astray in cultivation yesterday. Our second senior brother isn't in the capital, and senior brother Song and I are not adept at fighting." Before she could finish, the Yuanjing Emperor frowned and interrupted. "What? Yang Qianhuan went astray in cultivation?" Chu Kaiwei calmly continued, "Therefore, Master Jianzheng instructed me to ask Your Majesty for someone's help, someone from the Directorate of Celestial Affairs, to face the bald monks from the western region." The Yuanjing Emperor frowned and asked, "Then who does Jianzheng want?" Chu Kaiwei's crisp voice rang out. "The night watchman's silver gong, Suchan." A sudden silence fell over the room. After a long pause, Suchan cautiously asked, "Me? You want me to participate in the duel?" The Yuanjing Emperor calmly explained, "Duel challenges typically consist of literary and martial contests. Both Dewey and Jianzheng are top-tier experts, and they won't step into the ring themselves. It's usually a matter for their disciples." Suchan felt puzzled. "I understand all that. The masters sit behind the scenes giving guidance, while their disciples fight. But what does that have to do with me?" At that moment, the Yuanjing Emperor said calmly, "Jianzheng recently nominated you to take the challenge." Suchan looked up sharply, a disbelieving expression on his face. "What's that crafty old man up to? He knows I have the divine monk's remnant inside me, and yet he still insists on sending me before the Buddhist monks." Suchan immediately said, "I am far too inexperienced, and I lack the talent and knowledge for such a task. Please, your majesty, allow me to decline. The Yuanjing emperor snorted coldly. Jianzheng has made up his mind, and that won't change. I didn't summon you here to hear excuses. This duel concerns the dignity of the great foe. You must find a way to win this. Suchan really wanted to slap him twice. Damn it. Do you even know my level? Have you thought about why I would win? Over at Lingbao Temple, a woman adorned with beautiful accessories entered without announcement, walking straight to the pond by the pavilion in Lingbao Temple. Nearby, the elegant and poised female, National Master Luo Yuung, was meditating. The woman, hiding behind the rockery, secretly picked up a pebble. Taking advantage of the moment, she threw it at Luo Yuung. But as the pebble got within 3 feet of Luo Yuung, it was suddenly deflected by a barrier of qi, hitting the woman square on the forehead instead. Ow! She cried. Clutching her forehead, she angrily said, "Just because you're a second-rank expert, does that mean you can bully people at will?" Luo Yuung opened her eyes and sighed. "Why are you here? Don't disturb my cultivation if there's nothing important." The woman lifted her skirt and approached the pond. Excitedly, she said, "The Buddhist sect wants to duel with Jianzheng. There's a spectacle tomorrow, but the dueling arena will be heavily guarded, so I can't get a close look," she added. Luo Yuung replied, "Why don't you disguise yourself and have someone bring you in?" The woman grumbled, "If I disguise myself, nobody will recognize me. How will they bring me in then?" She seemed to lose heart. Changing the topic, she said, "Let me tell you, that Suchan is really annoying. I've run into him several times now. He's just a lazy, shameless rascal." Luo Yuung replied indifferently, "With your looks, isn't that normal?" The woman huffed a few times. See, you're not even being sincere when you talk to me. You don't put any thought into it. How could I possibly show my true face to the world? If I did, that rascal would fall in love with me on the spot. I've disguised myself. The me you see now, I look utterly plain. But my charm and grace are unparalleled." Luo Yuung impatiently interrupted. "Unparalleled charm and grace? Then why does he act so slick around you? Doesn't that seem logical?" She froze for a moment. After a while, Luo Yuung continued, "Do you know who will be representing Sishianshi tomorrow, in the duel against the Buddhist sect?" Without keeping her in suspense, Luo Yuung directly revealed the surprising answer. Suchan. The woman immediately turned around, her eyes wide open. "He's representing Sishianshi?" She became indignant, putting her hands on her hips. "What, is the mighty doffing out of people now? You're letting some brat represent Sishianshi in a duel?" After fuming for a moment, Luo Yuung closed her eyes to meditate again, and the place fell silent. Over at Haoqi Tower, Wayuan, unconcerned, said, "Just do your best in the duel." Suchan anxiously asked, "If I lose, the emperor will definitely punish me, right?" Wayuan chuckled, "Relax. Maybe tomorrow's duel won't be as tough as you think." Suchan's eyes lit up. "Weigong." Wayuan hinted, "Think about it. What's at stake in this duel? The Vajra Sutra and the Celestial Mechanism Plate." The Celestial Mechanism Plate is Jianzheng's personal artifact, unique in the world. If the duel is lost, you might face punishment, but he would lose a priceless treasure. If he weren't confident, Jianzheng wouldn't have borrowed you from the emperor. Suchan muttered to himself, "Am I that impressive? How come I didn't know that?" The next morning, the Sishianshi's large, empty square became the venue for the duel. The city guard surrounded the square, keeping idle spectators at a distance. Commoners and martial artists in the city hoping to watch could only view from the outskirts. In one of the pavilions, Linen chattered non-stop. Her lively peach blossom eyes scanned everywhere. "Where's that scoundrel? Why hasn't he come out? Can he really win against those monks?" The Grand Princess stopped him, saying, "Don't rush. It hasn't even started yet." Elsewhere, in another pavilion, Nangong Xianro asked, "This showdown is so important. Why hasn't His Majesty appeared?" Wayuan replied warmly, "His Majesty, Yu Jian, is observing from the 8 trigrams platform." Meanwhile, in another pavilion, Su Lingyue, who was only concerned for her brother, was quietly observing the beauties around her. "Are they all princesses?" she asked. Her aunt marveled. "I can't believe we're actually here, watching this high-profile showdown so closely. It's all thanks to that boy." Su Pingji, however, wasn't so amazed. Instead, he looked worried. On their way here, they had been stopped by an old woman who blocked their carriage, claiming to be Su Ningyan's friend, and requesting to join them in watching the duel. At the time, he didn't think much of it and agreed, but now, as he calmed down, everything seemed off. He tentatively asked, "Madam, do you really know Suchan?" The old woman, sounding impatient, replied, "I've already told you. We're old acquaintances, and he told me to find you, so you could take me in, and watch the duel together." Uncle Su was even more hesitant now, unsure of what to think. But could Ningyan really befriend someone of her age? It was too strange. In the imperial family's seating area, near Prime Minister Wang's position, Wang Zhun took a sip of wine, and noticed his daughter's gaze fixed on the area where the watchmen were seated. He asked with a smile, "Muir, what are you looking at?" Miss Wang withdrew her gaze, and replied with a faint smile, "It's my first time seeing the famous Wei Gong in person. He certainly carries himself impressively. Miss Wang then asked, Father, why did the West Censorate come to the capital this time? What's the reason behind this sudden proposal for a duel? It's truly puzzling. Wang Shoufu, slightly impatient, said, You're just a girl. Don't concern yourself with court affairs. Save all your clever tricks for your future husband. Miss Wang pursed her lips and said no more. When her father wasn't paying attention, she once again turned her gaze to the area where the watchmen were seated. She thought to herself, once this duel is over, I'll host a literary gathering at home. Elsewhere, the aunt asked Huaiqing, Isn't that princess the one who came to pay respects to Ningyan that day? Su Pingji replied with a simple The aunt then added, That princess in the red dress beside her is quite charming too, but her gaze seems rather flirtatious, not very proper-looking. Su Pingji was startled. He quickly whispered to her, Don't say such nonsense. Don't forget your manners here. If the princess hears you, our entire family might face execution. Although she was slow to catch on, the aunt quickly realized her mistake and kept quiet, not daring to speak further. The old aunt remarked indifferently, What's so unspeakable about that? The royal family doesn't have any decent people. Su Pingji nearly felt like dying. Looking at the people around him, he couldn't believe what a reckless bunch they were. At some point, the little boy toddled up to a eunuch in blue robes, staring at the food on the table in a daze. He asked eagerly, Sir, may I eat your food? Seeing this, Su Pingji's anxiety surged. Madame Yang, who had previously paid respects to Su Qian, recognized the boy. She said, Lord Wei, this is Su Ningyan's nephew. Hearing this, Jin Luowen looked at the boy with a gentler expression. He silently admired thinking he would grow into something great someday. Wayuan picked up a piece of candied fruit and handed it to him. The boy didn't seem afraid at all. He naturally took the candied fruit, put it in his mouth, and chewed noisily. In just a few bites, he swallowed it. Wayuan smiled and said, Candied fruit isn't eaten like that. The longer you keep it in your mouth, the longer the sweetness lasts. The little boy extended his hand, his eyes full of expectation. As he looked at the gentle and handsome gentleman before him, he replied, By the time I finish savoring it, the candied fruit will be all gone. If I just keep eating, I can keep tasting it. Uncle, I want more. Wayuan was amused by this cheeky child, and gave him a few more pieces with a smile. Su Pingji approached nervously, hunched over, and trying not to let his voice tremble. My daughter's a mischievous one. Please don't take offense. Nangong Xianro laughed and said, Lord Wei, please keep the child company. You may leave for now. Su Pingji glanced at the little boy, helplessly turned around, and left. At that moment, Su Erlang said, Father, why are you so worried? Big brother is a silver badge watchman, and is highly regarded by Lord Wei. Nothing will happen to him. Su Pingji sighed and thought, You're still too young. You don't understand how terrifying Wei. Those who experienced the battle at Shanghai Pass would never consider him kind and gentle. Time slowly passed. The food in front of Wayuan dwindled. He glanced at Su Lin Yin's little belly, placed a hand on his head, then spent a long time pressing various points on the child's body. Wayuan said with regret, What a shame. Yang Yin didn't ask why his foster father felt that way. Wayuan shook his head and said, This child has strong bones and vitality, a naturally solid foundation, but his muscles and bones lack flexibility, making him unsuitable for martial arts. Nan Gongxianro teased, No wonder he eats so much. This girl must be a glutton. The little boy, already disliking Nan Gongxianro, was angered by his mockery and spat all over him. Before anyone knew it, time crept towards 4 o'clock. At the center of the plaza, Master Dewey, who had been meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. His booming voice echoed through the venue. Witness, do you know the Sumeru Pearl? The next moment, derisive laughter echoed from the 9 heavens. Just a little trick. Everyone present, whether noble or commoner, was energized and excited. The Real show was starting. Emotions ran high. All eyes were on the stage. Master Dewey pulled a golden bowl from his sleeve and lightly tossed it into the air. With a thud, it hit the ground. The golden bowl was incredibly heavy, smashing the stone tiles with a loud crack, embedding itself deeply into the ground. A pure golden light rose from the bowl, unfolding in the sky, to reveal a towering mountain. Winding stone steps stretched deep into a lush forest. Gasps of astonishment filled the square. Even the most seasoned warriors couldn't keep their expressions neutral. Ordinary onlookers. Nan Gongxianro frowned and asked, Foster father, what is the Sumeru Pearl? Wayuan explained solemnly, It's a Buddhist allegory, a tiny pearl holding Mount Sumeru, the immense within the minuscule. It's said that in Buddha's hand is a mountain called Mount Sumeru. That is his temple. Wherever he goes, his temple follows. It's said a mountain is hidden within that golden bowl. Master Dewey instructed, Jingxi, enter the mountain and take position. This is the second trial. A handsome monk in orange robes stood up, and, under everyone's watchful gaze, stepped into the golden bowl. The next moment, the vast scene in the sky showed the young monk climbing the mountain. He steadily ascended the stairs, and finally sat cross-legged halfway up the mountain. Golden light poured down from above, converging on him. In an instant, a radiant golden glow enveloped his body. He seemed like a figure cast from pure gold. On the roof of a nearby tavern, the Green Mountain swordsman, Chuu Yuanjin, stood beside a tall, bald man. They stood shoulder to shoulder. Master Huan let out a deep sigh, a pillar of golden light. This virtual world enhanced Jiang Xi's Vajra physique. With Su Ningyan's current strength, it would be impossible to break through. Suchan secretly observed the situation in the square. Who would have thought the Sumeru Pearl really exists? He muttered. Yang Qianhuan, standing with his back to Suchan, replied, the Sumeru Pearl is also known as the Buddha's Palm Kingdom, but this one seems to be an ownerless world, hidden within the Golden Bowl. If it were a Buddha's kingdom with a ruler, victory or defeat would depend solely on its master's will. At least this way, it's fairer. A young girl handed Su Mingyan. Take these, Su Mingyan, and eat them on your way up the mountain. A group of white-clad mages encouraged him. Although we don't know why teacher Jianjing chose you, he must have had his reasons. You must return triumphant. Suchan took a deep breath. Let's see if I return victorious or not, he said. This is a great opportunity. I might as well put on a show in front of the entire capital. He threw a provocative glance at Yang Qianhua. Senior Yang, after today, you'll understand what it truly means to shine in the spotlight. With that, the doors of Guanxin Tower burst open, and someone emerged from within. A bright and handsome figure stepped out, carrying 9 jars. Head held high, he walked slowly forward. Just as he stepped off the stairs, a low chant echoed throughout the venue. At 15 or 20, I roamed the rivers and lakes with my sword, soaring like a great rock. I rose with the wind, reaching the heavens, traveling 3,000 li in battle, one sword defying 1,000,000 soldiers. If the world didn't have me, Su Mingyan, it would be shrouded in eternal darkness. Su Xinyan trembled with rage. This was the pinnacle poem of his life, created in his deepest despair. Big brother is truly shameless, he fumed. Frustrated, Su Xinyan glanced at the people around him, then at his elder brother's confident expression. Her gaze became dreamy. She stared at that figure, dazed, as if there was room for nothing else in her eyes. Huiqing's eyes sparkled, and for the first time, she felt this man was truly dazzling. Suddenly, Su Qian smashed the wine jar on the ground, laughing wildly as it shattered. Heroes of the world come from my generation, and once they enter the Jianghu, time flies. Grand ambitions are discussed with laughter, and life's drunkenness is unparalleled. Amid his brazen, bold laughter, he leapt into the golden bowl. In that moment, the entire audience fell silent. This grand entrance, and these exceptional verses, instantly elevated the scene's atmosphere, overshadowing the Buddhist monks in style. He restored the city's confidence. For the people of the capital, his daring, flamboyant approach felt novel and cutting-edge. At the same time, it left a profound impact on their hearts. Compared to the endlessly repetitive chants of, the world is empty without me, this performance was far more compelling. Chu Kaiwei pursed her lips, her bright apricot eyes following that figure, until he disappeared into the golden bowl. Even the beauty with large eyes couldn't shake off the impression of that moment. Meanwhile, Yang Qianhuan began to tremble, repeating to himself, so this is to the countless citizens of the capital, to the nobles of Defeng. His bold drinking, his grand poetry, and his courageous entry, it all created an overwhelming feeling. Just immersing themselves in the moment, made their minds tremble. This is what I've been seeking, they thought. This is what I want to feel. Yet he achieved it so effortlessly. No, this should have been my chance, Yang Qianhuan muttered. It was my chance. On the projected image floating in midair, at the foot of the towering mountain, a man wearing a night watchman's uniform appeared. Su Qian was summing up his near-victory performance from earlier. As he glanced around, he thought, I'd give myself 99 points for that move. 1 point off because it felt a bit awkward. But as long as I pretend it's not awkward, it's a perfect 100, flawless. At that moment, Master Dewey's compassionate voice rang out, resounding in the audience's ears. The goal of this contest is to ascend the mountain and reach the temple. If you still refuse to embrace Buddhism, then my sect shall accept it. The first trial is the 8 sufferings, the 8 great sufferings of life: birth, aging, sickness and death, separation from loved ones, encountering enemies, unfulfilled desires, and the burden of the 5 aggregates. Only those with steadfast minds can climb the mountain and face the challenges of Buddhist teachings. Su Qian pondered this for a moment, sensing no sign of life around him. It was utterly still, devoid of birds, beasts, or insects. Perplexed, he began to climb. As soon as his foot touched the steps, the ground beneath him turned to mud. He lost his footing and sank in. Su Qian instinctively struggled, but the more he fought, the faster he sank. In a moment, the mire swallowed him, leaving no trace of life. It was unclear how much time passed, perhaps an instant, or perhaps centuries. Su Qian faintly heard the cry of a newborn. That cry pierced the darkness. He saw white walls, white bedsheets, people in white uniforms. A nurse cradled a newborn baby, gently cleaning the infant. The child grew up, enjoying a joyful childhood, but then he was sent to school. Day after day, year after year, he studied. The heavy burdens of academics dominated his youth. Finally, he endured to. He graduated and entered the workforce, working tirelessly day and night, saving every penny for a down payment on a house, pushing himself to his limits. He finally managed to buy a house, but that 30-year mortgage. It was at that moment that the young man turned into a middle-aged man. Willingly or unwillingly, he took on his parents' burdens and became the very person he had despised in his youth. Whether it was the way he educated the next generation or the empty moralizing he spouted, he was no different from his former self's adversaries. Suchan grew numb, slipping into a solitary life. In the end, he lay on his deathbed, feeling a sense of relief that he could finally rest. One cycle ended, another began. Suchan felt an increasing urge to renounce the world. Is this the 8 sufferings of life? He wondered. Birth, aging, sickness, death, parting from loved ones, meeting enemies, unfulfilled desires, and the burden of the 5 aggregates. What's the meaning of such a life? My life shouldn't be like this. It's not supposed to be like this. With each cycle, a voice within Suchan kept saying, rest. A life like this has no meaning. Let it all go, and you'll be free. Meanwhile, in the square, Prime Minister Wang Zhengwen abruptly sat up, startled. The 8 sufferings array. This formation is used by Buddhist masters to temper the mind of practitioners. Those who cannot break free will have their minds shattered, becoming mere shells of themselves. But those who safely endure will demonstrate a Buddhist nature, and you can take the opportunity to convert them. He exclaimed, Master Dewey, what a cunning strategy to humiliate our great Feng in this manner. Are you not afraid of our million-strong army? Master Dewey calmly chanted a Buddhist prayer, his tone serene. Embracing Buddhism is, in itself, a blessing. On the 8 trigrams platform, a figure in a Taoist robe stood at the edge, overlooking the square. I've heard of this array, the figure said. Let's see the true power of the 8 sufferings array, Xianzhang said as he sipped his wine, explaining to Emperor Yuanjing. It's not just a question of power. This is a particularly grueling formation. A resolute individual can exit the 8 sufferings array easily, but the more life experience someone has, the harder it is to break free. In Buddhism, the 8 sufferings array tests a monk's mental strength. Some emerge stronger, their minds more complete, while others are consumed by suffering, their faith shattered. Emperor Yuanjing nodded in understanding. If even senior Buddhist monks struggle, then how could he succeed? His expression darkened instantly. If they lost this match, the previously equal alliance would shift in favor of the other side. In the pavilions around the square, the nobles turned pale. Even the noble women and young ladies, who had just been enjoying the spectacle, stopped their idle chatter, suddenly becoming serious. Biao Biao felt a wave of tension and opened her eyes wide, her gaze anxious. Inside the formation, Suchan felt the notion urging him to renounce the world, growing stronger, quickly eroding his will to survive. Suddenly, a flash of realization struck him. A steadfast idea rose up. Suchan realized that something was wrong with it. Felt like he was having a mental breakdown. At that moment, 2 conflicting thoughts clashed within him. He clutched his head in pain. Suchan's helpless fury forced him to think of something else, like Fu Xiangna's snow-white buttocks. Suddenly, a familiar figure filled Suchan's mind. For a moment, he regained clarity. But before he could rejoice, a voice entered his thoughts. It was the sound of the divine scripture box. This array can be broken in 3 ways. Just as Suchan opened his mouth to ask, the divine voice immediately interrupted him. Don't respond. Don't think about anything related to me. Just listen to what I'm saying. This array is crafted from the mental power of Buddhist practitioners. There are only 2 outcomes, either a clearer mind or a shattered one. For a non-Buddhist, surviving the 8 sufferings array means possessing a Buddhist nature. Suchan was struck with realization. No wonder. I had thoughts of renouncing the world. Is this an attempt to destroy my will? The divine thought spoke again. Besides the 2 paths mentioned, there's another way. Breaking the array with the strength of the masses. Suchan had no idea what the strength of the masses meant, but the divine thought offered no further explanation. Instinctively, he wanted to ask, but his survival instincts warned him against it. He immediately cut off all other thoughts. Yet this brief distraction made Suchan's once clear mind begin to cloud again. If he fell back into the cycle, he wouldn't be able to regain his sanity on his own. The only outcome would be a broken mind. Think quickly. The 8 sufferings of life require the strength of the masses to break. But where would I find that strength? This clearly isn't something a war. Suchan reviewed all his abilities. Suddenly, an unremarkable image surfaced in his mind. Yan Yi and Chuu Yuanjin teaching him how to channel emotions, using his own feelings as power, infusing them into the sword and unleashing it. Right now, His emotions were chaotic, but not enough to break the 8 sufferings array. A new idea arose. Why rely only on my emotions? Why not try borrowing others' emotions? Using others' emotions to power the technique? As soon as this thought surfaced, it became unstoppable. He closed his eyes. Using the technique Chuu Yuanjin had taught him to sense emotions, he began to detect external emotions. Emotions from the citizens of the capital watching outside. This sea of emotions was dominated by tension and anger. Suchan immersed himself in this ocean of emotions, absorbing their fury. Gradually, a boundless, intense rage surged up from deep within him. He unconsciously gripped his saber's hilt, as if ready to draw it. On Mount Qingyun, at the Cloud Path Academy, the statue of Yasheng began to tremble. A surge of righteousness energy shot skyward. Red wooden started to shake violently. Whatever was sealed inside seemed on the verge of breaking free. Suddenly, 3 rays of clear light flashed. 3 great scholars, including Li Mubai, arrived to investigate. What's going on? Why is the Yasheng statue moving again? Headmaster Zhao Shou calmly replied. Someone has harnessed the strength of the masses. He's awakening. The 3 scholars looked at Zhao Shou as if he were mad, and they couldn't help but wonder if they'd slept poorly the night before and were now hearing things. Zhao Shou ignored them and bowed respectfully. Please remain calm. The 3 scholars snapped out of their daze, also bowing and asking for calm. As their words fell, the red wooden box's trembling diminished, gradually subsiding. It was as if nothing had happened at all. Back at the square, someone hoarsely shouted, "He's going to draw his blade." Princess Huiqing froze, puzzled by Su Qian's actions. She wasn't the only one. Anyone who understood the 8 sufferings array couldn't make sense of Su Qian's intentions. The array wasn't an enemy. What good would drawing his blade do? Was he planning to cut himself? On a tall building above, Emperor Yuanjing said to Jianzhong, "This is the one you chose?" His actions are no better than a cornered animal. Disappointment flashed in Jianzhing's eyes. He sighed and said, "Your Majesty, don't you sense anything?" Within the scene on the scroll, Suchan continued to absorb the external emotional energy, but it still wasn't nearly enough. Outside the scroll, Biao Biao suddenly shouted, "Draw your blade. Draw it already." He cried out, and someone in the crowd echoed, "Why hasn't he drawn his blade yet? Draw it quickly." The cries of eager anticipation spread, and the repeated chants to draw the blade filled the air. More and more people joined in, the chants growing louder and louder. Eventually, the collective cry to draw the blade surged like waves. And then, the Suchan inside the scroll moved. His gaze turned razor-sharp. With a ringing sound, he drew his blade. In the tranquil Buddhist realm, a dazzling beam of light shot forth. It was like a sunrise breaking the darkness, like a blade cutting through chaos. This light wasn't Su Qian's own power. Instead, it was the combined strength of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of determined citizens. The power of united will. With a crack, the steel bearing the 8 sufferings inscription split open. Then, with a bang, it shattered. Rumbles echoed, and the entire Buddhist mountain quaked. It seemed as if it might collapse. This blade destroyed the 8 sufferings array. Since the array drew power from the Buddhist realm, this blade also cut through the power of that realm. Another sharp crack sounded, but this time, the sound didn't come from the mountain. It came from the outside world. Master Dewey looked down in shock and saw a crack forming on the golden bowl. Biao Biao stood up, screaming and pointing at the golden bowl, stamping her feet in agitation. The golden bowl has cracked. Her piercing scream echoed. The spectators and martial artists outside the square couldn't see the golden bowl, or couldn't see it clearly. They were suddenly filled with anxiety, desperate to confirm whether it had really cracked. Did it really crack? The golden bowl, has it really cracked? In the pavilions, the nobles peered closely. They saw a fissure on the surface of the golden bowl. Instinctively, they gasped. It's really cracked. The golden bowl really cracked. With this realization, a tidal wave of cheers erupted, each wave louder than the last. Those bald monks thought they were so tough. Huh? Did they really think our great Feng had no one to match them? Go back to the western regions already. The capital is no place for your showboating. At the top of Guanzin Tower, overlooking the jubilant crowd, Emperor Yuanjing smiled faintly. With a light hum, he said, "Not bad." In the pavilion, Prime Minister Wang Jinwen whispered, "Another formidable warrior joins Wayuan's ranks." In the watchman's area, Wayuan exhaled lightly, commenting indifferently, "The strike was standard, acceptable, but if it were you, could you have broken the array in one stroke?" The golden dragons lowered their heads in shame. In the dance area, Yang Yin couldn't help but Wayuan, still calm as ever, replied, "Ask him yourself once he's out." In the family seating area, the old lady gazed steadily at that figure. Not bad at all. On the restaurant rooftop, Hung Yuan, astonished by that incredible strike, murmured, "How on earth did Master Su pull that off?" Chuu Yuanjin, stunned, muttered to himself as if he'd gone mad. "This is impossible. This can't be." Hung Yuan was likewise in disbelief. The single strike Su had just delivered left an overwhelming impact. At that moment, Master Dewey's voice rang out, each word clear and cutting. The 8 sufferings array is only the first trial. The second is called the diamond array. Poor monk's turn now. This silver gong, after unleashing that one strike, is now weakened. Does he have the strength for a second trial? The spectators immediately turned their gaze to the scroll. Suchan sat on the stone steps, gasping for breath, his face pale. Even those unfamiliar with cultivation could tell that Suchan was in terrible shape. This made them realize they had celebrated too early. This was only the first trial. Located at the base of the mountain, still far from the summit, Suchan's condition was like a bucket of cold water, pouring over everyone's excitement. The once high spirits began to recede, and the cheers gradually faded away. At this moment, whether it was the citizens of the capital, traveling martial artists, or the high-ranking officials at court, all remembered once more the fear instilled by Jingxi's indestructible Vajra body. This was the same young monk who had been stationed on the hero's platform in the southern city, known as the indomitable Vajra of Buddhism. Over 5 days, many brave heroes challenged him, yet none could break his spirit. Miss Wang turned to the Prime Minister. Father, what do you think? The Prime Minister replied coolly, observe more, speak less. He had already begun to ponder who should replace Suchan if he couldn't continue. But given his earlier misstep, the Prime Minister wouldn't rush to judgment again. As a seasoned official, he couldn't afford to stumble twice in the same place. Miss Wang smiled faintly. I have an idea. She looked up at Master Dewey and said, Master, the 8 sufferings array is rooted in the mental strength of Buddhist monks, unrelated to martial prowess. Even a high-ranking martial artist would find it difficult to break. But rather than sending in a high-ranking warrior, why not consider using someone else? Miss Wang smiled again. Earlier, Master Dewey mentioned that Great Feng has 3 attempts. Am I correct? The monk in the arena nodded, not denying her statement. Miss Wang's smile faded. She spoke gravely. Now that the 8 sufferings array is broken, even if Suchan fails to overcome the diamond array, the court can send a high-ranking warrior to break through. Could the inner Vajra guardians really stop him? Master Dewey was momentarily stunned. Then he frowned, saying nothing. The crowd's eyes lit up, as if they had gained a sudden insight. Their thoughts churned. So, there's another way to turn the tables. If we're talking warriors, there's always our northern warden, is undoubtedly the greatest figure in Great Feng. If he were here, wouldn't he just break that Buddhist golden body in one strike? In the distance, the serene and elegant Princess Chong finally revealed a faint, sweet smile, because she saw a glimmer of hope for Great Feng's victory. Miss Wang had stolen the spotlight, naturally catching the attention of her proud little brother. Suddenly, he was captivated by her beautiful face. Miss Wang, as if sensing his gaze, glanced back at the watchman's area, her eyes meeting Suchan's. For some reason, he didn't feel repelled. His face flushed. He couldn't explain what he was feeling, but without showing any reaction, he awkwardly looked away. As he shyly averted his gaze, something else came to mind. If he wasn't mistaken, she was the Prime Minister Wang's daughter. At this thought, Suchan's expression grew disdainful. He didn't have a high opinion of the Wang family. After all, the Wang faction opposed the Wei faction, and they had repeatedly targeted his brother. He hadn't forgotten any of it. At this moment, the old lady spoke up, commenting, the Northern Warden, acclaimed as the most talented martial artist in Great Feng in 200 years. If he were here in the capital, these bald monks wouldn't dare act so arrogantly. Suchan glanced at her in surprise. This woman knew a lot. Her knowledge wasn't something an ordinary housewife would have. Who was she? Where did his brother meet such a married woman? Suddenly, everyone's eyes returned to the Buddhist mountain. Suchan had rested for a moment and was preparing to continue upward. The audience finally realized he had no intention of giving up. Suchan encountered no further obstacles along the way and soon stood before Jingxi. Jingxi's entire body gleamed like molten gold, emanating faint golden light. Suchan paused at the lower steps. May I rest here for a moment? He asked. Jingxi, the young monk, sat cross-legged, calmly responding, feel free to rest, benefactor. Suchan didn't wait for him to finish, sitting down on his own. At the same time, he casually asked, Master, have you been a monk since childhood? Jingxi nodded in confirmation. Suchan continued, do you practice meditation or martial arts? Jingxi replied, both meditation and martial arts. Suchan thought to himself, so there's such a thing as dual cultivation? This young monk's talent is quite astonishing. With that thought, he continued, I've heard that Buddhism emphasizes entering the household before renouncing it. Since you became a monk as a child, you never had a household to begin with. What exactly did you renounce? Jingxi recognized that Suchan was attempting to debate Buddhist teachings with him. Unflinching, he responded. To renounce the household means to sever all ties with worldly concerns and to embrace the monastic life. There's no need for wordplay, benefactor. From a young age, this humble monk practiced Buddhism, journeying through the western regions, experiencing human suffering, and all 8 hardships of life. Suchan mentally retorted, Asterisk, what nonsense about experiencing all 8 hardships of life. You've never dealt with a mortgage, car loans, or exorbitant wedding expenses. How dare you talk about knowing all the hardships of life in front of me? Asterisk. Outside the painting, Biao Biao asked curiously, why is that scoundrel chatting with the monk? Princess Chung explained, that strike just now exhausted all his strength. Suchan is trying to debate Buddhist scripture with the monk, hoping to best him with words. Within the painting, Suchan stood up slowly, continuing, Master, what is your view on women? Jingxi briefly replied, like a sharp knife, cutting to the bone. Suchan smiled and said, that statement lacks experience. Master, you've never had contact with women, so how can you claim that women aren't the most wonderful thing in the world? Jingxi remained unmoved. Indeed, I have not experienced women, yet women are said to be as fierce as tigers. This has been passed down from generation to generation among monks. Please, benefactor, do not twist my words. Suchan fixed his gaze on him. Well then, master, there are a few things I'd like to ask. Have you ever supported your parents? Have you ever worked tirelessly to manage a household? Have you ever shouldered a hoe and tilled the fields? Jingxi opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Suchan continued, Buddhism doesn't produce anything. It spends its days reciting scriptures and chanting sutras, relying on worshippers for sustenance. What scripture are you reciting? What Buddha are you worshipping? You merely walked through the mortal world as a bystander, claiming to understand the suffering of humanity, the 8 sufferings of life. Of all the sufferings, Jingxi only experienced birth. The rest, none at all. You're just a fake monk. Jingxi was shocked, clearly shaken by these words. He pondered for a long while, before gritting his teeth and replying, Buddha observes all things in the world, and naturally understands its suffering. Suchan nodded, and with a sound like a sharp intake of breath, he drew his black gold long blade. He then slashed it directly across his palm, leaving a bleeding wound. Holding out the wound for Jingxi to see, he asked, Master, does Jingxi clasped his hands together, closed his eyes and said calmly, a blade cut deep, how could it not hurt? Suchan pressed on, then tell me, how much does it hurt? Jingxi's eyes widened in alarm. How much? He fell silent. Protected by his Vajra body, the blade couldn't harm him. He truly didn't have an answer. Suchan sneered, Master, don't you see? This is exactly what I'm saying. You only know that I hurt. You don't know how much I hurt. You may understand life's sufferings, but you can never truly know how bitter they are. If you cannot fathom the people's suffering, how can you claim to save all beings? Isn't that a joke? Jingxi shut his eyes tightly, clasping his hands in prayer, repeatedly chanting Buddha's name, to suppress the turmoil in his heart. Suchan continued, let me tell you a story. One year, the people of the great Han Empire had no rice to eat, and countless people starved to death. A certain nobleman from a wealthy family, upon hearing of this, was astonished and said something. Master, do you know what he said? Jingxi asked. What did he say? Suchan stared at the young monk, smiling mockingly, and enunciated every word. Why don't they eat meat? Jingxi appeared thunderstruck, his pupils widening, his face stiff and vacant. The crowd outside cheered loudly, shouting, well said. That little monk is speechless. In that moment, the morale of the capital soared. Even the proud young brother was dumbfounded, seeing the monk's confidence crumble under his elder brother's arguments. If Diamond Indestructible is cancelled, then the Western Buddhist sect is doomed. At this moment, Suchan tossed the black gold long blade in front of Jingxi, saying firmly, Master, if you believe I'm wrong, if you truly think you can experience the suffering of the people, why not give it a try? Relinquish your Diamond Indestructible, cut your arm with a blade, and you'll understand what I mean. You'll understand the true meaning of Buddha's teachings. Instead of saying, why don't they eat meat? Jingxi repeatedly shook his head, as if convincing himself not to try. No. If I relinquish Diamond Indestructible, I'll lose. Suchan, gentle and persuasive, said, monks renounce the world and see all things as empty. Yet Master clings so strongly to victory and defeat. You've already lost the true path, losing one duel, but seeing a broader horizon. Gaining the true understanding of Buddha's teachings. Which is more significant? You decide, Master. Jingxi's expression grew increasingly complex, showing signs of inner conflict and struggle. He slowly extended his hand, grasping the black gold long blade. A monk sees all things as empty, he muttered. Why don't they eat meat? Why don't they eat meat? A smirk appeared on Suchan's lips, as if everything was under his control. It was at this moment, a voice echoed in the sky. It reached everyone's ears. Jingxi, you've become attached. The handsome young monk was jolted awake. His hand recoiled as if shocked. The black and gold long blade fell to the ground with a clatter. Gradually clarity returned to Jingxi's eyes. Wang Shoufu, enraged beyond measure, slammed his cup down and stood up. Outrageous! A rogue arhat. Can't the Buddhist sect afford? The officials behind him also erupted, shouting, shameless bald monk. What a farce. If you can't handle losing, don't play. How disgraceful for the Buddhist sect to be so. The monk Jinshin calmly replied, if political forces can secretly assist, why can't my Buddhist sect do the same? Wang Shofu nearly exploded with anger. Nonsense. You claim that political forces are aiding in secret. Do you have any proof? Despite the cacophony of accusations, Dewey the master remained unfazed. Glancing at Jinshin, he remarked, you too have become attached. Jinshin bowed his head, joined his hands together, and recited a Buddhist mantra. This disciple admits his fault. Jingxi, steeling himself, brazenly declared, if you wish to pass the second challenge, you must first shatter my Vajra. Suchan felt a wave of irritation. This contest, which blended both mental and physical combat, should have been based on skill alone. Such blatant outside interference was excessive. He chose to remain silent, gathering his focus. He drew in his energy and steadied his mind. After a quarter of an hour, Suchan retrieved his black and gold long blade. Sheathing the weapon, he gripped the handle firmly and declared, I will strike but once. With this single strike, life and death will be decided. Jingxi did not respond. His expression suggested he was too ashamed to reply. Suchan let all his emotions settle. The energy within his body began to collapse inward. His dantian was like a black hole. This was the essential power-gathering process of the heaven and earth one slash. He closed his eyes. His mental energy collapsed inward, linking with a massive source of blood energy within his body. It was the essence blood from the sacred scroll box. During the return journey from Yunzhou, Suchan absorbed this drop of essence blood. With the undying essence of the immortal dancer, he revived. Yet part of that power had remained dormant within him. When Suchan saw that Dewey Arhat had brought Jingxi into the formation, he immediately realized that he couldn't avoid confronting. And with the Vajra's invincibility enhanced by the Buddhist sect's secret techniques, it was utterly impossible for Suchan to overcome it by sheer force. At the time, he concealed himself aboard a private heavenly ship, communicating with the sacred scroll box. He received its suggestion, mobilized the essence blood within, releasing this dormant, indigestible power. This force would not reveal the presence of the sacred scroll box. To allow Suchan to absorb the undying essence in the blood, the sacred scroll box had long erased its properties. Now, in essence, it was merely a martial practitioner, condensing its pure essence. The dormant power within him was revived. It coursed through Suchan's limbs and bones, transforming into pure potential. Suddenly, someone in the audience exclaimed, what's going on? Am I seeing things? Why does it feel like the world is trembling? Among the night watchers, Wayuan slowly rose, calmly quoting, a great rock rises with the wind, soaring 90,000 miles high. Golden Lotus watched his figure, a chill creeping into his heart. Was this also part of your plan? Wayuan's sword left its sheath, the sound of its unsheathing resonating like thunder across the heavens. No path in the world was as resolute. It seemed ready to sever all things, willing to be shattered like jade. Rather than stay intact as tile, his clothes were suddenly torn apart by the shockwave. The golden light around him grew even more intense. At the exact moment the blade's light made contact, a genuine, resounding clang rang out, as if heaven and earth were being severed. Liao Biao abruptly stood up, his eyes filled with worry. Even Her Highness, the eldest princess, had her mouth agape, repeatedly asking herself, did it hold? Could it really have withstood it? Suchan's colleagues and superiors stood frozen. They already knew Suchan was strong, but they had no idea he was this strong. Not long ago, he had already made a powerful strike, yet here he was again. Standing tall and proud in the field, Suchan clearly saw the golden layers upon layers of golden light, scattered like blown-away leaves. The undefeated Vajra who had stood outside the southern city for half a cycle, the same Vajra who had been a thorn in the side of the city's citizens for 5 days, was finally defeated. Jingxi's face turned deathly pale. Unable to maintain his meditative posture any longer, he collapsed to the ground. The blade wound on his chest and abdomen was bone deep. His internal organs were already damaged. Suchan calmly remarked. At that moment, the entire capital erupted into celebration. People screamed. They cheered. Some even wept with joy, finally releasing the pent-up frustration of many days. On top of the stargazing tower, the old emperor smiled from the bottom of his heart. I knew you had it under control. Well done, Suchan. Well done. The court's efforts to train you were not in vain. At this moment, Wang Shofu had completely lost his usual composure. He muttered to himself, could it be that heroes have always emerged from the young? Meanwhile, Liao Biao, at this instant, heard the sound of his own racing heartbeat, something he hadn't felt this intensely in over 20 years. Princess Huiqing, not far from him, had a similarly peculiar reaction. Even Lingyu, who always worried for her brother, was momentarily at a loss as she watched her older brother bask in glory. Shun Shang, utterly shocked, turned to the family head and exclaimed, Master, what happens after this duel? Our doorsteps will be worn down by matchmakers. But Su Pingji did not respond. Instead, he clenched his fists tightly, his old tears flowing freely. The children have all grown up. If his elder brother were still alive, he would surely feel comforted. Su New Year quietly made up his mind. My big brother is growing stronger and stronger. He is brave in the martial path. I can't fall too far behind. The old lady thought to herself, Suchan truly exceeded my expectations. Even Prince Huai in his youth did not shine this brightly. Suchan sheathed his blade and continued climbing. He wandered through mist-shrouded forests. After a quarter of an hour's walk, the view suddenly opened up. Before him stood a giant Bodhi tree, beneath which sat an elderly monk. Suchan smiled and asked, Master, what will we compete in this time? The old monk recited a Buddhist mantra and said softly, Your mind is not at peace. Suchan muttered inwardly, Here we go again with the old monk. He retorted, Why seek peace? The old monk replied, A calm mind leads to the way. The way leads to enlightenment. With enlightenment, one can transcend suffering. Suchan asked, Why transcend suffering? The old monk countered, Why not transcend suffering? Suchan argued, Why should one transcend? The old monk calmly responded, Why shouldn't one transcend? The audience was utterly baffled. What are they even talking about? I don't get these Zen riddles. Suchan persisted, Master, let's speak plainly. How shall we compete? Don't give me all this abstract talk. The old monk pressed his palms together, unmoved. He did not appear offended by Suchan's words. You are too attached, he said. Why must there be a contest? Suchan frowned. It was clearly your Buddhist sect that proposed. Master, such unreasonable behavior. Aren't you afraid of disgracing the Buddhist sect? The elderly monk's expression remained serene and calm. He spoke slowly. Earlier, you mentioned at the mountainside that for one who has renounced the world, all is void. If all is void, what is face or reputation? Suchan felt this was becoming more complicated. Dealing with someone who didn't speak plainly was worse than arguing with a contrarian. Taking a deep breath, he asked, Master, how do you plan to test me? The old monk chuckled. Life itself is practice. Entering this Buddhist secret realm is also a form of practice. Suchan folded his hands and recited a Buddhist mantra. Please, Master, guide me on how to practice. The old monk turned his head and said lightly, Practice is a personal endeavor. Why ask me? Suchan turned green with frustration. I've had it with this obnoxious monk. You're not speaking plainly? Fine. I'm not wasting my time here anymore. A sudden wave of irritation flared in Suchan's heart. He brushed past the old monk and kept climbing. But just as he moved forward, a barrier appeared, blocking his way. Suchan almost jumped in anger. If not for the fact that the entire capital was watching, he would have cursed out loud. Since he couldn't proceed, Suchan turned back with a call. I have an idea. I wonder if the master who believes all is void can lend me his blade? The monk, still calm, said, Amitabha, let us see. I am merely a lingering thought from the Bodhisattva Wanin before attaining enlightenment. As his words faded, Suchan's heart felt as if it had been struck hard by a hammer, the sound of it echoing in his ears. The words Bodhisattva Wanin reverberated in his mind, a lingering thought from a first-grade Bodhisattva before enlightenment. Surely it's at least third grade? Suchan lunged forward and knelt before the old monk, grinning ingratiatingly. Master, what were we just talking about? The monk calmly replied. The benefactor requested that I take a strike. Suchan put on a slightly annoyed tone and remarked, Does the Buddhist sect only know violence? Does spreading compassion rely solely on fighting and killing? Master, can we just discuss this over a tale of silver? Outside the arena, Nangong Shinro snorted coldly. He's quick to adapt. If this stage is solved with brute force, the backlash will be inevitable. Meanwhile, in the Huang family's pavilion, a young girl in a fiery red palace dress called out, Bald monks, what exactly is this stage about? Dewey Arhat was reluctant to reply, but seeing that it was a princess asking, he politely explained, The third stage has no set challenge. These words startled the officials and nobles present. The old lady among them asked, No challenge? Does that mean no matter how Suchan responds, the Buddhist sect can simply ignore him or reject his efforts, keeping him trapped in the secret realm until he admits defeat? The question struck a chord. Liao Liao snorted. Isn't that just cheating? If you're going to have a contest, set the terms. Whether it's a battle of words or martial skills, just say so. What's the meaning of this ambiguity? Dewey Master folded his hands and recited a Buddhist mantra. Then he calmly said, The absence of a set challenge is itself the topic. Life is ever-changing, and at every turn, challenges await all of you. At that moment, an angry voice rang out, Shameless! A handsome scholar stepped down gracefully from the platform and entered the square. Glaring at the monks, he sneered, No wonder all of you monks are bald. You've hidden your hair inside your hearts. Outwardly serene, inwardly full of reluctance. Such hypocrisy. Jinshin monk frowned and said, This benefactor. Before he could finish, Erlang cut him off. Who's your benefactor? I wouldn't even give you a single coin. Calling everyone a benefactor is shameful. Jinshin monk was left speechless, struggling to come up with a response. Erlang pressed on. What's a grandmaster of Buddhist teachings? Are you also a remnant thought from before the Buddha renounced the world? Jinshin was furious. Benefactor, as a scholar, you only know how to hurl insults. Is this what great things scholars are like? New Year sneered coldly. I never insult anyone, because what I scorn are not people. Oh? Feeling dissatisfied? You monks traveled far to propose a contest, and Great Feng, a land of propriety, sent just one silver-robed envoy to meet you. That was already giving you face. And yet, your shamelessness is thicker than the capital's city walls. No wonder we won the Battle of Shanhai Pass 20 years ago. It must have been thanks to you all. For even the combined northern and southern Manchu forces couldn't breach the defenses of your thick faces in 10 years. Jinshin monk abrupt, his glare sharp and his demeanor imposing. Outrageous. New Year, unfazed, smirked. Oh, what's wrong? Lost your composure? A grandmaster who claims to be free of attachments. What are you so riled up about? Pa. Jinshin monk's expression froze. Dewey master calmly stated, Jinshin, your mind is disturbed. Jinshin monk turned pale, clasped his hands and said trembling, this disciple is clouded by attachments. New Year let out a satisfied chuckle. Feeling immensely gratified, he turned and walked away. All eyes were on New Year. Some with surprise, others with admiration. Though his words were harsh, he had silenced the Buddhist monks, leaving them speechless. And that was immensely satisfying. Moreover, as representatives of their status, those monks would never have dared say such words in a public setting. New Year had effectively become the voice of the emerging gentry. Miss Wang secretly praised his cleverness. She realized that Su's insults were merely a facade. His true goal was to unsettle the monks' inner composure, to provoke them into anger and then deliver a crushing blow. It both vented his frustration and dealt a heavy blow to the monks. Under the Bodhi tree, Suchan and the old monk continued their philosophical exchange. He suddenly asked, Master, you said you are a remnant thought, manifested by the Bodhisattva Huan. What is this thought? The old monk replied, it represents the supreme state of the Buddha. Suchan asked in return, what is the supreme state of the Buddha? The old monk fell silent for a long time and then said, I do not know, but Huan believed it was the Buddha. Thus, he manifested me, and from that moment onward, my heart was like crystal, free from any impurities. Hearing this, Suchan fell silent. He realized he knew nothing of this world's concept of Buddha. Instead, he had a limited understanding of the Buddhism from his past life. However, there were significant differences between the Buddhism of his past life and that of this world. One of the most notable differences was that this world's Buddhist sect had no Buddha Tathagata. There was only one Buddha. Suchan frowned and asked, why is the supreme state of Buddha just Buddha? Aren't other Buddhas also Buddhas? The old monk explained, in the Buddhist sect, there are arhats and bodhisattvas. Only the Buddha holds the supreme fruit status. Thus, the Buddha is the ultimate state of Buddhahood, a unique existence. There is only one Buddha. Suchan said, arhats and bodhisattvas might not necessarily be unable to reach higher states. The old monk shook his head. You are not of the Buddhist sect. It is understandable that you do not grasp the concept of fruit status. Suchan, adopting a disciple-like attitude, folded his hands and humbly said, please, master, enlighten me. The old monk, still serene, explained, do you know why bodhisattvas are called bodhisattvas and arhats are called arhats? In the Buddhist sect, the fourth grade is the ascetic monk. Those in this realm great vows are closely tied to fruit status. Those who make great vows attain the bodhisattva fruit status. Those who make smaller vows attain the arhat fruit status. And the arhat status is divided into 3 levels: stream enterer, once returner, and arahant. Once established, it cannot be changed. It cannot be advanced. Suchan froze. For a long time, he said nothing. This explanation carried far too much information. So, bodhisattvas and arhats were essentially unrelated. Both were ascetic monks of the 4th grade who had advanced. Wait. After the 4th grade came the 2nd or 1st grade. Then what about the 3rd grade Vajra realm? Did this mean that the 3rd grade Vajra realm belonged to another Buddhist system? A flash of insight struck Suchan. 8th grade warrior monks, 3rd grade Vajra. No wonder Grandmaster Wayuan was so formidable, yet remained an 8th grade warrior monk. His next grade would be the 3rd grade Vajra realm, and that explained why the 2nd grade was arhat. The 1st grade was bodhisattva, and the Buddha transcended all grades. The reason for this structure was that once a fruit status was set, it could not be changed. So this world's Buddhist sect wasn't like the one from his past life, where there were numerous Buddhas and bodhisattvas. In this world's Buddhism, there was only one Buddha, the Buddha. The world recognized only one Buddha. Wait, wasn't this like Hinayana Buddhism? Suchan's lips curled into a faint smile, which soon widened from a grin to and then to wild laughter. He laughed so hard he doubled over. His laughter unchecked and unrestrained. People outside the arena looked up in confusion, watching Suchan, laughing wildly beneath the Bodhi tree. What was he laughing about? Had he gone mad? From a distance, Jinzheng frowned. He glanced at Jianzheng, only to find that Jianzheng had stopped drinking. His expression had grown serious as he watched Suchan under the Bodhi tree. The old monk voiced everyone's curiosity. Benefactor, what are you laughing at? Suchan's face turned haughty, and he arrogantly replied, I'm laughing at the narrow-mindedness of Buddhism. I'm laughing at the hypocrisy of the Buddha. I thought Buddhist teachings were profound, and that arhats and bodhisattvas were all compassionate beings. But now I see, they turn out to be nothing but selfish people. The old monk raised an eyebrow, momentarily shaken. He couldn't believe that Suchan would say such a thing. Suchan declared loudly, Master, if you don't know the supreme state of Buddhism, then let me tell you. It's because you follow a Hinayana path of Buddhism. Outside, the other monks, though angry, couldn't help but feel curious. It was an unfamiliar term they had never heard before. If there was a Hinayana Buddhism, did that mean there was also a Mahayana Buddhism? But what could a warrior possibly know about Buddhism? Why was he making arbitrary distinctions between Hinayana and Mahayana? Suchan asked, Master, where do you come from? The old monk replied, From the western regions. Suchan continued, Why do Buddhist monks practice? The old monk recited to achieve fruit status, to transcend the sea of suffering. Suchan responded, Then that is Hinayana Buddhism, practicing solely for oneself, benefiting oneself, but not others. The old monk was stunned. After a long moment of reflection, he asked, So you say this is Hinayana Buddhism? Then what is Mahayana Buddhism? Suchan laughed heartily. You are not just a great monk of the western regions. You are a great monk of the 9 provinces, a great monk of the world. When a monk practices, it should not merely be to free themselves from suffering. They should aim to free all beings from suffering. Why did Confucians suppress Buddhism 400 years ago? It wasn't to destroy the Buddha. It was to suppress the Buddhist sect, the Hinayana Buddhism that confined itself to one faction. Only Mahayana Buddhism can truly save all beings. So, what is Mahayana Buddhism? The old monk's breathing grew labored. His face no longer bore the look of detachment, nor was it as calm as before. His voice betrayed a hint of excitement. What is Mahayana Buddhism? Suchan pointed skyward and asked, Why is there only one Buddha? All the monks outside, their gazes fixed firmly on Suchan, even the old monk among them, were holding their breath sharply. Suchan took a deep breath and slowly declared, All sentient beings are Buddhas. Throughout the past, present, and future, there are countless Buddhas. This is Mahayana Buddhism. His words struck like a thunderclap. All sentient beings are Buddhas. The monks were dumbstruck, as if turned to stone. So, I've been practicing Hinayana Buddhism. It turns out I've been following Hinayana Buddhism all along. So all sentient beings can become Buddhas. Suddenly, one monk snapped. In a frenzy, he lunged forward.